The story opens with a young boy announcing that he is a wizard while he and a girl participate in play fighting. She acts as a monster that eats wizards, so he raises his wooden branch and hits her on the head. She yells out and asks why he actually hit her, while he explains that monsters are meant to lose against wizards. An elderly man observes the children and remarks on how lively they are this morning. The boy recognizes the man as Rabbus. He then inquires about what is needed to become a wizard, while Rabbus clarifies that one cannot simply become one by wishing for it. He describes wizards as the peak of humanity who rule from the highest social ranks, adding that they are nobles and knights who inherited the ability to use magic from their ancestors. He informs the children that they unfortunately cannot become wizards, while a nearby villager asks the elder how he could say such a thing before asking if current rumors are true. Rabbus asks for clarification on what he is referring to, and the man mentions hearing news that a monster has appeared. He confirms that the report is indeed true. He notes that a man named Rop came across it at the entrance last night and describes a creature covered in pitch-black shadows that was a leopard the size of a house. He reassures the man not to worry because the village chief went to the city to request a wizard and believes he will bring one back to subjugate the beast. The girl's mother expresses her relief at this news. She asks her daughter if she heard that and warns her not to go into the forest for now. Rabbus cautions everyone to be careful since killing a monster is almost impossible without a wizard. The villager asks if all the residents have been informed, and when he says they have, he asks if a certain person has been told as well. Rabbus asks who he is talking about. The man explains that he is referring to the shepherd on Hisarul Hill. High up on the hill, we see a shepherd named Turan. He rests while looking up at the sky and thinks about how dull his life has become. He reflects on viewing the same scenery and the same day over and over again. He wonders if he will eventually forget how to speak. Rabbus arrives and calls him a pathetic brat. He remarks that the sun hasn't even set yet and he is already slacking off, while Turan tells him to move because he is blocking the sunlight. Rabbus yells that he lacks manners and asks if he is still holding on to a grudge from a past incident. Turan asks if he is talking about the time his mother died, and the old man tried to quietly turn the sheep into shared property. Rabbus simply clears his throat in response. Turan says that if that is what he means, then yes, declaring that he is not generous enough to share his mother's inheritance and stating they are not close enough for pleasantries before telling him to leave. Rabbus shouts in frustration at the young man. Turan glares back and asks what he wants. He informs him that a monster has appeared, causing the shepherd to ask about it. Rabbus explains that it is a leopard the size of a house that Rop found. Turan admits that the situation is a serious problem, while Rabbus notices that he is not even scared despite being the most likely target. He tells him to be careful since the village chief went to request a wizard. He claims he only came because he was worried about him, but Turan thinks the old man is not being very honest. He suggests the man was actually worried about the sheep and not him, as Rabbus prepares to shout again. Turan tells him to get lost if he is done talking because his breath smells like rot. The old man walks away into the distance. Turan reflects on how monsters are beasts that wield mysterious power and magic. He considers that if humans have wizards, then beasts have monsters. He is pleased that a wizard is coming because it means he can finally see one in person. However, he wonders if a wizard summoned by a rural village chief will even be anything special. Still, he wants to see just how strong they truly are. Suddenly, his nose catches a whiff of something. Turan realizes the smell is coming from blood. He heads down into the forest and follows the scent. He says he is sure the source is in this direction. He focuses harder on the scent and walks in that direction, but suddenly he stops. He looks down and sees Rabbus torn into literal pieces on the ground. He thinks about how the man told him to be careful yet went in first anyway, reflecting that he did not expect the blood smell to belong to Rabbus. He notes that this is not a wound an ordinary wild animal could make. He is sure that it has to be the monster. He hears something approaching as a massive paw lands on the ground and a large monster appears. Turan looks back while the monster creeps closer and he stares directly at it, realizing that the reports were true and a monster really exists. Back in the village, the boy playing wizard asks his father how strong a monster is, and if it is true that adults cannot beat it. His father says they are insanely powerful, explaining that if ordinary adults rush it, they won't even be able to collect their bones. The child asks what will happen to their village if they cannot beat it. He tells the boy not to worry because the village chief will bring a wizard to subjugate the beast. The boy asks if the wizard will lose to the monster. His father says that of course they won't lose, describing them as great beings born with the power of magic who will kill the monster with a single word. As the beast lunges at Turan, he looks at it and commands it to die. The command causes the monster to backpedal and create distance. It snarls at him as he releases an aura. He wonders if his power is not working. The monster leaps again and he tells it to stop. The creature pulls back once again. He reflects that he knew killing it would not work but wonders why it cannot even be stopped. The monster attacks but Turan dodges the strike. The beast turns and sees him off to the side. Turan decides on a plan and reaches into his coat. He pulls out a rock and says that a shepherd should do what a shepherd does. The beast prepares another strike. He tells the stone to harden and places it in his sling, while his eyes glow gold as he tells the stone to become faster and swings the sling. He takes a step forward and tells the stone to pierce through. The stone flies with a speed that seems to break the sound barrier. The rock flies toward the beast at full speed, and it is so fast that the monster can only dodge it slightly. The stone grazes the beast while cutting its ear and flying into the air. The beast dashes towards him with its mouth open and ready for a final attack. Turan says that it is actually aiming for the head. The rock suddenly stops in the air. It twirls and smashes into the back of the monster's skull, blowing it off. He stands over the corpse and reflects that this is his first time using the move on a monster. He wonders if he should toss the carcass into some valley. He grumbles that those village bastards really put him to work. Turan is a wizard. He realized his special abilities 8 years ago while he was only 10, at which time the young boy made logs fly through the air. Excitedly telling his mother to watch the logs flying, the child called out to her and announced his ability to create fire and wind. But his mother screamed for him to stop, and he reflects that it was the first and last time she ever got angry. Asking what was wrong, he was told to come and have a chat with her. She then asked if he wanted to live with her for a long time. Turan answered that he did. She made him promise to never use this power from now on, insisting that he must never use it in front of other people. She asked if he remembered the story about the noble and the knight. Confirming his memory, he listened as she explained that magic users are called wizards regardless of their status. She noted that nobles and knights are fundamentally different. Nobles are descendants of divine beings called the Freyans who came to save humanity, while knights are descendants of nobles mixed with humans. The boy confirmed his understanding. She clarified that this is why they differentiate between ranks even among wizards. Explaining that he inherited power from his knight father, she warned of evil nobles who treat knights like slaves. She told him to remember that nobody can know he is a wizard. 8 years have passed since that day. Turan has continued to uphold that promise to his mother. He declares that the promise will not be broken. He has no desire to reveal himself as a wizard or to descend the mountain. Suddenly, someone pounds on his door and yells for him to come out. Turan opens the door and goes out to meet them. He yawns and asks if they are claiming that he killed Rabbis. The villagers grab him by the collar and shout that he is shameless. They accuse him of hurting Rabbis and throwing him out to be eaten by monsters. He silently considers why they want to frame him. He notes that the oldest man in the village died alone instead of the young men who were too scared to fight. He realizes they think this is the best way to shift the blame from themselves to him. A villager tries to punch him, but Turan dodges and thinks that magic is convenient. Headbutting the man, he reflects that a strong wish happens at the cost of mana, and as another villager charges, he whispers for him to fall over. As the man falls to the ground, Turan notes that he does not need to start a fire. He just uses his power a little bit so that it is not obvious, just enough so that they do not die. He declares that he will dominate them. The fight continues as everyone charges at him, but after some time, all of the men are defeated and lying on the ground. For 8 years, Turan has hidden the fact that he is a wizard. He tells the men they should have used that strength for the funeral of Rabbis. Asking the nearby women if they are here to fight too, they reply that they only came to see him. He tells them to take those idiots down with them. Inside his home, he reflects that it is going to be chaos in the town again. He suspects they will use this as an excuse to rip him off when he goes to trade. He decides he can simply beat them up until he gets a fair deal. He thinks he gave them a proper whooping and they should not be back. Loud knocking begins again and he calls them insane. He throws open the door and asks who it is. He finds a tall man standing there. The man apologizes and says he thought he could ask for a favor in his travels, wondering if he has disturbed him. Turan wonders if he is a traveler. He apologizes and notes that a few uninvited guests just came by moments ago. Reflecting that his mother taught him manners, he wonders if that was proper, feeling awkward since he never talked nicely to people in this town. He observes a traveler with a sword in this sleepy old town. He tells the man that if he is looking for an inn, he should look elsewhere, but the traveler's stomach rumbles loudly. Turan sighs and tells him to come in. He prepares a meal and explains that he is not well off, so they do not have much. The man calls it a feast and notes that Turan must have never met someone from outside the town. Turan says that is right. He explains he was born and raised on this hill and has lived as a shepherd all this time. He notes that it is rare for this small town to get tourists. The man looks at him and finds it interesting. Commenting that for someone who grew up as a shepherd, he is well versed in manners, the man assumes his parents taught him well. Turan explains he learned from his mother, but she died a few years ago due to an illness. The man says she raised a proud son and is surely among the gods in a palace in the heavens. He thanks the boy once again, while Turan says he just lives the way his mother taught him. He asks what brings the man all the way out here to this country town, and the man explains he was asked a favor. Turan asks what kind of favor, so the traveler says they were looking for someone to take care of a monster puma. He declares that he is a wizard. Turan realizes he must be the wizard the village elder talked about, and the man says that is right. He asks if he can ask a question now, and Turan says sure. The man explains that he senses a monster in this area, but he does not see one. He finds it weird that Turan knows about the elder and the monster yet remains calm. Nodding that if the monster went for a human, it would be him, he asks if Turan is scared. He remarks that Turan seems awfully brave for a shepherd. He asks Turan who he really is. Turan remembers asking his mother why nobody can know he is a wizard. She explained it is because of the bad nobles. Comparing nobles to shepherds and knights to the dogs that nobles keep, she warned that they might treat him with love, but they can sell him off or sacrifice him. She told him she does not want that kind of life for him and asked if he wanted to keep living with her, to which he said yes. She told him to remember that nobody can know he is a wizard and warned that if other wizards find out, they will separate them. And they would turn him into their shepherd dog to be discarded at any moment. She told him that to avoid being found out as a wizard, he might eventually have to kill people. Turan thinks to himself that this must be what the situation has come to, while the older man asks if he is unable to respond to the inquiry. Kjorn stares at him for a moment before declaring that making such a face simply makes his joke feel awkward, and then he lets out a nervous laugh. Turan realizes it was only a joke and apologizes for lacking a sense of humor, while Kjorn insists he is the one who should apologize as he realizes he must have flustered the young man. He reflects that it is his first time hearing a wizard joke, which is why it caught him off guard, while the wanderer remarks that the reaction was so entertaining that he took the teasing a bit too far. He notes they haven't introduced themselves properly and expresses that it is nice to meet him. The old man reveals that his name is Kjorn and describes himself as a wanderer. Turan feels he should have introduced himself first and identifies as a shepherd. He states that he is 18 years old this year, to which Kjorn responds that he will be 75. Turan thinks Kjorn looks very good for his age, nodding he doesn't look old at all, while Kjorn explains that wizards age much more slowly than ordinary people and enjoy significantly longer lives. Turan asks how he ended up becoming a wanderer in the first place, and the man explains that after serving the Arabian family for 60 years, he finally left. He says that in his later years, he desired to roam from place to place without the need to settle down, and Turan calls the idea romantic as the two of them continue their harmless conversation. Turan reflects that sharing a conversation with a good person like this is something he never realized would be so enjoyable. They continue chatting until the sun begins to rise over the horizon. Kjorn realizes he didn't notice how much time he was spending as the light grows. He hands over a coin of Arabian silver, explaining that it is the purest of silver coins and worth more than the meal. Turan accepts the payment gratefully and wishes the man a smooth hunt, while Kjorn tells him to stop acting like they will never see each other again. He suggests he might come by a few more times to mooch off him before he eventually heads out. Later in the day, Turan walks out to the field when it is time for the sheep to graze. He commands the animals to gather, causing them to look at him and begin walking his way. He reflects on the fact that this was the first time he has ever met another wizard, and wonders how long it has been since he shared a conversation that felt so naturally comfortable. Turan notes the ease and humor that naturally seeped into the man's speech was more than any adult he's ever met. He considers him a truly good person, recalling that the man even returned with a wolf. Turan had always thought knights were just emotionless hunting dogs used by arrogant nobles. He wonders how he is supposed to tell the man that there are no more monsters on Hisaril Hill. Meanwhile, Kjorn walks through the forest and notes that the surroundings feel strange. He sees traces of a battle but notes that he cannot feel a monster's presence anywhere. He looks up and discovers the rock from the sling embedded deep in a tree, wondering if the monster was already hunted and who in the world could have done it. He considers if the village chief hired another wizard, but he feels relieved that someone made things safe. Suddenly, he senses something and turns around to see the monster walking toward him with its face ripped apart. It releases a blood-curdling howl as Kjorn identifies it as a monster's wraith. He wonders who would do something like this as the monster attacks him, and he leaps backward to avoid the strike. He knows that failing to absorb or disperse mana from a dead monster's corpse turns it into a wraith, and he notes that a wizard who hunts monsters would certainly know this fundamental fact. Leaping high into the air, he concludes that the person who killed the beast was definitely a wizard, and he asks why they would leave it to become a wraith or if they were simply ignorant of the outcome. He reasons that a novice knight who doesn't know the basics could never have killed a monster like this. He wonders if they had some other intention, but decides that either way, he must destroy it. Drawing back a bow made of sheer lightning, he launches a magical arrow forward. The magic simply disperses as soon as it comes into contact with the monster's body. Kjorn asks if the monster's mana is vastly stronger than his. Suddenly, the monster disappears into the ground. He wonders if it is trying to counter magic with magic and wonders where it has gone. The creature begins to appear from his own shadow and looms over him. It swings down and strikes his arm, causing blood to fly from the impact. Kjorn realizes this is not a level a mere knight can contend with in battle, nodding that one would need to be at least a lower-ranked noble to have any chance. The monster sends Kjorn backward as he reflects on running into a wraith of this caliber in a remote village, and he thinks that you really never know what life will throw at you. The beast continues to change its shape into an even more grotesque and horrific form. Kjorn believes this is as far as he goes but refuses to die obediently. He vows that even if he dies, he will take the monster down with him. He plans to concentrate all of his mana into his hand for a final effort and stab the creature directly the moment it lunges at him. As the monster and Kjorn charge at each other, something shining comes flying out of the jungle. It was a rock that hit the monster hard. Kjorn is baffled as he watches the creature fall on the ground. Turan approaches and asks if Kjorn is all right. Kjorn remarks that the shepherd's joke is quite startling too, but he is just surprised to see him. He realizes the boy is a wizard and asks why he didn't tell him the truth. Turan remains silent, so Kjorn decides to change the question and asks why he helped him, nodding that the boy could have just walked away and let him die. Turan says it is simple as he recalls the night Kjorn brought him a dead wolf. He remembers asking why the man went so far for a simple favor, while Kjorn wonders what he is talking about as Turan continues. He notes that with his skills, the man could earn a lot more money more comfortably. Kjorn calls the villagers pitiful people, and Turan asks in what way he means that. He describes them living on the frontier and trembling in fear without basic protection, while Turan argues that it isn't the man's fault, but Kjorn explains a wizard inherits the power of a god, so they should live with pride by protecting powerless commoners. He admits that not every wizard thinks this way as everyone has their own way of living. Turan smiles and tells him exactly that while the monster rises for another attack. Kjorn tells him to listen carefully because this is not a level they can handle. He warns it is a monster they cannot fight unless they are at least a noble, and he tells Turan to inform the village chief immediately and help everyone evacuate. He vows to hold the monster off here. Kjorn admits he talked big but doesn't know how long he can actually last, but Turan tells him that it is okay as Kjorn asks what he is saying. Turan tells him if the attack he just used managed to land, then everything is going to be okay, while Kjorn asks what he is talking about, wondering if that attack wasn't his full strength, and he thinks a young knight hiding in the mountains couldn't hunt a wraith that even nobles deal with. That's what Kjorn thought at first, but he realizes what he is seeing isn't just a small connection made in a rural village, nor is it the reckless bravado of a young knight who ran from nobles. The scene before his eyes could be the beginning of a wizard who will turn the world upside down. Turan declares that he was also curious about what his limits truly are. As Turan stands before the monster, he declares that he wants to test his limits. Kjorn announces he will not permit the boy to face this alone, warning that despite his remarkable talent, this opponent is too formidable for them not to join forces. As the monster attempts to strike him, a sudden attack sends it flying. Kjorn realizes he would only be an obstruction since he could not even react to that previous attack. He acknowledges that at this moment, he provides no assistance to his companion. He decides that his current role is to help the young shepherd's talent truly bloom. Meanwhile, Turan stands firm while launching a continuous series of attacks at the beast. However, he realizes the situation is not as favorable as it seems because his physical strikes are taking no effect. Kjorn shouts that it is impossible to kill a wraith with physical attacks alone. Turan asks how he is supposed to slay the creature then, and Kjorn instructs him to use fire or lightning. The boy's eyes begin to shine as fire appears, yet it simply bounces off the monster, leading him to observe that it is not working. Kjorn is shocked to see that Turan doesn't understand that establishing proper causality is a basic requirement for applying magic to another living being, wondering if the boy lacks fundamental common sense. He realizes now that Turan was the one who killed the original monster and allowed it to become a wraith. This leads him to the conclusion that Turan has never actually absorbed mana in his entire life. He tells Turan not to simply light a fire but to create the flame and then shoot it at the target, yet he remains stunned by just how strong the boy is already. Turan catches his balance and begins to imbue the fire into his hand. Kjorn reflects that while making fire isn't difficult for a wizard, controlling it requires separate training. Turan performs the task instantly, creating a powerful fire. He steps forward before hurling the flames at the monster. The flame explodes upon impact, causing the monster to scream as it burns alive. Kjorn urges him to keep his mind focused on the spell, explaining that he must keep pouring mana into it so the fire does not go out. He insists that everything about the wraith must be burned away as Turan continues to imbue his mana into the attack. His eyes shine like a rainbow as the flames grow more violent. Kjorn cannot believe they actually won and reflects on how absurdly strong that wraith was, nodding that one would need at least noble-class power to fight it, yet Turan took it down. Turan asks if the battle is finally over, while Kjorn remains in disbelief that a shepherd from the mountains achieved such a feat. Kjorn warns that if he does not want to encounter another wraith, he must absorb the mana first, and when Turan asks how to do that, he tells him to imagine draining something into himself. Turan agrees and places his hand on the remains. As he focuses, a green aura emanates from the monster and gathers into his palm. As he does this, all of the mana is absorbed and circulates throughout his entire body. As he starts to shiver, Kjorn mentions he will experience a certain kind of pleasure. He declares he cannot believe it even after seeing it with his own eyes and asks if this truly was his first time absorbing mana, and Turan confirms that it was. Kjorn explains that after an initial awakening, mana grows slowly with age, and the most effective way to grow is to kill monsters or wizards and absorb their mana. Since this was Turan's first time, his innate potential must be in a different league entirely. He concludes that this young man must belong to a noble house. Kjorn bows and apologizes for his previous rudeness, then asks which noble house Turan belongs to, but Turan tells him to wipe the blood off himself first. Back inside the house, Kjorn has his arm covered in bandages. He once again apologizes for his lack of manners toward the boy, feeling he can only apologize for making someone as esteemed as Turan perform such a task. Turan reminds him he has already stated he is not someone esteemed, explaining he is just a shepherd who does not even know who his father is. He glares and tells him to stop the formalities, while Kjorn agrees and tells Turan not to glare at him. But the man wonders why a powerful wizard would choose to be a shepherd, explaining he does not mean to belittle him, but the role simply does not seem to suit him. Turan reveals it was his mother's request which she held on to until the moment she died, and Kjorn asks for more explanation. And Turan describes how nobles live below the mountains. He explains that if his wizard identity is revealed, he will only be used by them and then thrown away, while Kjorn observes his mother was very wise. Turan is surprised since he expected him to call it overprotective parenting. Kjorn tells him his mother was not entirely wrong. He reflects that wizards have great power and that great power inevitably brings conflict, recalling a major war between noble houses just 20-some years ago. He explains it was a conflict between the House of Arabian, which he served, and the Great House of Zahar, noting that so many people died in that war. Out of roughly 3,000 Arabian knights at the time, more than 900 died. He reflects that nearly a third of them were lost. Sadly, he realizes everyone close to him was in that third, remembering his friend Denver, his teacher Hartman, and his beloved wife and son, who were all massacred by House Zahar. He concludes that his mother was right to an extent, as a knight's life can vanish more easily and meaninglessly than a commoner's. However, he points out that the one thing she was wrong about was Turan's aptitude. He admits it is embarrassing to say while in his current state, but he is a knight with fairly good skill, yet Turan easily destroyed a monster wraith that he himself could not bring down. He tells the boy his potential is not merely that of a knight but is at minimum noble level, and even among them, he possesses at least upper-tier aptitude. Turan asks if his mother was lying when she said his father was a knight, while Kjorn explains that on rare occasions, a child worse than a knight is born among nobles, or a noble-class child is born among knights. In that sense, he suggests it would be better for Turan to leave this hill and enter the world. Turan asks why he should do that, and Kjorn explains that humanity desperately needs more strong and kind nobles and knights, because humans are still not the complete masters of the world. Long ago, other races pushed out by the gods were left watching for a chance to rise again. In the midst of this, nobles only continue to wage war against one another. He argues this is an age that desperately needs someone strong and kind like Turan. More than anything, he asks if Turan is truly satisfied living as a shepherd. Turan looks at him and asks what he could even gain by going below the mountain. Kjorn explains that it depends on his desires, whether it be wealth, fame, authority, family, or friendship, noting that any of that is hard to obtain here. He tells him to try imagining the possibilities where he could wander as a wanderer and destroy monsters, or become an explorer in the unknown, or be adopted into a house to walk the path of power. Turan admits that listening to him, he thinks the man is right. He notes it would be more interesting than herding sheep here. For the first time, he is seriously curious about the world outside. Kjorn worries he might be planting expectations for no reason, but promises to support every possibility Turan has. Then he asks about his bloodline ability, and Turan asks what he means. Kjorn apologizes and explains he keeps forgetting the boy knows little about magic. He explains a bloodline ability is a trait nobles inherit from their ancestor, the Freyans, and whether or not one has this ability is what separates nobles from knights. He asks if any spell felt unusually easy, or if he has some outstanding ability that does not require magic. Turan wonders if it is because he is strong, but Kjorn explains that simply having mana makes a wizard's physical abilities stronger. Turan mentions he has a good nose and is pretty good at throwing stones, while Kjorn says that if his sense of smell is exceptional, it can be considered a bloodline ability. Kjorn notes that being skilled with thrown weapons is a trait of House Arabian, though it is a fairly common one. He tells Turan to continue explaining. After some time, Kjorn declares that he thinks he knows which house his abilities are closest to. Turan asks for the house's name. Kjorn's expression changes as he tells him the name of a great house known as Pursuers or Hunters. He reveals it is House Zahar, the very one that fought the war against House Arabian. Turan is visibly surprised by this. As Turan hears the name House Zahar, he becomes visibly worried. He looks at Kjorn with a sad expression since he shares a bloodline with the man's enemies. He considers the idea of apologizing, but notes that these relatives are practically strangers he has never encountered. Kjorn tells him not to maintain such a worried expression, nodding that Turan did not participate in that war, and declaring that it is a situation for adults. He says that the fighting will never cease if they attempt to wash blood with blood. Turan asks if he possesses any regrets, causing Kjorn to inquire what he is referring to. The shepherd explains he is talking about the suggestion to descend the hill. Kjorn tells him that pursuing power after leaving the mountain will inevitably lead him to join House Zahar, nodding that the young man has outstanding abilities, but declaring that he trusts his character. Turan asks what he means by that, so the man explains he is referring to the goodness within him, pointing out that he saved him while revealing an identity he has hidden for his entire life, and considering the idea that if someone like him joined House Zahar and achieved a high position, perhaps it could stop such a terrible war from occurring again. Kjorn says there is no need to think about the matter too seriously. He reflects that a decision regarding joining the family has not been made yet. Turan announces that his thoughts are now clear and he wants to try descending the mountain. Kjorn tells him he has thought well, but the boy declares he does not want to depart immediately. He tells Kjorn that he will head down once the man's injury has healed, while Kjorn calls him kind, nodding he is only slightly scratched and reflecting that the boy is truly a good person. Later inside the house, Kjorn explains that mana is absolutely required to use magic, stating that this is why mana is commonly referred to as the key to omnipotence. Turan asks about the term, so Kjorn clarifies it is not a truly omnipotent power despite the name, and that using magic requires mana that matches it. The boy asks what the standard for matching mana is, so Kjorn declares he will explain that immediately. He says the difficulty of magic is largely determined by 3 factors, listing them as bloodline, affinity, and causality. He explains that bloodline is determined by the specific lineage one is born into, which applies to most nobles who are not knights. He considers that it would be difficult for the boy to heal wounds using magic, asking if he is wrong about that, but Turan declares that he is not. Kjorn continues that for members of the Ravista bloodline from the south, it is something they can achieve even without training since the power originates from the bloodline. Turan asks about the second factor, affinity, which Kjorn says can be thought of as familiarity. He explains it is the concept that a mage can more easily perform tasks they prefer or are used to, while Turan reflects that it is like how he created a fireball as if he were throwing a rock. Kjorn confirms that he is correct and considers that simply making flames would not have achieved the same speed or firepower. He notes the last factor, causality, is the most important, though he reflects he does not fully understand it. He asks what would occur if Turan tried to kill him directly by using mana, so Turan says some light would probably shine from his head and nothing more would happen. Kjorn says that is exactly the phenomenon occurring from a lack of causality. He explains it applies when there is no appropriate cause for a desired outcome, or when what needs to be achieved is excessively difficult. Turan reflects that he thinks he understands a bit of what causality is. He notes that to kill Kjorn, instead of spending mana wishing for death, he would need to provide a cause of death like creating and shooting flames, which is more natural than directly lighting one. Kjorn tells him exactly that while reflecting Turan could have been a scholar instead of a mage. Turan says that he can control ordinary animals as he wishes and asks why magical beasts would need something like that, so Kjorn tells him it is because of their mana. They continue talking while a sheep eavesdrops. Turan reflects that magic is certainly not easy, while Kjorn tells him an excellent mage knows not just how to use mana, but also the principles and situations behind it. The shepherd wonders if the House Zahar bloodline also possesses special magic, so Kjorn tells him they are skilled in stealth and tracking and suggests he try it once. Turan agrees to the suggestion. He closes his eyes and thinks how he does not want to be seen by others, wishing that neither sound nor smell could be detected. He starts to fade away and asks if it worked. Kjorn stands there speechless, seeing nothing in front of him. He tells him he succeeded because he can no longer see him. The man feels a little sad as he looks at the now empty room. Turan slowly reappears, and Kyorn reflects it has been a while since he has seen that ability, nodding it is still a frightening power. He notes that during the war, the Arabian knights feared that ability the most, while Turan reflects that this seems like an unfairly powerful ability. Kyorn tells him it is not invincible and declares he will teach him magic training methods. Turan says the man is being too friendly and teaching too much to a mage from an enemy family. Kyorn reminds him he saved his life and treated him, declaring again that he trusts his character. Later, an ugly bald man asks if Turan is truly selling the sheep and leaving. The bald man asks who will perform the shepherding from now on, and how he can decide such a thing without consulting them. Turan tells them they should figure out how to find a shepherd themselves, declaring it does not matter to them what he does with his belongings. He hopes they buy the sheep at a fair price or he will release them and leave. He says they are free to capture them but notes they will probably have a hard time. The chief reflects that this bastard is someone who keeps his word and that nothing good will come from irritating him. He says he understands and tells him to do whatever he wants while handing over a bag of money. As Turan and Kyorn start to leave, Turan reflects that the villagers still owe Kyorn compensation for everything and considers going to collect it. Kyorn tells him he does not intend to receive it because Turan was the one who caught the beast. Turan notes that is true and reflects they have reached a crossroads where they must part ways. Kyorn tells him he is sorry for refusing the offer to travel together as he is more comfortable alone. The boy declares he understands and thanks him for everything. Kyorn tells him to take care, and Turan declares he hopes they meet again with smiling faces. He watches the knight's retreating figure for a long time. Only later does he realize why he did not want the man to speak formally. He reflects that although he never lacked affection from his mother, he had been secretly yearning for a father figure. He realizes he wanted someone who could be a role model for what kind of man he should become. The journey continues as Turan travels deep into the desert and past a canyon. As he walks and looks up to try to look farther, he spots people off in the distance. He wonders if they are traveling merchants going from village to village. He reflects this is good since he can ask for directions. Turan reaches near them. A man asks who he is to block their path, so Turan explains he is traveling alone and asks for the location of the nearest city. They tell him he will reach a city called Mure if he follows the road they came from. Turan thanks them for the information and starts to leave, but one of the men tells him to wait. He asks if the boy is really going to leave after receiving information, while Turan asks what he is talking about and wonders what he wants. The man tells him he should give something in return if he receives something. They take out their blades and tell him to take off his bag. Turan asks if they are bandits and the man asks what he will do if they are. The man who gave the directions declares this is just recklessness, nodding this is a wasteland where no one would find it strange if someone died. He points his sword at Turan and tells him to take off his bag and cloak while they are being nice, because killing and stripping him would be unnecessarily bloody. Turan understands and notes they are bandits who kill people. He remembers his training with Kyorn, practicing magic with him and remembering everything the man told him. Recalling Kyorn, Turan declares he will use them for practice. The group begins to laugh at him, declaring that he is talking like some kind of wizard. Turan moves his hand forward, sending the men flying through the air with a gust of wind. He notes that instead of generating wind from thin air, shaping it with his hand and amplifying it uses much less mana. He didn't realize he could whip up wind this strong with such a small amount of mana, and the men are left completely confused by the attack. He then begins to pull water from his water pouch, forming it into a crystal. He creates multiple crystals now, and the bandits realize they have made a mistake. One of the men is impaled by crystals, which kills him instantly. Turan thinks that this spell is supposed to be useful near a lot of water, but considers that simply throwing stones feels faster and stronger than this so far. The bandits apologize and say they didn't know he was a wizard while begging for forgiveness. The leader is distracting him while the rest of the group creeps up from behind. Turan lifts his foot and stomps down, causing a sand pillar to spawn under the men, and the pillars impale all of them as the leader stands there speechless. He stares at the corpses of his men and declares that this is impossible. Turan says he has one thing to ask, and the man declares he will answer anything. He asks why they attacked him without a plan, nodding that a traveler walking alone could easily be a wizard. The leader explains it was because Turan bowed his head. He says that even when they spoke rudely, the boy bowed and greeted them, so they assumed he was ordinary. Turan thanks him and declares that the man taught him something useful. The bandit smiles and asks if he is really going to spare him. Water begins to gather above the man's head, as a flashback shows Kyorn telling him that he is going to meet many people, and there is something he must absolutely know. He says he must never show mercy to scum like bandits, describing them as the kind who do not hesitate to harm others for a profit. He notes the reason he is saying this so firmly is because he understands the boy's nature, and Turan declares that he understands the reasoning. A life spared out of pity could end up harming 10 good people, so he kills the man and reflects that he has stalled for long enough. The road the bandits drag their cart along left clear wheel tracks cutting across the sand for him to follow. As he follows the trail, one thought remains burned sharply into his mind. He killed people. He feels guilt but realizes he couldn't just let them go. Kjorn's warning comes back to remind him of those who rob and kill without hesitation, and such people would target others again at any moment. Like tracks in the desert slowly fatting as weeds grow over them, Turan's chaotic heart gradually settled as he recalled the teachings of Kjorn. And then, he arrived in a new world. He stands above the small city of Mure, which is unlike the village where he spent his life. He thinks that the place is pretty, and as the streets are crowded with people, he notes it is his first time seeing so many together. Even the architecture is completely different from what he is used to. He feels as though he has truly come to a city. He walks toward a shopkeeper who welcomes him and asks what he can get for him. Turan says he is not a customer. He recalls Kjorn saying that if he reaches a city and needs a place to rest, he should look for an inn. The shopkeeper tells him that if he is not buying fruit, he should get lost. Turan wonders why the man is being so rude, and if it is an unspoken rule in cities that questions require buying fruit first. He points to a fruit and asks how much it costs, so the merchant tells him it is 2 ducat. Turan asks what exactly a ducat is, but the merchant notes he looks like an outsider who probably doesn't know what that is, adding that paying with other coins is fine too. Turan hands over a coin and asks where he can find the inn. The man points him toward the biggest inn in the city. When he arrives, an inn staff member named Lena welcomes him. She tells him that he is a handsome guest, and he asks how much a night costs, and she says it is 16 ducat. He declares that he will stay, but adds that he has one more question. He asks if there is a monster nearby with a bounty on its head, but Lena is surprised that he is asking about a monster. He thinks about needing to kill monsters to absorb their mana, and recalls Kjorn saying that hunting monsters would earn money as well. He asks why she is not answering his question. Lena declares that there is no such thing as free in this world. She eventually has him buy a drink and tells him to go to City Hall. He asks what that place is. She asks if he really doesn't know and declares he must be from the countryside. She explains that city halls are where various public affairs are handled, and the officials working there are employed by the city's lord. She adds it is probably closed since the sun is already down, but suggests going there tomorrow if he wants to find a monster bounty. She asks if he is a monster hunter as well, so Turan asks what a monster hunter is. She explains people claim that if an ordinary person hunts monsters, they become a wizard, and she asks if he is trying to become a wizard too. She declares that anyone who believes that kind of superstition is an idiot, but Turan asks if it is just a superstition. Suddenly someone puts his hand on Turan, and it was a monster hunter named Midden who declares it is a fact that killing monsters makes you a wizard, saying he saw it with his own eyes. Lena is surprised to see him alive, but Midden declares he is not dying until he becomes a wizard. Turan pats the man's hand, and Midden removes it from his shoulder while apologizing for the intrusion. Turan says he wants to hear more about what was just said, and Midden asks if he refers to the part about becoming a wizard by killing monsters. He explains that wizards get stronger when they hunt monsters, and by the same principle, an ordinary person can become a wizard. He notes the 4 of them are hunting monsters to try and become wizards. Turan asks if that means someone among them is already a wizard, but Midden says no and explains there is only the Lord's wizard and 3 others under him in this city. He notes the boy's gear is too shabby for hunting and asks if he has a weapon. Turan says he does and holds up a sling, while Midden notes that judging by how worn it is, he must have used it a lot. Turan says it is good for firing something the size of an egg quickly, but Midden says he could easily hunt rabbit or fox monsters with that. He notes they were wishing for one more shooter and asks if he has any interest in hunting with them. Turan smiles and says no but thanks them for the offer. At night in his room, he reflects that there is no reason he has to hunt together with them. He thinks about what a chaotic day it has been. He still can't believe he actually left the village, wondering what is going to happen from here on. He senses someone outside his room and asks who it is. He recalls Kjorn telling him that a city isn't automatically safe and he should never let his guard down. He goes near the door while imbuing his hand with mana just in case. He cracks the door open and asks Lena what she is doing there. She asks if he was asleep and says she thought the room might be cold, so she came to keep him warm. He asks what she means by that. And Lena smiles and begins to undress herself. She tells him that it's exactly what it sounds like. The boy is confused and asks what she means by exactly what it sounds like. She explains that for a small amount of money, she will do whatever he desires, but he asks what she will do if there is nothing he wants. And she tells him not to lie, claiming she can tell just by looking at his face. But Turan turns into the Buddha himself and Lena stares at him. He recalls Kjorn getting mad and saying that he must never fall for the honeypot. The man had warned he always has to be careful with women at inns and prostitutes in general. since most of them carry sexually transmitted diseases. He noted that while they have strong disease resistance, and it is no problem for them, if Turan is careless, he could pass it on when he is with another woman, advising that he shouldn't let desire trap him into doing something he will regret. Turan thinks that cities are not easy to live in either, and reflects on the fruit shop earlier and now Lena too. He considers how they put a price on even small bits of information and conversation, and concludes that cities really are pretty cold-hearted. He then overhears Midden and his men discussing something. They ask Midden why he was trying to bring that guy from earlier along, as one of the men noted that he didn't look like he would be much help. The other dude said that was right, and that he just sounded so cocky he would be perfect to use as bait, but Midden explains it is because Turan reminds him of himself when he was young. He figured that if the boy was at least next to him, he might as well survive a little longer, while the others tell him that he is way too good-hearted. Hearing this, Turan smiles, thinking maybe the city isn't completely cold after all. The next day, he heads to City Hall and a man asks if he can help him. Turan asks if he is an official and the man asks what else he would look like. The young shepherd tells him he came to hunt monsters, which confuses the man. He recalls Kjorn telling him previously that the world would not be kind to him. He thinks about it the other way around, nodding there's no reason it has to be kind, and he was advised that if he wants people to treat him kindly, the method is simple. He must reveal that he is a wizard and ordinary people will bow their heads. The official hands him a paper and says that he cannot take it with him. He instructs him to look and then hand it back. Turan asks if it is a crow monster and the man asks if it looks like a cat or something. He explains that it is unlikely, but if he kills a monster, he has to bring it to the city, nodding a wizard is needed to disperse the mana so it does not become a wraith. He warns that if he kills a monster and leaves it abandoned, the penalty under city law is execution. Turan knows this and understands what happens when a monster becomes a wraith, and he cannot repeat the same mistake. Turan then asks if knights don't hunt monsters, but the official says they are not people with time to spare. He explains a knight's job is to maintain public order in the city. He notes that hunting monsters outside the city is something for thugs like him to handle, and as Turan leaves, the official comments that another corpse is going to pile up outside the city. But later, he comes with a dead monster with a giant hole in its chest. Everybody is surprised, unable to believe what they are seeing. They ask him how he managed to bring it back so fast and if he killed it alone. Turan says that he did and asks if he can receive the reward for killing it. The official says they will give it to him and runs to get Turan's reward. He hands over a bag and tells him to go get some rest. The other officials talk about how incredible it is because even its wings are still intact, and they wonder if it is possible to bring back a blade crow in this condition. The official thinks about it and looks over, asking Turan why he is still here. Turan asks if there are any other monsters worth hunting. They ask if he is really planning to go hunt more. Later, Lena tells him that these are the most expensive items on their menu. She never dreamed that someone like him could defeat 30 monsters in just 3 days. She says he must have made a lot of money from the bounties, while Turan continues to eat like a baby. He responds that money isn't his only goal. More precisely, the goal is the monster's mana, and thanks to that, he has definitely gotten stronger. He notes that compared to when he met Kjorn, his mana has increased severalfold. However, he can feel a limit approaching, and with only weak monsters' mana, it is going to be hard to get any stronger. He then tells Lena that he has a question for her, and she asks what it is, and he asks if she took a bite of this, but she reminds him that he ate it all by himself. She notes that even though he is skinny, he can definitely eat, and the chef says he made it for the first time in a while and is happy he enjoyed it. Turan says it was delicious, and as he stands up to leave, one of Midden's men grabs him by the coat. He asks if he is really eating something so tasty by himself. They make fun of him, saying they have heard that he has made a lot of money and suggesting he should give some charity to his partners. Turan hits him in the face, and the man stumbles backward. Turan asks if he wanted some more charity. Another man gets pissed and swings at him, but Turan dodges and hits him in the face too, while one runs at him carrying a chair and swings, but Turan blocks it. Turan raises his hand and flicks the man in the forehead. Lena gets nervous and yells, telling them to stop fighting in the inn. Later, Midden apologizes and says he gave them a proper scolding. He promises this will never happen again and explains they have been tight on money lately. He says they just got jealous when they saw him and tells the other two to apologize. And they both say sorry. Turan asks if things are that hard for them and Midden says they have just been limited. He doesn't think they will be able to pay the room fee but notes that it is their problem. Turan then takes out a bag of money and tells him to take it. Midden asks why, and Turan explains this is repayment for the kindness he showed before, remembering him saying he was worried and tried to bring him along. Midden asks how he knew about that, while Turan says there is no such thing as free and he needs some information in return. Midden laughs and says that information is what he is best at, and he will tell Turan everything he knows. Later, outside the town, Turan looks at it and reflects this might be his last hunt in this city. He notes Midden gave him information about the next one, so it is about time he left for there. He reflects there was a lot more useful information than he expected and that Midden is a great person. He thinks Midden is not as seasoned as Kjorn, but that just makes him purer and kinder. He then senses something and recognizes the smell. He starts to run in that direction, knowing what is happening but hopping his hunch is wrong. As he heads into the jungle, he sees marks on a tree. He looks over and spots one of the men cut across the chest and bleeding out. Turan recognizes that he is from Midden's group. He then looks over and spots Midden's corpse and the coins that he gave him on the ground covered in blood. Turan just wonders what happened to him. Turan looks down at Midden and one of the men who is still barely alive as the man struggles to speak but manages to get the word rabbit out. Turan is confused and asks a rabbit. But the dying man is finally able to say it's a rabbit monster. Turan looks to the other side and sees the monster still eating another man. The monster also notices him and glares at Turan with its red glowing eyes. Turan was standing up when the monster charged at him with great speed, but he dodged the attack, and the monster hit the tree, destroying it instantly. Turan can't believe how fast it is and he was almost hit by it. He twirls his sling and raises it up before firing it. As the rock soars through the air, it splits into three and all of them move toward the monster, but the monster easily destroys all of them. Turan notes that this creature is used to defending against thrown weapon techniques. The beast readies itself and dashes toward him once more. It is surprised when Turan completely vanishes in front of it. The monster stops the attack as it can't see Turan, but he suddenly appears behind it with a dagger in his hand and stabs the rabbit monster in the neck. Turan retreats and starts turning invisible using magic. The monster tries to attack at that moment, but Turan had already become invisible, and the monster was only able to cut down a tree. The rabbit monster becomes mad and starts cutting every tree he can see. After some time, it comes to a stop as it becomes exhausted and screams loudly. As the monster loses more blood, it finally dies and falls on the ground, as Turan was able to successfully rage bait it to death. He then undoes his invisibility and approaches the monster's corpse. He stretches his hand out toward the beast and begins to absorb its mana. He notices that the amount of mana he is getting now is different, reflecting that it is more than the leopard monster he encountered the first time. The man who is still barely alive can't believe that Turan is a wizard. Turan confirms that he is, and the man asks why he is hiding his identity. But Turan asks if any of the four of them have belongings he can pass on to their families, and the guy begins crying, saying that he doesn't have a family as he looks at Midden full of regret. Turan remembers Midden telling him about a great city nearby called Orem, which has a place called a library. Turan asks what a library is, and Midden explains it has thousands of books. He then tells Turan that at the moment he said the word books, he looked fully interested, so Turan asks if he really did, and Midden explains that he heard not just anyone can enter the library. Turan asks how he is meant to get in then, and Midden tells him that apparently only wizards are allowed inside. Turan says he understands and that he has decided. Midden asks what he is talking about, and Turan declares he is going to that great city he mentioned. Now Turan stands over their graves after having buried them. He wishes them happiness there and walks away. Sometime later, Turan is standing in line. He is almost embarrassed that he was shocked by the small city of Mure. Now that he is standing before the great city Orem, he can tell how big of a city this is based on the scale alone. He did not think that there would be this many people trying to enter the city. He sees the guards and wonders if they are scanning for criminals. As expected of a great city, it has a more established system. The guards tell him to stop, and Turan asks what is wrong. They inform him that he cannot be allowed to enter because his clothes are absolutely filthy, telling him he should dust himself off at least. Later, he gets into the city and stands before a massive tower. He reflects that this must be the library that Midden talked about. He thinks it is overwhelming and must have been built with magic. He walks up to the entrance and says that he is trying to enter. The guards tell him that only wizards are allowed to enter. He tells them that he is a wizard, but one of the guards gets pissed, asking if the boy wants to die for impersonating a wizard. He declares there is no way a kid like him could be a wizard. But the guard tries to imbue his hand with mana as Turan recalls Kjorn's words, who had told him that wizards can recognize each other by sensing the other's mana and can tell whether someone is stronger than them. Turan decides to use this to his advantage and releases a massive amount of mana. The guard gets scared from sensing the power and falls onto the floor. He realizes that this is no ordinary wizard and is at least of noble class or higher. He screams his name and declares he is Kenya, a knight of House Voltas, and wonders which house Turan is from. Turan asks if he has to tell him his house to enter, and the man says no. However, to use the library, he needs permission from the Master of Voltas, and when Turan asks what that means, the guard says he will contact House Voltas for him. Later, Turan is sighing as he reflects he thought it would be a simple process. However, maids are now cleaning him inside of a bathhouse, and he wonders how this even happened. He tells them to stop and asks if there is a problem with him washing himself. They explain that if they fail to properly attend to an esteemed guest, they will be punished. He tells them to do what they want and they thank him for that. Later, one of the maids says that he is amazing. She instantly realizes what she said and covers her mouth. He asks if there is something on his face. The maid says she just lost herself because of how handsome he is and begs for forgiveness. He tells her there is nothing to forgive, but the maids tell him to stop speaking so casually to them. Then someone else enters and says, "Wow, what's this?" It was a girl who says she can't believe he is the same guest who showed up looking like a beggar. She notes that after washing up and dressing, he looks like a prince, while the bodyguard with her says she shouldn't be saying that. Turan introduces himself to the girl, and she introduces herself as Azella. She asks what house he belongs to, but he says that for personal reasons it is difficult to say. She tells him that is a shame. She decides to play a prank on him for hiding who he is. She begins to release her mana, which spreads throughout the room, thinking that he needs to show her what his mana looks like. Turan feels the crushing weight of Azella's mana slamming into him with intense force. But after a moment, he also releases his own mana, their auras clashing with each other while the surroundings tremble under the pressure. A guard rushes in front of the maids, putting himself between them and the spreading pressure. After a few moments, Turan retracts his mana, and Azella stops as well, finishing her test with a surprised wow. She looks at her hands, which are now trembling, and laughs. She then looks at Turan and asks if he wants to marry her. He is completely stunned, his thoughts wiped clean for a moment. Azella notices his frozen face and teases him for reacting that way, assuring him that it was just a joke. But she looks at him one more time, urging him to think about her offer as the seat next to her is currently empty. After saying this, she and her bodyguards leave the room. Turan watches her leave for some time and then looks down to see that his own hands are also trembling. She has mana that is on par with his at the very least, leaving him to wonder if this level of strength is considered normal in this city. The scene shifts to a different room where the man Turan wanted to see is waiting. This is Rug Valtas, the Lord of Aurum, who welcomes Turan as a young noble and asks if he already knows his name. Turan introduces himself, and Rug repeats the name Turan before asking if he wants to use the library. He mentions that a lot of people come there after hearing strange rumors, so he wants to clarify in advance that there is no amazing ancient magic in the library, nor is there some secret method to increase mana. Turan states that he is fine with that, explaining that he never wanted anything of the sort. Rug studies him for a moment and then allows it, nodding that there is nothing inside that counts as confidential information related to his house anyway. Since it has gotten late, he suggests that Turan rest and come back tomorrow, asking if that is acceptable, to which Turan declares he won't forget this kindness. The next day at the entrance, the guards check Turan and confirm his entry pass, welcoming him as an esteemed guest into the Sky Library. Turan pushes the doors open and steps inside. He looks up and sees the library climbing upward in a spiral that looks like it never ends. He finally realizes what the library truly is. Then a voice comes from nearby, greeting him by name. He turns to find a young girl standing there, who introduces herself as the librarian and states that, by order of the Lord, she will explain the simple rules for using this place. Turan stares at her, surprised to see that a little kid is the librarian. She raises a finger and explains that the first rule is he must compensate them if he damages anything. The second rule is he cannot take any books out. And finally, she will be watching him the whole time he is using the library. Turan asks if she could stand a little farther away while he reads because he feels uncomfortable. He asks if, as a librarian, she has read the books there too. She says yes and tells him that if he needs something, finding it for him is what she does best. She asks what he wants to read, offering options like romance or history or even something erotic since he is young, which makes Turan just look at her in surprise. Turan declares he wants to learn basic common sense about the world, and this time it is the librarian who looks surprised. She reacts quickly, moving with surprising speed as she gathers a heavy stack of books and drops them in front of him. She notes that many of the books are hundreds of years old and won't suit his needs, but she guides him toward a section that might help a little. Turan thanks her and she tells him he is welcome. He picks up one of the books and reflects on what a book actually is. Then he opens it carefully and starts reading, his expression changing as he thinks about how amazing these books are. Turan repeats this same routine every day, reading in the library. He now comes to understand the world's geography and its different races, learning about the etiquette of wizards and how various items are manufactured and processed, even studying monsters and relics from the era of the Old Empire. With each piece of knowledge he accumulates, his world, something that was once nothing but an unknown space, grows clearer and more vivid to him. Later, Lord Rugvaltas notes that Turan has been making excellent use of the library, which Turan confirms is true. The Lord then states that, separate from treating him as a noble, allowing him to use the library was an act of goodwill, and he declares he would like to receive payment for that goodwill. Turan does not stall and asks the Lord to tell him what he needs. Rug explains that a monster has appeared north of Orem and has been attacking travelers, noting that 4 knights who went to subjugate it never returned because they were eaten. He adds that it seems a noble will have to step in personally, but his house can only mobilize 2 people at the moment. Turan agrees to help, thinking that protecting people is what a wizard ought to do. However, he feels something is off, knowing that wizards are usually the type who do not get involved in things like this. Rug adds that the Northern Road is an important trade route for Orem and has been blocked for 10 days, so they have to reopen it quickly. Turan realizes that 10 days ago was before he even arrived in Orem, figuring out that this is why the Lord let him use the library so readily. The scene shifts as a large group leaves the city. Yahello remarks that her father really is something else to think he would mobilize a guest for a monster hunt, asking if they were truly that unreliable. She tells Turan that she is not blaming anyone, but says the Lord is making a huge fuss. The man beside her laughs and asks if calling the Lord fussy is a bit much, prompting Yahello to tell him to drop it. That man stops for a moment and turns toward Turan to introduce himself as Marvin Valtas, saying he looks forward to working with him, and Turan returns the greeting. As they walk, Yahello says they should finish this quickly and go back to rest. Marvin leans in and asks if Turan is interested in his big sister by any chance, to which Turan says no instantly. Marvin looks genuinely relieved. Suddenly, the guard at the front shouts for everyone to stop. Up ahead, they find a destroyed carriage on the road. As they inspect the wreckage, one guard asks if this was done by that creature. Another guard says it probably was, reasoning that since they forbade anyone from going north from their side, the travelers must have come from the south and gotten attacked by the monster. Turan stays quiet and studies a mark on a wooden board. He then states that the monster is a monkey. Yahello repeats the word with doubt, so Turan tells them to look at a handprint and explains that the creature attacked the peddlers and went back into the forest. If they locate its trail, they should be able to find it. Yahello says she can barely use tracking magic and asks Marvin if he can, but Marvin says he cannot either. Turan then steps forward, volunteering to try looking, and searches for something amidst the carriage parts. Yahello asks if he is from a specific tracker bloodline, but Turan just picks up a small piece of cloth and simply says he uses this method a lot and is used to it. He closes his eyes, smells the cloth, and activates a search spell. He opens his eyes and a blue energy trail becomes visible to him. He points toward the forest and leads them that way. The trail stops at a river where Turan notes that it looks like the beast washed its body. Yahello refuses to believe a mere beast did that on purpose to avoid being tracked, while Turan suggests it might have just washed because it wanted to. Suddenly, Turan sees those blue lines again and warns the group that the beast is behind them. A massive monkey monster with glowing red eyes emerges, roaring loudly. The monkey raises its hands, in which it is holding large stones. The knights see this and shout for everyone to dodge. The monster launches the stones, which are so large and fast that anyone hit by them is heavily injured. Turan barely escapes the attack, but he is more surprised by what he is seeing. Yahello and Marvin do not dodge the attack but use the knights as shields, and because of that, those knights are heavily injured. After the attack stops, Yahello simply throws away the knight she was holding as a shield. Turan finally understands that his mother was not wrong. Yahello screams for everyone to attack. The remaining knights who can still fight run toward the monster, but the monster turns to run and the knights, seeing it flee, chase after it. Meanwhile, Turan puts a small rock into his sling. Yahello and Marvin run after the monster, but it is too fast. Yahello says that they are going to lose it, but as she speaks, she sees a small rock fly past her. It is so fast that she cannot even react. The rock flies past all of them and hits the monster, going straight through its body as it screams in pain. Yahello and Marvin look back and see Turan walking calmly while spinning his sling. Turan looks up as the monster screams again. As the monkey monster screams and collapses on the ground, Yahello quickly seizes the opportunity to finish the creature, extending her hand and using her magic as an immense torrent of fire erupts. This fire takes the form of a dragon and moves toward the monster, but the creature can only stare at the flames because it is heavily injured by Turan's attack and cannot move. As the fire hits, it creates a massive explosion, completely obliterating the monster. Turan watches the flames and realizes that he is witnessing the bloodline ability of House Valta's pyromaniacs. The knights can finally breathe in peace now that the threat is gone. Yahello looks at Turan, admitting that she got chills for a second while his rock was flying toward them. Marvin asks if his sister got scared. Yahello tells him to shut up and declares that he is the one who screamed like a little girl, to which Marvin asks in disbelief when he ever did such a thing. Meanwhile, the knights are busy checking the wounded. Several men have broken arms, but one veteran tells them to quit whining, pointing out that someone else had their whole arm blown off, asking if anyone has spare bandages, while another knight notes that a man's head will not stop bleeding, prompting someone to suggest trying to apply medicine to the wound. Turan looks over the scene and realizes this is a mess, remarking that they are lucky there were no casualties. It was a surprise attack by a monster, but he notes this was a fight where they could have avoided serious injuries altogether. He looks at Azella and Marvin, considering the fact that since their bodies get stronger based on their mana, these nobles should be several times tougher than the knights. Despite this, they did not hesitate to use people weaker than them as shields. Marvin notices Turan's stare and asks if something is wrong, but Turan tells him it is nothing. Azella calls Turan over, nodding that the most important part of the battle is to absorb the monster's mana, and she welcomes him to the absorption party, to which he agrees. The three gather around the monster's remains and raise their hands. As Turan begins the process, he reflects on how the books were right. Even if multiple people absorb mana at once, the degree of enhancement does not seem to be reduced. Azella stops absorbing mana, frustrated that she has already reached her maximum and complaining about her crappy growth limit, while Marvin reaches his limit soon after. But Turan continues the absorption process naturally, prompting Azella to finally understand why her father sent him along. He possesses incredible spell proficiency and a mana capacity that rivals her own. She is amazed to think he is a noble who hasn't even reached his growth limit yet. As the sun sets, the group returns to the capital. Marvin reflects that they would have never defeated the monster without Turan, crediting him for everything from his tracking ability to the hit that knocked the beast down. Turan asks him to stop, insisting it wasn't anything spectacular. He admits he regrets noticing the monster too late and allowing it to get the first strike, as he did not expect the creature to have a search ability. Marvin asks with surprise if it really had a search ability. Turan says yes, and explains that different abilities seem to awaken depending on the monster's external traits. He points out that the monkey had unusually big hands and big eyes, which were not part of its original form, meaning it probably awakened an ability to throw things with great force and the ability to see far away or through the forest. Marvin is impressed that Turan figured all of that out so quickly, and Turan explains that he looked through a monster encyclopedia at the library earlier. Marvin calls the library a stuffy place where no one goes. Azella mentions she went there once a long time ago out of curiosity, but found the books too difficult and left before reading even half a volume. Turan suggests that the next time she goes, she should ask the librarian if there are any easy books. Azella is confused and asks if there is even someone like that in the library. This reaction leaves Turan feeling confused. Turan heads back to the library and the librarian greets him by name as he enters, making him realize he was careless. He knows that no knight or commoner would ever call a noble by their first name, as everyone in the city uses the term esteemed one. He also thinks that the way she looks does not exactly scream librarian. He asks how she knows his name. The girl looks at him in surprise and then smiles, asking if he only noticed it now. She reveals she learned it from his permit and declares that as long as it is around this library, her gaze can reach anywhere. Turan asks how he should address her, and she says she doesn't really have a name, so he can call her whatever he wants. She suggests something cute like my love, but Turan decides he will just call her librarian. She calls him stiff and notes it is awkward for him to be polite after using her for days, calling her to do this and that, though Turan declares he never did that and tells her not to come so close because it is burdensome. He asks if she is a wizard from the old empire, but she says she was never a person to begin with, explaining she is a kind of spirit and asking if it suits her. She tells him that when a soul inhabits something living, it becomes a living spirit, but when it inhabits something neither alive nor dead, it is a regular spirit. In other words, the library itself is her. This human form is just for comfortable communication based on the user's preference, and she smiles, telling him that his preferences are kind of. Turan tells her not to make stuff up, but she insists she is like a reflection in water. Turan looks at her carefully and places his hand on her belly, but it goes right through it. She asks where he is touching and says it feels weird. Turan apologizes, and she complains about how annoying it is that she cannot directly exert power on intruders. She declares that if she could, she would have punished every last bastard who took books out of the library. Turan notes it seems House Voltas does not know she exists. She explains that until now, there was no one with the qualifications to perceive her. Her creator made it so only those whose type is complete beyond a certain level could see her, and she finds it romantic that only Turan can see her. Turan asks what she means by type, and she explains it is what wizards call a bloodline. He asks if she can tell him about his own bloodline, but she suggests asking his parents, to which Turan reveals he is an orphan. The spirit licks her lips and offers to check for him, saying she only needs his consent to examine his body. Turan asks what she means by that. The spirit laughs and makes a ghostly expression before suddenly sticking her hand into Turan's chest, which also goes right through his body, leaving him stunned. She laughs and notes that they are now connected. Turan tells her not to say weird things but realizes it doesn't hurt. She reveals that while there are a few small bits, the big chunks are the pursuer and hunter bloodlines, asking if that is a trait of House Zahar, and he says yes. However, she notes that there is one more bloodline and says that Turan is mixed. Turan asks what she means by mixed, and she explains he is the result of two people from different bloodlines, though she doesn't know what the other one is because it is still locked. She says a locked bloodline isn't that rare in bloodline combinations, and that it will open naturally as he grows stronger. Turan reflects on his mother, thinking she was far too polite and educated to be a commoner, making him wonder if she was a descendant of some noble with a bloodline so diluted it couldn't hold knight-level mana. He tells the spirit he understands and thanks her, prompting her to tell him to stay one more month if he is truly grateful. From then on, Turan does not read alone. He asks the spirit about the contents of the books and requests explanations, asking if there are really that many invisible substances in the world. The librarian shares knowledge from books that were plundered and vanished thousands of years ago, teaching him that if he makes water float and looks through it, he will be able to see it directly. Turan finds these lessons on the laws of nature to be a treasure beyond measure. He learns that diseases arise from microorganisms and that the decay of living things is caused by the feeding of germs. He also grasps basic principles like the refraction of light, the generation of heat through friction, and the process of how living things get injured and how they heal. Turan decides to experiment with decay. He touches an apple before him and it quickly turns rotten. The librarian asks how his progress is, and Turan calls it incredible. While existing magic can achieve this effect, understanding the scientific principle allows him to consume far less mana. He realizes that simply changing the way he perceives the world has raised his skill as a wizard. He asks if powerful houses are monopolizing knowledge like this, nodding that if every wizard knew it, they would lose their competitive edge. The librarian notes that people's level of knowledge keeps dropping over time and says she now understands why. Turan eventually declares it is time for him to leave. He says that the owner of this place has been openly giving him hints to go. The librarian's spirit begs him to take her with him and tries to hug him, but she passes right through his body and hits the floor. Turan asks if she can even leave the place and she admits she cannot. She begs him to stay, promising to take good care of him, but Turan gently says he will pass. She huffs that he is never going to say he will stay. She encourages him to look around the land for the god's legacy, suggesting there might be spirits out there who know even more than she does. Turan promises to visit from time to time. She tells him to come if he wants to or not, though she is clearly sad to see him go. Turan smiles and says that there are still many books he has yet to read. He finally leaves the city, following a continental map he got from the library. House Zahar's base is in the Enroll Desert, east of Orem. He decides to head toward Zahar to find clues about his parents. As Turan walks, he notes that there is no need to rush. If the clues were going to disappear, they would have vanished sometime over the last 18 years, and if they are still there, arriving a little later will not make them vanish now. He continues to train, kill monsters, and absorb their mana. As he travels through the woods, he suddenly hears a horse neighing. He wonders what is happening and spots a majestic horse with a saddle. Turan realizes that the horse is not attacking the man lying on the ground, but is actually protecting him from attackers. One attacker calls it a demon and asks what kind of pet monster could be that strong. Turan watches closely, wondering if the horse is actually the one being targeted. Suddenly, Turan realizes who the attackers are. They are two dark elves, and one tells the other to try and create an opening somehow, to which the second elf replies that it is easier said than done. One dark elf uses magic as a purple energy spreads out, and monsters start to rise from the ground. Turan realizes this is the dark elf necromancy he read about in a book. He wonders if he should help but hesitates, thinking the man lying there might have been the one who attacked the dark elves first. His eyes widen in shock as he sees one of the dark elves eating a human arm. The first elf asks whose hand that is and tells the other to give her one too, but the second one tells her to eat her own, as she must have already taken some for herself. Turan realizes with disgust that they are cannibals. He activates his stealth magic and becomes invisible while the female dark elf remarks that the men she killed are too hairy. And as the male elf takes his final meal, he is killed by Turan's attack in an instant. The strike is so fast that the female elf cannot even react. The monsters summoned by the now-dead elf vanish. Seeing this, the female elf panics and tells her monsters to gather and protect her, and the beasts immediately surround her. Turan attacks with a rock, but a monster blocks the projectile with its horn. The elf shouts, demanding to know who is there and ordering them to come out, as a buffalo monster charges in his direction and destroys the trees. The elf realizes her attacker is using stealth and declares they will see if he can still hide after this. As she summons a wolf monster, it releases a glowing orange aura that spreads through the area and detects Turan. Turan's magic fades away and he starts becoming visible. The elf also notices him and shouts that she has found the demon. She commands her monsters to kill him and they charge at him. Turan rubs his hands together and creates fire. He releases an explosion of flames at the monsters, which knocks out the wolf monster, but the buffalo remains unharmed. It rushes toward him, and Turan barely dodges the attack, falling to the ground. Turan realizes they are incredibly fast and thinks it is a good thing he took one of the elves out beforehand. Suddenly, Turan feels a sharp pain and looks down to see the wolf monster biting his leg. Turan kicks the beast away and stands up, but as he tries to look for the other monster, the buffalo runs toward him at full speed and sends him flying into a tree. Turan coughs up blood and falls to the ground as he is surrounded by the monsters and the elf. The dark elf laughs and says it serves him right, asking how he dared to kill Kel, and she declares she will make Turan beg to die. However, the horse suddenly strikes the dark elf in the head. The elf's head is crushed, and she screams as the horse continues to trample and kick her. The elf's beasts look back and start attacking the horse, saving the dark elf. The dark elf notes what a humiliation this is and vows to kill Turan, but Turan releases another attack, and this time it connects, blasting off the dark elf's head and killing her instantly. As her body falls to the ground, her summoned monsters also vanish. Turan is completely exhausted and collapses to the ground. He realizes that the fight took a lot out of him. The horse approaches and nuzzles Turan's head. Turan thanks the horse. Later that night, the unconscious man, a blonde-haired youth, wakes up by a campfire. He groans and then jumps up in surprise. He sees Turan sitting across the fire. Turan tells him he is finally awake. The boy asks who Turan is, and Turan explains that he saw him being attacked by dark elves and intervened to save him. The horse approaches the youth and the boy pets it, calling her Tilly. Turan remarks that Tilly is a good horse, nodding that not only did she understand she had to protect her master, but she even knew she needed to move him to a safer place. The boy thanks Turan for saving him and introduces himself as Aziz of House Berg, prompting Turan to give his own name in return. Turan asks if there was any particular reason Aziz came into conflict with the Dark Elves. Aziz explains there wasn't a specific reason. He was simply on a pilgrimage with his retainers when they were suddenly ambushed without provocation. Aziz begins to cry, saying he had heard these other races were savage but never imagined they would be this bad. He sobs for his fallen friends, explaining that the people he lost were very precious to him. Turan asks if they were his family, and Aziz replies that they were the knights and servants who came on the pilgrimage with him, and that they had practically raised him since he was little. Turan notes that Aziz seems like a good person. He asks if Aziz knows how many dark elves attacked because he killed 2 of them, and Aziz says that should be all of them. Turan then uses his search spell and senses the surrounding area. He confirms there are definitely no more dark elves nearby. Aziz asks Turan if he has any urgent business, and Turan says that he is also in the middle of a pilgrimage. Aziz is amazed that someone on a pilgrimage would have so much power, asking if Turan is the child of some great house and wondering why he is traveling alone. Turan replies that it is difficult for him to explain. He claims he is not that strong, saying he only managed to ambush 1 elf and barely fought off the other with the help of the red horse. Turan releases his mana, and Aziz is confused at first but also releases his own mana. They both check each other's power. Turan is shocked to realize the blonde man's amount of mana is incredible. If he hadn't absorbed the dark elf's mana, he would have even less than Aziz. Aziz thinks that, honestly, Turan's raw mana alone is at a level where he would not be overwhelmed by 2 necromancers. Deducing that Turan must be noble-born from a powerful bloodline, and that since he is on a pilgrimage, he probably hasn't even reached his growth limit yet. Aziz wonders why someone like that would be traveling alone. Aziz then asks Turan if, assuming he does not have a fixed destination, it would be all right to invite him to House Berg, promising to repay Turan for saving his life and asking him to safely escort him back to his house. Turan asks what Aziz means by repayment. Aziz gives a large grin and declares that those of House Berg are enchanters and vassals of Arabian, the great house to the north, explaining that they belong to a bloodline that has crafted magic tools for generations. He tells Turan that he will make him the finest magic tool worthy of his skills. Sometime later, they move deep within the forest and bury Aziz's subordinates, who were killed by the Dark Elves. Aziz lets out a quiet sigh and observes that things finally seem to be coming to an end. His voice carries a hint of relief, yet he reflects on a heavier thought, admitting that he would like to send everyone back to their hometowns if he could, but adds that it will be difficult. He turns toward Turan and thanks him, to which Turan glances at him, slightly puzzled, and asks for what. Aziz hesitates before answering that it is because Turan did not mock him. He is a noble, yet he cried at the sacrifices of his subordinates, calling it pathetic. So Turan asks why he would think that is pathetic, and Aziz replies quietly that it is because that is what his father taught him. Those who fall in a righteous battle shall dwell in the heavenly palace with the gods, as he was taught that to grieve for them would be weak, and that a true noble must move forward, standing upon that sacrifice. But if not grieving over a family member's death is strength, then he does not think he could ever become truly strong. Turan listens in silence before a warm smile appears on his face, and he says that it is not a sign of weakness but kindness. Aziz is taken aback, then tries to lighten the mood by suggesting they speak more comfortably since they are going to be traveling together anyway, nodding that the age difference between them is not that great either, and Turan gives a small nod and agrees. Aziz smiles and raises his hand, announcing that he looks forward to working with him as a friend. Turan stands still for a moment, repeating the word friend to himself. He reaches out and holds his hand, telling Aziz that he looks forward to that as well. After some time, Aziz suggests they rest before continuing, so they stop nearby, where Turan points to a box on the ground and asks what it is. Aziz opens the box, which is full of food and wine, identifying it as a cold storage chest, and explaining that he kept several things in it from the last time they were in the city. Turan wonders if the inside is always cold, so Aziz confirms that it is and explains that thanks to it, most foods can be stored for about a week without issue, adding that cold food can be reheated before showing off other tools. He notes that if you press a button on one tool, water comes out, mentions another magic tool that creates shelter from gathered wood, and a third that sounds an alarm when someone approaches. Aziz suddenly looks excited and gestures to his own clothes, explaining that what he is wearing is a magic tool with a self-cleaning function. Turan observes that magic tools are not common items and declares that it is impressive. He says that just one set of clothing alone would be worth saving his life, but Aziz smiles and declares his life is worth way more than that, promising to reward him with far better things when they return to the main house. He adds that if the house won't allow it, he will make them himself. He then changes the subject, nodding that during the time they have traveled together, he has seen so many types of Turan's magic that he has lost count. Listing off animal control, freezing, levitation, liquid manipulation, enhancement, luminescence, restraint, instant death, terrain transformation, and lightning strikes. He asks Turan if he spent his whole life practicing magic, or if he has a bloodline ability that lets him master any magic he wants. Turan narrows his eyes and mentally notes that he just can't. He reminds Aziz they agreed not to pry into families, so Aziz quickly laughs and says he was just kidding, claiming there is no way such a bloodline ability even exists. He then asks how old Turan is, nodding he does not look older than 30 but wondering if he has lived for 80 years, and Turan answers that he has about a month left until his birthday and turns 18 this year. Aziz is completely shocked. He reveals that he is turning 43 this year, but then chuckles and says a 25-year difference is not that important to them. Aziz crosses his arms and says he should have known Turan had that much magic power to take down 2 wraith sorcerers, adding he was not expecting there to be 2 geniuses like him in the world, leading Turan to ask, too. Aziz explains the other person is close and has an incredible bloodline, revealing that the other genius is his cousin. Turan asks if he can ask that person to make magic tools for him, but Aziz says no because she is from the main house. Turan wonders about the main house, as Aziz explains she is a princess of Arabian and might even become the head of a great house someday. After that, they start walking. He explains that unlike ordinary wizard houses, heads of great houses do not easily pass positions to their own children. Because in a great house, there are dozens of relatives in the same generation, and naturally at least one of them is usually stronger than the head's own child. Yet among the head's children, Mesa was born with the greatest talent. After awakening her magic power, Mesa mastered all manner of combat magic in just 10 years. Turan is surprised as Aziz adds that as a result, she received the full support of her house, and now at only 21 she is almost on the same level as the core members of the house. Turan thinks about how much power she has at that age and asks if the house performed a funeral. Aziz says that is right and explains that when their eldest granduncle passed, his magic power was devoured by Mesa, though they naturally received portions as well. Turan realizes it is clear there is a good reason the great houses maintain their supremacy. Aziz points ahead, nodding that it seems they are almost there. Turan looks up and Aziz explains that this is the Dakin Plains, the central territory of Arabian. They eventually arrive at Zavillan, the territory of House Berg. As they enter the mansion, a woman rushes out and asks Aziz what on earth is happening. Aziz shouts "Mom" and embraces her, starting to cry. Turan watches, mentally nodding that Aziz is 43 and yet reacts this way. A man with a beard approaches and tells Aziz to mind his dignity and at least address her as mother. So Aziz apologizes and then introduces Turan as a new friend from the south who risked his life to save him, stating that without him, he wouldn't have made it back here alive. The mother says this pilgrimage route wasn't supposed to be that dangerous and asks what happened, so Aziz reveals they were attacked by dark elf wraith sorcerers. She is furious and calls them filthy wretches, declaring she will take an army and tear them to shreds. The man from before calls her the house head and tells her to compose herself because people are watching. He then asks Turan which house he belongs to, and Turan replies that he is afraid he cannot say. The man asks if he cannot, and Turan admits he does not really know, explaining he was born to a commoner mother and does not know who his father is. Aziz is shocked and asks why he never told him about that, but Turan replies it is not something worth boasting about. The head of Berg looks at Turan of the unknown house and declares that since he saved her child, she shall see that he is properly rewarded. She tells him it is difficult to offer him a room there, but says she will arrange for him to stay at the finest inn in the city, making Aziz frustrated as he asks his mother if they shouldn't host him at home. She explains that would normally be fine, but they have an important guest staying with them now. Regardless of the circumstances, it is difficult to bring in a stranger of unknown origin, and she hopes he understands. A voice suddenly speaks up, telling the aunt she does not need to worry about her, as surely the person who saved Aziz would not suddenly try to assassinate her. A woman dressed in black appears. Aziz realizes it is Mesa and asks what she is doing here all of a sudden. Turan observes the Princess of Arabian, thinking she looks more like a corpse in her current state. Mesa explains that she is there to hide because she was nearly assassinated by Zahor's vermin. Aziz is shocked that an assassination attempt happened at the main house. Given how fortified that place is, he asks if there could be an insider. Mesa replies that there is probably an insider because the main house does not just have one or two people with questionable loyalties. She declares she is tired and retires first, saying good evening to everyone. After that, Aziz's mother calls her maid named Ina and tells her to show Turan the second best guest room in the house. The next day, Turan opens his eyes on a bed in the grand guest room. After resting, he walks through the hallway where he meets Aziz again. Aziz notes that Turan is up early as usual and asks what he is doing alone in the hallway. Turan points to a magic lantern on the wall and says he finds it interesting, so Aziz says he makes those every now and then for practice and tells Turan he can have one. After hearing this, Turan says he is not that interested. Suddenly, a massive flash of lightning rumbles through the windows, lighting up the hall. Turan looks at it in confusion, while Aziz explains it is Mesa practicing magic and notes she is always diligent. Turan asks if that was Arabian bloodline magic, and Aziz confirms it is the Storm bloodline. He admits he has never hated his own bloodline but says he is a little envious, as she looks like she is becoming a literal god. Turan is curious and wonders about how strong the next Arabian leader is. Aziz asks if he wants to take a look, but Turan says he is curious yet does not think it is a good idea for a suspicious outsider like him to approach. Aziz asks why that matters since he is not an assassin. He insists he can vouch for him and admits he is curious about who is stronger between Turan and Mesa. Turan says he thinks that is the real reason Aziz brought him there. Aziz laughs and says that, to tell the truth, he has been holding a grudge for a few years and wants to see Mesa frustrated for once. They go to the training grounds where Mesa is standing. Aziz calls out to her. She turns and asks Aziz who is beside him, so Turan introduces himself. Mesa repeats the name, remembering him from last night, and asks what brings them there. Aziz says they saw her practicing magic, so they thought they would join in just like they did in the past. But Mesa reminds Aziz that last time he stormed out crying after she learned something in 2 tries that took him a whole week, which makes Turan laugh. Aziz looks back at him and he quickly apologizes for laughing. Aziz asks Turan if he is mocking him too and then turns to Mesa. He declares Turan has magic talent second to none and suggests they have a duel. Mesa repeats the word duel and looks at Turan with a silent stare. Her eyes glow blue as her mana surges. Turan looks up at the sky where the weather has turned dark and a lightning storm descends. As she releases more mana, it becomes more terrifying, making her look like a monster. Turan's body stiffens under the sheer weight of her pressure and his eyes go wide. After it is over, Turan is left panting and sweating from the intensity. After a moment of silence, Mesa looks at him and says she hates to say this, but she does not think Turan is a match for her. Mesa is sorry to say this, but it looks like it will be a bit difficult for him to duel her. Turan stays silent while he stares at her with a focused and determined expression. Aziz steps in with a wide grin and tells her that, in terms of magical power, he certainly would be no match for her. However, he adds that what is truly incredible about this guy is his ability to learn magic. He puts a hand on Turan's shoulder and declares that he is a genius unlike any he has seen in his entire life. Aziz looks at her and asks if even Mesa herself probably does not reach that level of talent. She replies that since Aziz is praising him so much, they should see what he is capable of doing. Turan looks back at her and suggests a new method for their competition. He asks how about they each show a magic that the other probably does not know, and whoever can perform it faster wins. Aziz turns to her and says that it is a good method before asking for her thoughts. She heard Turan does not even know the magic of his own bloodline yet. She explains that it would be unfair if she used her innate magic, so she decides to leave that out of the duel. She tells them she will start first and steps forward on the training ground. Mesa taps the stone floor with her foot and creates a small sprout that bursts through the floor. Turan and Aziz watch as the tiny plant begins to grow rapidly and turn into massive vines that coil around the entire courtyard. Aziz shouts in terror as the vines wrap around him and lift him high into the air. He hangs upside down, while Mesa looks at Turan and identifies the spell as plant creation and manipulation magic, asking if he can do it. Aziz screams and begs to be let go because he is getting dizzy, but she ignores him and tells him to stay like that for a moment because it is fun. Turan reflects on the principles of magic while he looks at the vines. Fire creation magic is merely the manifestation of the phenomenon of burning, and water creation magic is simply the act of extracting invisible moisture from the air. Turan crouches down and places his hand flat against the hard stone floor. He thinks to himself that these vines are the same way, as the magic involves forcing seeds already planted in the ground to sprout rapidly. He realizes that, in other words, it is not creation, but rather growth. He tells the seed to grow, and a bright blue pulse of mana flows around it. In a split second, several blue vines explode from the floor and weave around Turan. Mesa watches with a shocked expression as the plants follow Turan's will perfectly. Aziz is shocked too. She realizes that given Turan told the plant to grow, he has independently discovered the true nature of this magic. She asks him if he happened to see this magic used somewhere before, to which Turan replies that it is his first time ever seeing it. Mesa HMPH and notes that the things Aziz said today actually turned out to be right for once, which is rare. She releases her magic, and Aziz falls to the ground, groaning in pain. She stands firm and tells Turan that now it is his turn to propose the challenge to her. Turan thinks to himself that using the Zahar's bloodline magic would be suicidal here. Suddenly, he remembers something and he reaches his hand out toward the tall grass. From the grass, a small rat appears and runs toward him. She watches it and asks with doubt if it is just animal control magic and if this is the best he can do. He catches a small rat and holds it tightly in his hand. He tells her it is hardly that and explains that this little guy here is just the ingredient for his magic. He uses his magic, he grips the rat as blue energy begins to pulse around the animal's struggling body. Its life force is drained and its body withers away. The rat turns into a dried husk within Turan's hand. He holds out the dead animal and declares that he is done with his magic. She looks on with a serious face before announcing that now it is her turn. She gestures with her finger and a second rat runs toward her. She grabs it and tries to use the same magic Turan used, but nothing happens to the rat. She closes her eyes and concentrates as she realizes this is not ordinary magic and wonders how he did that anyway. Aziz looks at the scene and asks why Turan would use that kind of disgusting magic. Turan admits that it was just the first thing that came to mind when he was asked. He looks at her and wonders if even a great family like the Arabian house does not know this principle well. Aziz tells her that it seems it is not working and suggests they just give the victory to Turan. Mesa tells him to shut up and asks him if he thinks she cannot do this. When using magic, the causality factor is an extremely complex element. If the phenomenon one intends to cause is something natural, the magic is more efficient. If the user clearly recognizes the cause of the magical phenomenon and the amount of mana is adequate, the spell succeeds. Among these, the capacity to perceive the cause of the phenomenon is an important factor that simultaneously influences the success rate and mana consumption. She just needs a little more time. One of the ways to compensate for the lack of causality is to invest a large amount of mana, filling the inefficiency with volume. Mesa tells the rat to rot while it is still alive. Suddenly, the rat in her hand shrieks as its skin turns to rot. The creature is turned into a mummified husk exactly like the one Turan created. Aziz notes that it worked. She huffs and says in a tired voice that she really did it. Suddenly, she feels a sharp wave of exhaustion and her vision begins to blur. She collapses to the ground while Aziz screams her name and runs to help her. Turan and Aziz crouch beside her as they look at her unconscious form. Turan wonders what the reason could be and if she used too much mana during the spell. He reflects that people don't usually faint just from depleting their mana alone. At most, she should suffer from exhaustion since she lost even the strength needed to support her own body. He looks at her hand and realizes the problem, identifying that she is suffering from a lack of physical nutrients. Turan lifts her in his arms and asks Aziz if there is no mage with a healing bloodline around here to assist them. Aziz tells him that there isn't anyone like that nearby. Turan tells Aziz to have them bring water and salt to the ladies' room and bring the adults as well. As he carries her, he realizes that she is so light that he almost confuses her for a lamb rather than a person. Even the mana she used to barely sustain a body that shouldn't even be able to stand has been exhausted. After some time, Mesa opens her eyes and Aziz's mother, her auntie, rushes into Mesa's bedroom and screams her name, asking if she is conscious. Mesa asks why she is here. The woman explains that Aziz told her that she suddenly fainted while training magic with the guest. Mesa remembers what happened. The woman asks her if it is true and wonders if that man happened to do something to her. Mesa declares that no and says it was not his fault at all. She explains that it was just a small mistake on her part and that's all there is to it. Mesa begs everyone to leave because her head is throbbing with pain. The aunt stays for a second to tell her she made some soup and places the bowl on the bedside table. The aunt tells Mesa that she knows she does not eat because of magic, but says she needs to think about her health too. She tells her to try to eat at least a little before she finally leaves the room. Mesa watches her aunt go and then says a soft thank you. She then looks at the bowl and lifts it. She takes a spoonful of the warm soup and eats it. But she is struck by a terrifying memory of her mother and sister getting attacked. She remembers them crying out for her to save them because they believed she could do it. Mesa groans in pain and drops the bowl, and it shatters when it hits the floor, and she tries to calm herself. Meanwhile, Turan is sent to lock up in the Berg family basement and finds himself at the temple of the limping goddess. He stares at the giant winged statue in the golden light of the basement. A guard dressed in black draws his sword and tells Turan that both the doors and the walls are solid without a single crack, and he thinks they are like muscles trained for hundreds of years. He tells him to give up on any thought of trying to break in and leave. This man is Haram Berg. Turan tells him that he understands and he was not even thinking about doing such a thing. Haram tells him that it is very solid and Turan says yes, but Haram comes closer and says extremely. Turan wonders if the guard is currently bragging to him. Haram suddenly performs a swift swing with his longsword and Turan's eyes follow the movement. He gets curious and asks Haram what he is doing. Haram replies he is training. Haram moves his body in a rhythmic flow, performing a series of strikes and steps. Turan watches closely and observes that there was no movement wasted. Each movement was the minimum preparation to apply the next force in his strike. Turan asks himself if this could be the efficiency of a truly trained body. Haram stops his training and looks at Turan. Turan quickly apologizes, asking if he interrupted him. Haram says no and asks him what he saw in his movement just now. Haram gets extremely close to Turan's face and waits for his answer. Turan declares that he thought it was incredible. The guard steps back and explains that most nobles consider martial arts insignificant because it is easier to attack from afar with magic. It is all because their physical bodies are weak and their minds cannot dominate their bodies and rely on cheap tricks. Turan says that unless it is a bloodline specialized in physical combat, like the Hercules strength bloodline, focusing on magical power ends up being a more efficient decision for them. However, he adds that when going through trials, situations eventually arise that you must face even if you want to avoid them. After that, Haram holds his sword out to Turan and tells him to hold it. Turan asks him if he really wants to give a weapon to a suspicious person like himself, even though he was sent to lock him up here. Haram smiles and says it does not matter, this weapon is just a piece of iron. He explains that what makes it a sword is the body of the one wielding it, and tells him that he cannot cut him with his weak body anyway. Turan grips the sword in hand and wonders what he could even do with this sword. Haram looks at him. Turan's entire body erupts with a massive aura of blue flame and mana. The intense power radiates from Turan as he holds the sword and stares directly at Haram. Turan flares his massive blue mana, holding the iron sword firmly in his hand. Haram looks at him and shouts that it is not right, telling him to stop pouring mana into the weapon. Turan simply replies with an all right and suppresses his energy. Haram steps closer and starts adjusting Turan's posture manually. He commands him to put more weight on his front legs and press down so the earth bears the blow. He tells Turan that his elbow is rising too much and warns that with such weak elbows, he cannot overcome the sword's weight. He adds that at this rate, his thigh will get pierced through by an opponent. He tells Turan to raise his arm and orders him not to set his own limits. Turan replies, "Yes, sir." Haram nods and tells him that was good, ordering 10 repetitions next. He tells him not to stop his breathing and instructs him to breathe directly into his muscles. The seasoned guard observes that Turan is a fine vessel, and if possible, he needs to make time to wring that body dry. Haram declares that mana is mere parlor tricks. He claims that wizards mistakenly assume their physical abilities are guaranteed, but says that is only the minimum function your body possesses. He tells Turan that a properly trained body tears through the battlefield without the need for mana, and insists he needs to understand that difference. Turan huffs from the effort and says he will bear that in mind. Suddenly, Turan turns his gaze as the heavy doors of the temple open and spots Asiz's mother entering the room. She bows her head deeply and asks for a pardon, telling Turan she has done something unforgivable to their benefactor. Turan remains composed and suggests he is the one who should apologize, guessing the young lady was unharmed. As a guest, his conduct was inappropriate. The head of House Berg explains that Mesa wanted to give him a proper apology, and she asks him if he would happen to have some free time. Later, Turan finds himself alone with Mesa in a grand parlor. She stands by a large window and reflects that this situation is troublesome, saying she heard Turan was trapped in the temple because of her. She tells him she is sorry for causing such unnecessary commotion. He walks toward her and says it was necessary, declaring he is just glad she is safe. She looks at him and asks about the magic from yesterday, specifically the one that makes animals rot, wondering if that is an undisclosed bloodline magic. She tells him the mana consumption was absurdly high and asks if he lied to her about it. Turan says no and explains that, if she understands the principle, she should be able to use it easily as well. She hums and notes it seems he won't teach it for free, but if he doesn't reveal the method, there is no proof it isn't bloodline magic, is there? Turan declares he does not particularly mind whether he wins or not. She looks confused and asks what he means, declaring that if things end like this, it would make her look bad as the Princess of Arabian. She offers a deal, proposing that if he tells her the secret of that magic, she will teach him one of Arabian's secret arts in return. Turan smiles and says he has no objections in that case. He starts explaining the logic, stating that basically the root is bioenhancement magic. He asks if she used microorganisms no one can see, and she confirms this is correct. She is shocked, realizing it is no wonder the efficiency was so high since she did not know about those hidden factors. She sighs in irritation and admits the loss was hers. Although she succeeded at the end of their duel, it was done through brute force. Turan suggests that he considered that part of the wager, but Mesa insists that is not right. She claims that when discussing magic skills, they do not include the amount of mana recklessly poured out. A little embarrassed, she asks if he can tell Aziz that it was a draw, as she does not want to see Aziz getting cocky about winning. Turan understands. She then decides to give him his compensation and picks up a comb. She demonstrates by rubbing the comb against a surface and explains that when objects rub like this, they attract each other. She looks at Turan with confidence and starts explaining why, but he interrupts her and declares this is static electricity. Her expression goes completely blank in shock as she asks him if he already knew about it, and Turan confirms he did. She mutters that this alone was considered one of their quite profound secret arts, and tells Turan she will think a bit more about how to repay him, since she needs to find what he does not know. She suggests that until sufficient compensation comes to mind, they should train together from now on. She quickly adds that this is just to repay her debt, and not because she particularly needs him around. Turan gives a warm smile and agrees, suggesting that starting tomorrow, they should meet in the garden in the evening. The scene shifts to a massive dining hall filled with incredible amounts of gourmet food. Aziz's mother tells him the table isn't much, but asks him to eat to his full. Aziz looks at the feast and asks why she prepared it so lavishly, nodding he hasn't seen things like this even on his birthday, adding that anyone who sees this would think the Lord of Arabian himself had visited. The mother tells him to be quiet. Turan looks at the table and notes there is no way this is an ordinary meal. The head of house turns back to Turan and brings up their earlier talk. She asks if it is true her son promised a powerful magic tool as the price of his life. Turan confirms this is correct. The mother asks if Turan has something specific in mind. He wants something that aids in defense. He explains that while it is easy to harm others with magic, protecting oneself is difficult. If possible, it should be able to protect from surprise attacks. The mother says she has made similar items before, so it should not be difficult. However, she notes they do not have anything ready immediately. Aziz speaks up and asks if he may make the item for Turan, but the mother tells him that if he is thinking of dragging House Berg's honor through the mud, he should stop. Aziz's brother Milo raises his hand and says he will make it, stating he just finished a commission from the main house and has free time. The mother asks how he intends to make it. Milo explains that for defense against surprise attacks, something Turan can carry at all times would be best. He will embed mana into jewelry like rings, earrings, or necklaces to create a function that draws out a guardian bloodline's defensive power. The mother notes that is acceptable and asks for the time frame. Milo answers 1 month. The mother mentions that while nothing is more unseemly than a parent bragging about their child, Milo is already a skilled wizard not far behind her. Turan realizes the gravity of the gift, thinking that a magic tool made by the head wizard of an enchanter's house over a full month is a bit excessive. He speaks up, expressing his appreciation but wondering if it is too much. The mother asks if it is excessive, then asks if it means her son's life is worth that little. It isn't excessive at all. She then orders Turan to stay as a guest at their house for the next month. She tells him to make himself at home and stay comfortably. The next morning, Turan and Aziz walk through the bustling streets of Zavillan. Aziz notes that it seems his mother has taken quite a liking to him. Aziz admits he talked more about Turan to her before bed, mentioning his talent and the fact that he never neglects his training. He reveals that originally she wanted to look down on him as just a wandering noble without backing, but her views shifted. Turan observes that it sounds like she is trying to recruit him into their house. Aziz confirms this, explaining that she gives generously, puts people in debt, and then introduces a pretty young lady as a way to tempt them. He mentions several adults in the house joined that way. Turan notes this is troubling. Aziz tells him not to worry and says the magic tool is just something nice to buy favor. He assures Turan he won't be forced into marriage even if he wants the magic tool, claiming his mother is not so lacking in refinement. He then asks what Turan has for the rest of the day. Turan explains he promised to train with Lady Mesa in the evening and asks if there is anything the matter. Hearing evening, Aziz says there is still quite a bit of time until then. He pulls Turan toward a different area, telling him to patrol with him instead. He promises Zavillan may not be the capital, but there is plenty to enjoy. He jokes, asking if Turan was planning to hole up in a corner practicing magic on a day like this. Turan admits that actually he was. Aziz tells him life is too short not to enjoy it, my friend, and drags him along. Aziz takes Turan to a casino with roulette tables and card games, but Turan refuses it. Later, they visit a lively bar for drinks and he still refuses. They wander through the market of the city. Suddenly, Turan stops and stares at the posters on a wall. His eyes widen in shock as he looks at the drawn face and thinks about Kjorn. He asks himself if it could truly be that Kjorn. After that, they go to see a drama where blades clash as they tell a story. It was the year 2195 when the warriors of Arabian ventured into that demon desert. And there was a knight named Kjorn who defeated the enemy with God's help after a hard-fought battle. Turan and Aziz applaud at the end. Aziz asks Turan if it was worth watching, and he answers that it was very good. He remembers Kjorn saying he is merely an ordinary knight and thinks his humility is unmatched. He vows that someday when he meets Kjorn, he must ask if that story is really true. Early the next morning, Turan opens his eyes and sees Haram staring at him. Haram asks if his body rested well. Turan says yes and asks what brings the man there. Haram says he noticed yesterday that Turan's vessel is quite good. He declares it is toughening time and commands Turan to follow him. Turan asks if they are going to train, and Haram says the body does not grow stronger by lying around, but only when it is being tempered. He asks Turan if he does not want to do it. Turan agrees to go, thinking he will gain more that way than just playing. Aziz suddenly bursts into the room, shouting Turan's name and saying he heard there was a really fantastic performance today. He sees his uncle Haram Berg and is surprised. Haram looks at him and says they are heading to training. He tells Aziz that he must also temper that weak body of his and asks if he will come. But Aziz backs away with a terrified expression and lies, saying he was just out and came back now, so he has not recovered yet. He runs away at full speed. Turan watches him go and wonders why he is acting like that. But he soon finds out the reason as he is forced into a heavy weightlifting session. Haram looms over him as Turan push-ups massive plates. He tells him not to hear his body's cry and demands one more. Turan groans in agony. Haram scolds him, saying that if he yields after barely this much pain, then his mind is being dominated by his body's weakness. He commands one last repetition as Turan's muscles tremble. Finally, Haram says that is enough and lets him stop. Turan collapses on the floor, gasping for air. Haram asks if it is tiring and Turan gasps yes. Haram says Turan is fortunate because since he is a wizard, doing this once is enough. Turan wonders if it is different if you are not a wizard. Haram explains that an ordinary body weakens again over time even after being tempered once and needs constant trials to maintain it in that case. However, wizards have mana maintaining their bodies in optimal condition, so once forged into steel, it does not weaken. He smiles at Turan and declares he must be fully rested now. Turan looks at him in shock and tries to say he is still, but Haram's expression turns dark as he says he knows Turan's body does not lie. He shouts that Turan has rested enough and now he will teach him weaponry and combat. Turan screams in exhaustion as the training intensifies. The following days at House Berg were fulfilling indeed. He wakes up early to train with Haram in a special space where the body becomes several times heavier than usual. One misstep and you'll be buried in the floor. In the evening, he returned to the mansion to repeat magic training with Mesa. She shows him how to use finger friction to generate electricity as golden lightning crackles between her hands. And before he knew it, 3 weeks had passed. Turan tries to fire a bolt of lightning at a target, but it misses. Mesa watches from behind and notes he is struggling more than expected. Turan smiles and says it is because he isn't from Arabian. She admits it is hard for her to help too, nodding she never thought of aiming lightning magic in that way. She asks if it doesn't hit just if you shoot it, but Turan explains it is harder than one may think. Suddenly someone shouts Lady Mesa, and a man comes near them. That man looks at Turan and asks who he is. Mesa looks at the man coldly and says it is none of his business, asking what brings him there. She reminds him she told the main house that no one should approach her while she is recovering. He reveals that the patriarch has summoned her. She asks what it is and tells him to answer quickly, warning him to prepare himself to be punished if it's a trivial reason. The knight reveals the emergency, announcing that dark elves have been rampaging extensively in the south. He reports that 3 cities have already fallen, and the main house will assemble an expedition force. Mesa orders the messenger to tell them she will return shortly, and the messenger bows to her, accepts his order, and leaves. She turns to Turan and tells him she thinks she needs to go. She pauses for a second and reflects that before she leaves, she should collect payment for Turan's disgusting decomposition magic. She suddenly gets an idea and claps her hands. She looks Turan in the eye and asks him if he knows that electricity flows through the human body as well. Turan is confused by this question and asks if electricity can really flow through the human body, which prompts Mesa to smirk. She declares that there is no way he would know, as this is a secret of House Arabian. She suggests considering his debt paid if she teaches this to him properly, saying it will definitely be a great help, and Turan agrees. Mesa explains the fundamental theory, telling him that when a person sees or feels something, that specific part of the body sends a tiny electrical signal to the brain. She details that if it comes from the eyes, it travels from the eyes to the brain, and if it is a smell, it moves from the nose. Turan shuts his eyes to focus while he mentally traces these pathways. He realizes that a tiny electrical signal indeed flows through the entire body. If he can accelerate those signals transmitted through those pathways, he will achieve something incredible. He focuses on this tiny electrical signal more. And opening his eyes now, he can clearly notice those signals. A butterfly flies between them, and he can see its movements in slow motion and in more detail. She asks if he is able to do it and how it feels. He is impressed by this, wondering how this works and what it is. However, the effort causes a sharp strain, and Turan gasps while clenching his forehead. Mesa laughs softly at his success, explaining he feels that way because he poured out his mana so recklessly. She mentions that while it will be hard to adjust now because of the headache, once he gets used to it, he will be able to maintain it for quite a while. He reflects on the value of the technique and states that no matter how much he thinks about it, this lesson seems far too valuable compared to what he gave her. She begins to float into the air and tells him to think of it as a simple investment since he seems to have talent. If he ends up learning an even more incredible spell in the future, she will collect it all back along with what he owes her now. She disappears into the distance while he watches her go in silence. The scene shifts to the Morgan City Center at the heart of the Daking Plains, where knights and wizards of Arabian are gathered. A massive crowd of local people is cheering with slogans like "Glory to Arabian" and "Long live Arabian." Aziz remarks that even though it is just a departure ceremony to hunt dark elves, it feels more like a victory parade because of the enthusiasm. He suddenly spots Mesa on horseback and waves his arms, shouting for her to look over there. His father grabs his arm and tells him to maintain his composure as a noble. Suddenly, someone shouts that the head of the house is entering. A tall figure walks through the cheering crowds. Turan looks at the man and identifies him as the current head of the Arabian house, known as Battle Arabian. He says that the head of the house does not look well at all and asks Aziz if he is always so pale, wondering if his health could be failing. Aziz recalls rumors that the Lord was severely injured while fighting the head of the Zahar house in the past, but since that was a long time ago, perhaps it is just because of his old age. Battle Arabian reaches his hand toward the sky, and people look at him and look up at the sky, and the blue light turns dark and gloomy as storm clouds gather instantly. A massive surge of golden lightning explodes through the clouds with a deafening rumble. The commoners start praying to the Lord of Thunder to protect his descendants. Turan looks at the sky and realizes this is the true power of Arabian. Even with his body in such poor condition, he easily covers the entire area, showing the absolute pinnacle of magic reached by a human. With determination, he thinks that one day he will reach that level as well. Sometime later, back in the workshop of House Berg, Milo holds out a leather-bound metal bracelet and says, "Here you go." He explains that just wearing it increases his physical stamina a bit, but if he injects mana, that level increases even further. Milo details that at its limit, it reaches a level similar to the nobles of the Guardian bloodline, but warns it consumes a lot of mana, so he should not maintain it for too long. Turan holds the magic tool and declares it is truly an incredible treasure. He notes that an object like this would not be common even among the great houses, and calls it an exceptionally well-made item. Aziz's mother says his name and asks if he has any interest in formally joining their house. Turan remains polite and says he is very grateful for the offer but thinks that would be difficult. The mother sighs and notes she already heard stories from Aziz. She reflects that since Turan has a lot to do, he would have a hard time settling down in one place. She tells him to consider her offer as an old woman's lingering attachments. Turan bows his head and declares he will never forget the hospitality he received. He says Aziz and the Berg family will be his friends forever. She nods and says yes, that is enough. As Turan prepares to depart and leave the house, Haram Berg and Aziz meet him. Haram throws a blade at him and tells Turan to take it. He explains it is a magical device with no major functions, but notes it is durable and the blade is quite sharp. Turan takes the weapon and thanks his master. Hearing the word master makes Haram proud. He gives a stern and wide smile and starts walking away. Aziz walks up and throws a heavy cloak over Turan's shoulders. Turan asks what this is, and Aziz asks if he wasn't jealous of his clothes before. He reveals it is a shirt and some pants made into magic items that do not get dirty easily and mend themselves if lightly torn. Turan smiles at him, and Aziz tells him that Turan is a good friend, not just because he saved his life, but because spending time together and seeing the way he lives gave him a lot to think about. He asks where Turan is planning to go now, and Turan says he will head east first. Aziz mentions Carmine is over there and shakes his head, advising him that if he can avoid it, he should not take a ship. He complains that the waves are truly the worst, and even the wine glasses end up dancing. Turan smiles to himself, thinking he would have to brave those waves to reach the land of Zahar in the Elril Desert, but notes he cannot say that out loud. Aziz tells him that someone as stubborn as he won't starve to death anywhere, telling him to return safely and pay him back for the cloak. Turan says yeah and leaves. He begins his trek through the tall grass. He reflects on being alone again as he walks with a large bag on his back. He decides to test the efficiency of his training. Turan activates his movement magic and takes a single step. He moves so fast that people do not even see him. To them, they only feel a gust of wind as he continues his journey. He covers an immense distance, passing through villages and cities and dashing through forests. After a long time, he comes to a stop. He is in a jungle looking up at a mountain and smells something. He first thinks that it is the smell of a campfire, but quickly realizes it is something far more disgusting, like the smell of burning flesh. His eyes go wide as he reaches that location. He enters a destroyed town and is shocked by what he finds, seeing ruins and wooden debris covering the ground. He walks through the town and sees rows of mutilated corpses of men tied to posts. He wonders if they could have been attacked by bandits because those dark elves should not have come this far. He looks at the surrounding area, and while investigating a ruined structure, he spots something. It is a basement entrance. He approaches it and looks at it, thinking that it is here. He grabs the doors of the basement and yanks them open. He looks into the darkness, and what he sees shocks him. A young girl is sitting in the corner. She cries and screams in fear. He jumps down, holding up a hand and telling her to wait, declaring that he is not an enemy and came to help. The girl looks up with tear-filled eyes and asks if he is telling the truth. He replies yes and asks if she can tell him what happened, while the child weeps and claims that a wizard killed everyone. Turan asks if she means a wizard. But before the girl can answer, she collapses from exhaustion. He lifts her and reflects that fortunately it is nothing serious, as she is likely just exhausted from being trapped for so long. He decides he needs to get this child somewhere safe first. As he begins to carry her out, an arrow made of solidified blue mana is aimed directly at him. A group of warriors is surrounding him, and a girl wizard holding a magic bow glares at him with rage, calling him a murderous bastard and telling him to get on his knees. But Turan just stands there holding the unconscious child, not understanding what is happening. Turan stands perfectly still in the charred remains of the village, carefully holding the unconscious child as a group led by a blonde female archer surrounds him. The female archer pulls back the string of her shimmering blue mana bow and shouts for Turan to get on his knees immediately. She glares at him with pure hatred, calling him a damn murderer. Her voice trembles with rage as she asks if this massacre was not already enough for him, that he is even trying to kidnap a little child, and shouts for him not to move another inch. A knight behind her begins to manifest fire magic and threatens that if Turan moves even slightly, he will kill him, as his hands tremble while he struggles to control his magical energy. Turan stays calm and tells them to wait, explaining that what they are seeing and thinking is simply just a misunderstanding. Suddenly, the nervous knight who is struggling to control his magical energy loses his control completely and accidentally releases a massive torrent of flames directly toward Turan and the young girl. A deafening explosion rocks the site, sending a pillar of fire and smoke into the sky. The woman turns her head and screams at the man, Gil, calling him an idiot because there was a child standing there. While Gil panics and tries to explain that it was an accident, saying he was just so nervous that he lost control. She notices something and looks up as the smoke clears and a shocking sight greets them. Turan remains standing without a single scratch on himself or the child, protected by a glowing blue shield from his bracelet. He looks down at the magic tool and mentally notes that he did not think he would have to use this so soon. The knights are frozen in awe, asking if he actually blocked the magic with just his physical body and how he does not have a single burn mark. The blonde woman wonders what kind of defensive magic he is using, or if it is a specific bloodline ability. Turan declares with a cold and stern tone that he is not the one who attacked this village, telling them again that this is all a misunderstanding. However, his patience reaches its limit, and he warns them that if they attack him again, he won't just defend himself next time. Sensing the sheer density of his mana, she lowers her bow and stops her aggression, reflecting that his explanation makes sense as there would be no reason for a person to cause such a tragedy and then stay behind just to save a child. The archer introduces herself as Bison and asks for his name, so he tells them his name is Turan. Bison notes that even if the circumstantial evidence says otherwise, she finds it hard to believe him yet. Turan points toward the child he is carrying and suggests they ask her the details when she eventually wakes up, nodding that it seems she saw the real culprit. Bison looks shocked and repeats the words, asking if the girl actually saw the arsonist, while Turan looks confused and asks what she means by the arsonist. Bison is surprised by his lack of knowledge and asks if he really does not know who the arsonist is, to which Turan replies that he does not. She explains that the arsonist is the mad mage who committed this atrocity. For the past few months, this killer has been periodically attacking isolated villages, tying up residents and burning them alive. She reveals that because there are never any survivors, they do not even know his gender, and all they know about this person is that people refer to him as the arsonist. Eventually, the little girl wakes up and confirms Turan's innocence to the group, telling them that the man who attacked was wearing a red cloak and had a messy beard. She says he had a very scary look, describing him as looking like a lumberjack, and after hearing this, the group finally realizes their mistake. They are overcome with shame for attacking an innocent person. Bison and the others bow their heads, stating she is sorry and admitting they were rude because they were so impatient. She tells Turan it was clearly her mistake to point a weapon at him, and Gil says he is sorry too. Turan watches them and reflects that even among nobles, some let their sense of duty override their reason, remembering that Midden was an honest and good leader. Turan looks at the group and tells them that since they are concerned about the child's health above all else, that is all that matters, and he forgives them. He then asks them if they originally came here to capture the arsonist. Bison says yes and explains that they had arrived at the site of a fresh fire, and when they saw him they thought they had finally caught the culprit, but notes it turned out like this. She declares that now that they have a proper description, they will catch him soon because they have a natural tracker among them. Turan is curious about this person and asks for clarification. Since they have a tracker with them, he asks if they are from the Zahar family and why they are in a place like this. Bison quickly raises her hand and replies that no, they are not from the Zahar family. She tells him her full name is Bison Carmine, stating she comes from the Carmine family, and these are her friends from their vassal families. She gestures to her gray-haired teammate and explains her identity, nodding that Asha is a descendant of someone whose ancestors mixed blood with a Zahar noble. Bison explains that Asha's bloodline manifested weakly, but it allows her to be quite good at tracking magic despite having no talent for concealment, and in the family, they refer to it as a primitive bloodline. Bison says that since all misunderstandings have been resolved, she has a serious request for Turan, asking if he could help them hunt down the arsonist. To sweeten the deal, she offers him the entire reward for the Mad Mage's capture and even promises to give him her own share of the mana they would absorb, telling him that all she needs is to earn the merit for completing the mission. Turan asks if she knows the power level of this arsonist since she has never seen him before, and Bison warns him that the man is definitely a noble-level mage. She mentions that some of the villages he attacked were protected by several knights, yet all of them were killed. Turan narrows his eyes since this arsonist not only killed so many normal people, but also killed several knights. There is no doubt that this arsonist is strong and could very well be a noble-level mage, just like Bison is saying. He mentally reflects on how the weak demonic beasts along the road do not increase his strength anymore, and considers that maybe the arsonist is exactly the kind of opponent he needs right now and gives his approval. Making Bison happy to hear it, and he tells them that before beginning the hunt, they should first get the child to safety. The group travels to a safe nearby location, where Turan provides the village elder with enough money to raise the child until she is fully grown. The elder accepts the pouch of coins and declares that of course he can count on him to take care of her. To make sure of the child's safety, Turan glares at the elder and says he will be back in a few years to check in, so he should take care of the child as he is told. The village elder flinches in fear and says that they can rest assured he will take care of the child. After that, the expedition officially begins as Turan and the others return to the destroyed village. Asha, whose ancestors mixed blood with a Zahar noble, closes her eyes and forces her power until she suddenly opens her eyes as she senses something. They start walking into the jungle and Asha takes the lead, telling them that they still need to look a bit more. Turan asks which way they should move, and Asha tells them to follow her, following the clues through dense woods and rocky paths. They see many trees are destroyed along the way as Asha eventually halts and starts checking the surroundings for a clue while Bison and the others follow closely behind. Turan asks her how exactly she is tracking him. Asha turns and explains that first she looked for human footprints, and when they reached the main road she followed the scent of ash. She reasons that if he has not changed clothes, the killer will still be covered in ash residue after burning the entire village. Turan finds her method quite professional and realizes that is why she could not find him before, since she did not even know his gender. Suddenly, Asha declares that she found it and starts running in that direction while Bison tells her to wait and slow down a bit. After some time of running, they arrive near a small mountain. The group stands before a large cave and Asha confirms that the arsonist is hiding inside. Bison looks at Turan and addresses him as Mr. Turan, asking him to come to the front with her while telling the rest of her group to stay back. Bison creates a blue light spell and they enter inside, where the blue light illuminates the cave walls. Bison looks to Asha, asking her if the arsonist is still inside and checking if he is alone or if there are more people with him. Asha stares ahead with glowing blue eyes and confirms that there is only one person. They continue to walk inside and eventually enter a wide stone room, where they find a figure standing by several torches. This man is wicked-looking with a dirty red cloak over his shoulders. He looks at the group and asks what brings them to such an isolated place. Turan asks Asha if this guy is the arsonist, and she replies that she is picking up a strange scent from him, confirming that it is him. Bison steps forward to confirm it. She points an ice arrow at the man and asks if he is the killer who kidnapped and burned the villagers nearby. The man grins and replies that he is not quite sure what she means. Suddenly, his expression changes as he raises his hand, and a massive explosion of flames erupts, filling the entire stone room. Asha and the other knights are thrown back by this explosion and they scream in pain. Turan reacts immediately, holding up his hands and activating his magic tool. He saves himself and Bison from the flames. The arsonist is surprised by Turan's resistance. Bison takes advantage of the opening and fires an arrow that hits the arsonist in the leg and makes him fall to his knees, but the arsonist isn't done yet. He slams his hand to the ground to use another magic. Two massive arms made of rock rise from the ground and surround Turan and Bison. Turan looks at them and thinks about how the arsonist can use earth manipulation, since he had thought the man had a flame bloodline. Those massive arms attack them, but Turan manages to dodge that attack, while Bison was slow and got hit by the blow. Turan takes his stance and starts spinning his sling with a rock inside. The arsonist sees him and raises his hand to attack with another magic, but before he can activate the spell, Turan launches the attack. The speed and power of this rock are so powerful that the madman cannot dodge, and his hand is destroyed by it. The madman cries in pain as blood gushes out from the wound and he starts falling to the ground, while Turan rushes toward him. While on the move, he starts rubbing his fingers to generate a small sparkle of lightning. Turan then activates his newly learned lightning magic and attacks the arsonist with it. As soon as the attack hits him, he screams and loses consciousness. Because he has fainted, the massive stone arms begin to lose their form and crumble into harmless pieces. Turan stands above the defeated enemy, still charging his lightning magic to make sure the man does not recover. Bison walks over through the settling dust and asks him if he has successfully taken the man down. Turan pants slightly from the exertion and states that it is most likely finished. He tells her that he will handle this one personally and asks her to please check on the others in the group. Turan takes out some seeds and throws them onto the ground. He then uses his magic, causing several vines to grow from the seeds and wrap tightly around the arsonist. Turan thinks that since he has sealed the man's sight and movement, it is over. He uses his dagger to tap the prisoner and tells him to wake up immediately. The arsonist tries to use his mana, but Turan leans in and presses the dagger against his throat. He sternly demands that the man not move even an inch and issues a final warning, stating that if the man tries to release any more mana, he will kill him on the spot. The blindfolded man asks who they are and how they could have possibly found this hidden place, while Turan calmly replies that they have their own ways and asks for absolute confirmation that he is the arsonist responsible for the village massacres. The man remains silent and stubborn until Turan stabs the dagger into the man's leg, causing him to cry out in pain. Turan demands an immediate answer, asking why a rogue noble would spend his time burning local commoners alive. Deep in his thoughts, he mentally notes that a cold-blooded murderer deserves absolutely no mercy. The man finally breaks and cries out that it was God who commanded him to do it, claiming that if he burns the flesh and souls of those he deems sinners, he will be able to reach God himself. Bison and the others stare in a mixture of confusion and horror, asking what on earth he is talking about. The man continues his maniacal raving, saying that God taught him the secret to obtaining other bloodlines, explaining that if he just burns a few more humans, he will finally be able to obtain the flame bloodline that he so desperately craves. Bison is repulsed and asks if this isn't just total madness, wondering how anyone could think they could obtain an innate bloodline like that, and to commit such massacres for a reason like that is so ridiculous. Turan's face darkens as he remembers Midden's saying that even commoners can gain power by killing demonic beasts, and he has seen many mages do it. The arsonist continues to mutter about how he just needs to burn a few more villages, and he will have the power of flames. Turan, gripping his own arm, thinks to himself that maybe this is not just the delusion of a madman, and considers the horrifying idea that perhaps he has discovered a secret of this world. After obtaining all the necessary information, Turan instantly severs the arsonist's head without a second of hesitation. The decapitated corpse collapses onto the floor in front of the assembled group. The gruesome sight causes several members to feel a deep sense of dread, leading Bison to question her comrades' reactions as Gil struggles to find his words, but eventually explains that killing someone who is tied up and defenseless feels more like a cold-blooded slaughter. Hearing this, Bison immediately scolds him for such foolish talk, reminding him that they all would have perished if things had gone differently and wondering how he could feel sympathy for a murderer. She declares that even skinning the villain alive would not atone for his countless victims, while Turan quietly turns away to search the room. As he walks, he discovers a book lying on the ground and picks it up, beginning to examine the contents hidden within the pages. Upon opening the book, Turan finds a map with markings that match the exact locations of the burned villages, realizing he now has definitive evidence of the man's guilt. While looking through the pages, he notices something unusual and mutters that the combination formulas are unlike any he has seen, wondering if the voice of God taught the arsonist these secrets. Turan remains lost in thought until Bison calls out to him. She suggests they begin the mana absorption process and leave to inform the nearby people that the arsonist is finally dead. Soon after, the entire group begins to absorb mana using their respective techniques. The scene shifts to an official holding a reward for the madman's defeat, congratulating Lady Bison on the capture and calling her a rising star of House Carmen. She accepts the box and dismisses the praise, telling him that he flatters her far too much. She then turns to Turan and mentions that her unit plans to hunt more demonic beasts, asking him what his own plans are, having already handed him his fair share of the reward money. Turan answers immediately, stating that he is heading straight for Abacha. Bison approaches Turan and warns him in a low voice not to repeat the madman's claims from the day before, to which Turan calmly promises silence, reflecting that such knowledge would cause massive chaos. After hearing that, Bison nods and bids him farewell, leading her team away as they all go their separate ways. Turan watches them depart and decides there is no need to share his suspicions since he lacks definitive proof. He continues his journey alone through the desolate desert region where, as far as he can see, no one else remains. After some time, he starts to sense a shift in the atmosphere and eventually pauses to observe the change. As Turan concentrates, he realizes that the air is becoming increasingly humid with every step he takes. He snaps his fingers to test his magic and observes a noticeable shift in his elemental powers. A small flame flickers in his hand as he reflects that his fire power has decreased while his mana consumption has increased, making fire magic difficult in this environment. On the other hand, a large sphere of water manifests effortlessly in his opposite palm. Turan reasons that since fire magic is weakening while water magic becomes easier, it can only mean one thing. He looks into the distance and spots a shimmering water reflection and immediately begins to walk in that direction. After a while, he arrives at a port town where ships are docked, concluding that this environment confirms he has successfully reached Abacha. The scene transitions to the interior of the city, where a group of sailors is deep in conversation as one man asks if they are setting sail the following day. The captain, a man with a distinct eye patch, confirms they are heading back to the Enrolled Desert, while complaining about mermen pelting their route with harpoons and ruining their hull. Another man asks if the situation is truly that dire, and an old sailor adds that they must also contend with ruthless pirates. The eye patch captain groans that they will be paying for funerals instead of wages at this rate, muttering that they desperately need a skilled knight for protection. At that exact moment, Turan approaches the table and stops in front of them, asking if they are indeed heading toward the Enrolled Desert. The captain looks up and tells him bluntly that they leave tomorrow, but since the ship is not a cruise vessel, there is no room for passengers unless they leave behind a barrel of booze. Hearing this, Turan remains calm and places his hand over a cup resting on the table. Seeing this, the captain asks what he is doing, but he is silenced when the cup is suddenly encased in solid ice. The captain is visibly shaken by this sudden and impressive display of magic. The other men at the table stand up respectfully and ask why such an illustrious guest is in such a humble place, but Turan tells them to speak normally as he is only there to ask for a job. The one-eyed captain's attitude shifts instantly as he asks what he can do for the night, and Turan explains that he wants to reach the Enrolled Desert as a hireling rather than a passenger. He offers to repel any mermen or pirates that attack them, suggesting they consider his service as payment for his passage. The captain realizes Turan overheard their plight, but he sighs and explains that the ship is poor and cannot offer a room or wage fit for a night. Turan tells him that the pay and conditions are irrelevant since his only goal is to reach Enroll. Hearing this, the captain is shocked by the knight's resolve, but he quickly settles the deal, telling Turan that he can join the crew immediately. The scene shifts to a different location currently being consumed by total chaos. Multiple houses are engulfed in flames during a brutal and sudden attack by dark elves. Soldiers are struggling desperately to defend the area against the invaders. A dark elf notices a lone soldier and charges at him, but the soldier manages to cut the creature down. However, the fight is far from over as another dark elf rushes toward him, and he somehow manages to kill that one as well. He continues to slay many of them in a desperate struggle, but the enemies continue to emerge without stopping. Seeing this, the soldier realizes that he will not be able to handle the endless wave at this rate. Just as a monster is about to strike, golden lightning bolts rain down from the sky. The lightning obliterates every single monster in the immediate vicinity. The soldier looks up in awe and sees Mesa flying majestically above him. He breathes a sigh of relief and thanks her, but Mesa remains calm and orders him to rejoin his unit. The soldier obeys immediately and rushes back into the heat of the fray. A man comes flying near Mesa and calls out to her. It is Cadram Arabian, vice commander of the Arabian subjugation force, and he asks if she has sustained any injuries. Mesa tells him she is fine, though Cadram warns her not to push herself since her life is worth more than a few nights, a concern she ignores while asking for a situation report. Cadram answers that the situation is manageable and they will retake the region soon, though the enemy tunnels have not yet been located. Mesa tells him to notify her as soon as they are found because she intends to enter them herself. After saying this, she flies away without another word. Seeing her dismissive attitude, Cadram clicks his tongue in annoyance, muttering that his brother raised her to be far too spoiled and calling her an annoying girl. He worries that if she keeps this up, she will end up suffering the same fate as her mother and brother. Back on Turan's side, he stands on the ship while staring out at the endless expanse of the ocean. He reflects on his journey, thinking that even if he reaches the Zahar lands, he has no idea how he will find any leads. He considers that charging into the Zahar family blindly would be dangerous, without even knowing his father's name or position. With only a portrait of his mother and a few of her belongings, he wonders how long it will take to uncover the truth, but his thoughts are interrupted as the one-eyed captain taps his shoulder. He jokes that Turan will dry up the sea if he keeps starring and asks what is on the knight's mind. Turan replies that he was just thinking about the vastness of the ocean, a sentiment the captain agrees with. He mentions that even sailors get sick of the sight after too long and asks if Turan is handling the seasickness well, to which Turan says he is fine. The captain notes he heard Turan has been learning the ropes from the bosun, from tying knots to handling the sails, adding that the bosun was excited to teach a knight the trade. Turan smiles and admits he thought it would be good to learn, finding that it was actually more fun than he expected. As they are talking, a crew member shouts that it is finally time for chow. The captain claps his hands and tells everyone to head to the mess hall. As they eat, an old man tells Turan the food isn't as good as land fare but expresses relief they have sauerkraut, explaining that without it, they would all die of gum disease. The old man explains it is a disease where gums bleed until a person dies, but sour food helps cure it, noting that sauerkraut is the best method since fruit spoils so quickly. Turan finds this fascinating and asks how such a thing was discovered, to which the old man says the word simply spread over time. He mentions that before this was common knowledge, some people even resorted to eating raw mermaids, a fact that surprises Turan. Suddenly, a lookout shouts that there is a mid-sized vessel ahead at the 2 o'clock position. Someone asks if the approaching ship belongs to pirates. The lookout says he cannot tell for sure, but there is no family crest flying from the mast. The old man mutters that the weather was too good to be true and assumes they are definitely pirates. The captain shouts for the crew to prepare for combat, and they rush to grab weapons from the barrels. The old man approaches the captain to ask for the plan, suggesting they run, but the captain notes the enemy is faster and they will eventually be caught. The captain thinks about the dire situation and asks Turan if he can handle the threat. Turan declares that as long as there is no noble or knight among the enemies, it will not be a problem. Hearing that, the captain orders the ship to turn and take the fight to them, prompting the crew to cheer for Turan as they shout for the enemy's deaths. The two ships draw close together. On the enemy ship, the pirates are armed and waiting, shouting for the sailors to stop and promising to spare their lives if they surrender. Turan wonders if they would actually spare the crew, but the old man asks if being tossed overboard after having their legs cut off counts as being spared. Turan notes that the reality of the situation is exactly as he suspected. He leaps from his ship and boards the pirate vessel alone. The pirates are shocked by his boldness and demand to know who he is. Turan uses his magic to lift water directly from the sea, turning it into deadly ice shards as the enemies try to rush him. He unleashes a barrage of ice shards that pierce through the pirates, leaving them screaming in agony. Turan glares at the survivors, saying there is no reason to spare their kind, as he begins to release a terrifying amount of mana. After many pirates have already been killed, the ones who remain turn their eyes toward Turan with faces filled with anger, while fear quickly begins spreading among them. One man steps forward and shouts to the rest of the crew, calling them idiots and telling them not to be afraid as he declares that if they do not kill the youth, they will be the ones who die. Hearing his words, the hesitation among the pirates disappears almost instantly. Driven by desperation, all of them charge forward at once, raising their weapons and rushing toward Turan to launch a coordinated attack. Turan stands there calmly and watches everything unfold with a cold and composed expression, appearing as though none of it truly bothers him. At that moment, a thin strand of water suddenly erupts from the sea and shoots toward him. Before the pirates can even reach him, that water reaches Turan's hand and instantly transforms into a blade of ice. Without wasting a second, Turan swings his weapon and manages to cut down several pirates with that single, fluid attack. Seeing this, a voice from behind shouts for the others not to stop and demands they finish him right there, encouraging a few more pirates to rush forward to attack. Turan immediately blocks the incoming strike with surgical precision. In one smooth motion, he sends their swords flying into the air and kills both of those pirates in an instant. One more man tries to land a sneak attack, but Turan manages to cut him down as well. Even so, there are still many pirates surrounding him, and he mentally notes that handling all of them at once is not entirely effortless. Realizing this, Turan unleashes a powerful attack straight ahead, the force of which wipes out multiple pirates in a single devastating blow. As their bodies fall, strange ice crystals begin to emerge from their wounds and spread rapidly across the deck. Suddenly, in the middle of the chaos, one pirate manages to sneak up from behind and grabs Turan tightly. Trying to restrain the knight, he raises a knife and begins stabbing Turan in the neck. The man shouts to the others that he has him and tells them to hurry up and kill him now, prompting two more pirates to rush forward with their weapons gripped tightly as they prepare to strike. Turan remains held from behind, but he slowly turns his gaze toward the man restraining him with eyes that look intense, cold, and terrifying. It turns out that the pirates' attacks have no effect on him, and the crew cannot believe that even with their full strength, the blades will not pierce his skin. In that very moment, Turan moves in a flash, killing not only the man holding him from behind but also the two pirates charging at him from the front. Everything happens so quickly that none of them can even react to his movements, which are sharp, precise, and impossible to follow. As the fight continues, Turan cuts down more and more pirates without a single pause in his rhythm. Blood splashes across his body, staining him from head to toe, yet somehow it only makes him look even colder and more intimidating. The sheer presence he carries makes him seem almost untouchable. Before long, every single pirate has been killed and not one is left standing. From Turan's body, an overwhelming killing intent radiates outward, heavy enough to make anyone nearby feel uneasy. Just then, sailors from another ship begin throwing ropes across so they can make their way over. Soon after, the ship's captain approaches with his crew to observe the scene, speaking to Turan in a half-joking yet impressed tone. He asks if Turan happens to work as a cleaner on the side, nodding that if he tidies up this perfectly, the crew won't have anything left to do. He declares that the display was truly amazing and shouts, "Long live the knight." Hearing this, the rest of the crew begins shouting the same words over and over again, with voices filled with admiration and excitement. After that, one of the crew members steps forward and addresses Turan respectfully, suggesting that he go see the physician first. Turan calmly replies that there is no need to worry because he is not hurt anywhere, explaining that all of the blood staining him belongs to the pirates. A few moments later, the captain comes up to him with a report, explaining that they have searched every nook and cranny of the enemy ships. The captain reveals that the ship was a merchant vessel that went missing in Abacha a few years ago. He explains that it seems the pirates captured it, gave it a new coat of paint, and used it themselves, nodding that such actions are typical for such lowlifes. He then asks Turan what he plans to do since he finished the fight all by himself, stating that ownership of the vessel belongs entirely to him before congratulating Turan on becoming a new ship owner. Even after hearing this, Turan shows no real excitement and does not look particularly thrilled by the idea of suddenly owning a ship. Instead, he simply looks at the captain and asks what is usually done in this case, prompting the captain to lay out several ways he could handle the situation. He suggests that Turan could take it back to Abacha and tell the original owner he found it while asking for a reward, though he warns that paperwork and bureaucrats will take a month or two. He mentions that another way is to go to the Enroll Desert and sell it, but he suggests it is best to just sell it at the northern sea islands along their way. He explains that the neighborhood is always desperate for ships, and the rule is to sell to the one who needs it most to get the highest price. However, he notes that to move a ship of that size, they will need to mobilize quite a few of his crewmen, and Turan reflects that he cannot sail that ship all by himself anyway. He tells the captain that if he uses people, he should pay the price. Hearing this, the captain lets out a laugh, clearly pleased that Turan understands. He suggests that as a service fee for his boys, Turan could give them 10% of the profit. Turan remains composed and makes a direct counter-proposal, asking the captain to handle everything up to the sale for 20%. The captain's smile widens as he hears this, and he replies that of course he will, promising to use his connections to make sure they get a very good price. Right after the captain says this, a crew member suddenly comes running in and slams the door open while shouting that there is a mermaid. Hearing this, the captain is completely taken aback and stands up quickly, asking in shock if mermaids are attacking them now. The man quickly clarifies that is not the case and explains that the pirates were keeping a mermaid captive under the deck. Both the captain and Turan are surprised by this news and immediately head outside to see for themselves. At that moment, the crew remains busy as they scrub the ship and clear the battle's aftermath. An old sailor steps forward and guides the captain toward the lower deck. As they walk, the captain asks if there is an important guest on board, but the old man replies that he hasn't gone in yet as he just received the report. The captain turns toward Turan with a curious smile and asks him if he would like to go see the important guest, and Turan agrees to walk along with him. As they move toward the lower deck, Turan asks a practical question about whether mermaids sell for a high price. The captain responds with a knowing tone, stating that if it is a pretty female mermaid, the rich lords on the mainland will go absolutely crazy for it. He explains that those men have nothing but money and can never get enough of mysterious things. Soon, they reach the door leading to the ship's hold and step inside. What they see in front of them is not at all what they expected. There is a small childlike figure, a young merman, sitting bound in ropes. Seeing him, the captain sighs and speaks in a disappointed tone, saying it is a shame that the captive is a male. He notes that this one will go for a pittance because rich lords have no interest in male mermaids, adding that he is worthless unless he is a legendary royal who can transform into a fish. Hearing this, the merman immediately snaps back with anger and pride, asking how they dare call him male, and announcing that he is Armani, the 47th Prince of North Estadale. He demands that the lowly humans of the land show some respect. Turan asks if the boy is actually saying he is royalty, and the captain observes the boy, suggesting he might just be bluffing because he thinks that is the only way they will keep him alive and sell him. The captain asks the mermaid prince if he can transform into a fish, and Armani immediately replies that he cannot. When the captain asks why, Armani shouts back that he is being restrained and is currently out of water, explaining that he must enter the sea in a perfect state to be able to transform. The captain turns toward Turan and whispers that the boy is playing tricks to try and escape, asking Turan what he wants to do. Turan begins stepping forward and asks if it is true that mermaids eat humans quite often, and the captain confirms that they do. Hearing that, Turan speaks without hesitation and says he will kill him, reasoning that since the boy is not worth any money anyway, it is better this way. He notes it would be a jackpot if what he said was true, but if they believe him and release him only to have him run away, they will look like fools. A dark and overwhelming killing intent begins to radiate from Turan once again as the air grows heavier, while he slowly extends his glowing hand toward Armani. Seeing this, Armani panics and shouts for him to stop, asking how Turan dares to do this. But as Turan's hand keeps moving closer, his voice begins to falter. He quickly adds that he has never eaten a human in his life and never even intended to. He looks into Turan's cold eyes and sees no hesitation at all. Real fear takes over him, and in desperation he shouts that if Turan spares him, he will give him treasure, causing Turan to pause slightly at the word. Armani nods quickly and continues, promising to give him things left behind by the Freyan gods that humans worship. With that, the scene shifts to a port where everyone has disembarked. The sailors who have come ashore are busy talking about having a real drink today. Amidst this, the captain approaches Turan and asks if he has reached a conclusion. Turan replies that fortunately, the location doesn't seem to be very far from here, saying he will head there and come back tonight. The scene then transitions into night under a full moon. Turan is heading out in a small boat with Armani brought along in chains. Armani looks annoyed and asks what the chains are for, questioning if Turan thinks he will run away while insisting that as a prince, he keeps his promises. Turan gives no response, and the silence makes Armani uneasy, prompting him to ask again if Turan will really let him go if the treasure is actually there. Turan gives a simple yes. Armani tells him not to blame him if he is disappointed when he sees it, nodding it is only considered amazing by the standards of land people. Turan tells him he gets it and to just lead the way. After that, Turan dives straight into the water and heads down to search for the treasure. He continues going further down until something unusual appears before him. He sees ancient fragments and statues that resemble massive snake-like creatures. As they head out to find the treasure, Armani speaks up with a smirk, warning Turan not to place any blame if he ends up disappointed once he actually lays eyes on the items. He explains that since it is a Freyan treasure, it is only considered amazing by the simple standards of land people. Turan listens and simply tells him that he understands, urging the merman to just lead the way. Under the light of a full moon, Turan rows the small boat through the shimmering water. He suddenly stops as they reach the vicinity of a small island, asking if the treasure is there, to which Armani instantly agrees. Turan places his hand into the sea, activating his search magic. He mentally sets his target to scan for merfolk, ensuring no other sea dwellers are nearby. As his mana pulses through the water, various fish and creatures of the depths come into view. There is a sense of relief that the boy did not lie and lead him directly into a merfolk stronghold. They soon reach the shore of a dark island and trek through the dense woods as Armani looks around, muttering that the spot was definitely around here somewhere. He insists that his memory of the location is clear, suddenly shouting out that he has found it. He gestures toward a glowing pond nestled between the rocks and tells Turan that the treasure is right there. Turan looks at the water and asks if the depth is manageable, and Armani confirms it is only about 300 meters down. Turan looks at him and remains silent for a moment before turning his attention to a nearby tree while Armani watches with confusion, until Turan suddenly starts wrapping him in ropes against the trunk. The merman panics and asks what is happening, questioning if he is being tied up again or if Turan thinks he will run away. He begs Turan to reconsider, stating that if his captor goes down there and dies, he will be left to starve to death while tied to the tree. Turan tells him he better hope that doesn't happen for both of their sakes. Turan takes a deep breath and plunges into the water, sinking rapidly toward the bottom. As he descends, the mysteries of the deep begin to reveal themselves. After some time, Turan reaches the bottom, finding that he can see much better due to the reflecting light. He discovers that the ocean floor is covered in strange coral and ruins. Suddenly, his eyes widen as he finds a gargantuan stone serpent in the depths. Perched on top of the massive serpent's head, he finds a figure encased in armor. Turan is so focused on the sight that he accidentally opens his mouth, but he quickly catches the mistake and snaps it shut. Following this, he begins swimming toward the mysterious figure, and as the distance closes, it becomes clear that one of the serpent's fangs has been broken off. The massive tooth is found pierced directly through the figure's body. It is unclear if this being is truly one of the Freyans, but the body is perfectly intact and hasn't transitioned into a wraith. Turan searches around the stone figure's body and finds a golden compass-like relic on its belt. He reaches out and retrieves it. He then begins his ascent, eventually bursting through the surface of the pond. Armani is waiting anxiously and immediately asks if he found it. Turan climbs out of the water and confirms that he did, but as he looks up, he sees a strange blue-colored flame on Armani's chest and on both ears. He looks down at the golden object, realizing it allows him to sense the presence of living things and internal energy. Turan then uses his magic to break the chains and ropes holding Armani. The prince is stunned and tells Turan that he did not think he would be let go so easily. Armani admits he expected Turan to just take the treasure and sell him off again, but Turan reminds him that he always returns what he receives. Since Armani guided him without deception, the knight is simply keeping his word. Armani begins to cry and thanks Turan, calling him a kind demon and promising that if the merfolk ever go to war with humans, he will protect him. Turan tells him to stop talking nonsense while pulling on his shirt. Immediately, Armani leaps into the water and transforms into a fish, swimming away. Turan watches the silhouette in the water, acknowledging that the boy really wasn't lying about being royalty. Later, the scene shifts back to the merchant vessel docked at a port. The sound of groaning fills the air as several sailors sit on the deck, their backs covered in fresh welts. They complain that the punishment hurts like hell and beg for medicine. A quartermaster stands over them, brandishing a whip and shouting for everyone to repeat that they will not be late again. He bellows that insubordination means death. Turan watches the scene and asks what the commotion is about, hearing from a crewman that they are punishing those who returned late. Not only were they late, but they caused a ruckus at the tavern, and this is the price for taking the captain's warning lightly. As the men are whipped, Turan focuses his eyes and sees a red glow manifesting over their wounds. It appears that whenever someone is wounded, their life force can be visually seen draining away. Turan asks where the captain is, and the sailor tells him he went down to the island to find a buyer for the captured pirate ship. Turan heads into town and finds the captain inside a well-lit tavern. The one-eyed captain spots him and announces that Turan has arrived before asking about the status of the deal. The captain introduces him to Captain Samuel, a man who has lost a hand, joking that between the two of them the math checks out. Samuel acknowledges Turan and states that they have agreed on a price of 1,000 Zahar gold coins for the vessel. Turan considers the offer and notes that while it is not bad, a certain problem remains. It is inconvenient to carry around a massive amount of gold coins, so he asks for magic tools or holy relics of equivalent value instead. Samuel tells him that such precious items are not found here and that he would have to go to Kamed. He explains that Kamed is the second city of the Zahar territory and is ruled by House Derman of the Tamer bloodline. He suggests Turan should get himself a decent monster there since he will have plenty of money. Turan thinks about the Tamer bloodline and Imagenes as riding Tilly, reflecting that a beast that understands speech would be very helpful. The voyage resumes on a clear day, and the sailors are in high spirits, commenting that the pirates have turned into quite the money bags. Another says it is all thanks to serving a descendant of God's people. Suddenly, a lookout from the crow's nest shouts about dark clouds ahead. The crew looks up in horror as a massive storm consumes the sky, and the quartermaster orders everyone to get ready. The rain begins to pour down violently and the waves become more fierce. He shouts for the crew to hurry and furl the sails, demanding the cargo be moved inside immediately. He warns that if they don't want to be fish food, they must give it their all. But as the ship tilts, a sailor loses his footing and screams as he is swept over the railing into the churning waves. As the man is about to fall into the sea, Turan acts instantly, extending his hand as a glowing blue tether of water magic shoots out to catch the man in midair. He pulls him back onto the deck. The sailor is stunned as Turan tells him to get down, to which the man stammers out a yes. Turan then turns his focus to the rest of the ship, using his magic to wrap around the remaining cargo crates and secure them in place. He then shouts for everyone to retreat as lightning strikes the sea near the vessel. Eventually, the crew huddles together in the dark hold, shivering from the cold. Turan enters the room and the men offer their thanks. Turan asks if they are hurt and they confirm that they are fine. The captain thanks Turan, stating they would have sunk if the sails hadn't been furled, leading Turan to ask if they can withstand the storm. The captain admits they are at the mercy of the ship and the helmsman now, but more importantly, Turan looks at the freezing men and tells everyone to form a circle and gather around him. The captain is startled and asks if Turan plans to start a fire on a narrow wooden boat, warning of the danger. Turan tells him he will just make sure it does not spread. Turan snaps his fingers and a massive, brilliant orb of fire manifests in his hand. He holds the flames as they cast a warm, golden light over the entire room. The captain can hardly believe his eyes, never having heard of magic this sophisticated. The sailors smile as they feel the warmth. The captain stares in awe, finally understanding the instructions the old-timers used to repeat until their breath ran out. He reflects on the prophecy that humans shall serve the wizard, and the wizard shall reign over humans while caring for them. Turan stands at the center of the circle, giving warmth to everyone as the storm continues to rage. The scene transitions to a sprawling view of Capped, the largest city in the northern Enroll Desert, where numerous ships are docked and sun-drenched buildings stretch across the sandy horizon. People are busy transporting goods while the city hums with activity. As Turan disembarks, the captain approaches him to hand over a heavy bag of coins, explaining it is a small hearing fee and asking him to accept it. Turan is surprised by the weight of the bag and insists it is far too much, reminding the pilot they were simply helping each other out. The one-eyed captain shakes his head, explaining that the entire crew chipped in from the proceeds of selling the captured pirate ship, and insists that if Turan does not accept, God will be angry with them. The man's sincerity is evident as Turan agrees to take the gold, telling the crew that if they ever meet again, he will treat them to a proper meal. The captain bows his head, declaring that such an invitation would be a true honor. The merchant vessel prepares to set sail once again. The sailors line the railing and shout out to Turan with voices filled with genuine affection, telling the knight they will miss him and promising never to forget what he did for them. The captain and the old sailor also pay him their final respects as the ship drifts away. Turan watches the vessel leave with a happy face. He turns his focus toward the bustling streets of the desert city, where the air is thick with the scent of spices and the dry heat of the Enroll sands. As Turan walks through the market, he observes every detail carefully, not missing a single small element of his surroundings. Stopping suddenly, he activates his newly acquired power to scan the crowd. Ordinary people with very small or no magic power have a small glowing blue flame in them, but Turan then sees one person whose body is completely covered in blue flame, which means he is a knight. The man is wearing armor and carrying a sword with him. Turan approaches and calls out to the knight. Releasing his mana, he asks if the man is a knight of House Durman, causing the guard to panic as he senses terrifying mana from a noble behind him. Startled by Turan's presence, the man quickly bows and confirms he is at his command, not even daring to look at Turan's face. Our boy introduces himself as Turan from Abacha and announces that he wishes to see the house head. Turan is soon guided through the Grand Palace of Capped, a structure defined by towering minarets and expansive courtyards. He is eventually led into a lavish reception room for a meeting with the head of the Durman house. The head of the house sits comfortably on an ornate couch, nodding that the local attire suits Turan well as a blue, ethereal aura briefly flickers around him. The man greets his guest and introduces himself as Cal Durman, the head of the house. As they sit across from one another, Cal looks at Turan's face carefully as if he has seen him somewhere before. This distinct reaction does not escape Turan's notice. Cal asks for Turan's name and house, prompting the MC to introduce himself as Turan Brahms and claim he is from a fallen guardian bloodline. He explains that he heard rumors of the house's prestige and came to purchase a monster for his journey. Cal stands to leave, informing Turan that his daughter will guide him while he observes Turan's face intently once more, appearing hesitant for a moment. Turan asks if Cal has seen someone who looks like him, specifically pointing out the hesitation he sensed earlier. The house head dismisses the concern as nothing, simply stating that Turan looks exactly like someone he used to know. After that, Cal Durman's daughter enters the room and is tasked with guiding Turan through the breeding grounds. As they walk down the long, sunlit hallways, the noblewoman notes that although Turan claims to be from a fallen house, he seems to possess significant wealth since he came to buy from House Durman, which is known for expensive monsters. She asks Turan if a guardian bloodline is truly perfect for a mercenary life, but Turan remains silent as his mind races with questions about that mysterious person. The question of who the house head saw lingers, and whether the man was reminded of his mother or his father. He reflects on his mother's features, like her curly hair, straight face, and somewhat large ears, and wonders if sharing those features was enough to trigger such a memory. Or could it be that the person the house head saw was his father, whose face he doesn't even know? A few moments later, the daughter suddenly stops and speaks proudly, announcing that they have arrived. She welcomes him to the House Durman breeding grounds. The moment Turan steps inside, his eyes widen at a place enormous beyond imagination, with vast sections stretching in every direction. Each area is carefully designed to house different kinds of monsters. Some areas resemble forests, while others look like rocky mountains or swamps, while certain chambers even recreate desert-like environments. Turan looks around in genuine amazement at how each room has its own habitat. Every monster is being raised in an environment perfectly suited to its nature, showing that House Durman has invested unimaginable wealth and effort into this place. As they continue walking, Turan eventually stops in front of a particularly impressive horse-like monster. The creature possesses a powerful body and sharp eyes, carrying an intimidating presence that immediately catches his attention. Looking at it carefully, Turan asks how much the creature costs. The girl casually replies that they raised him with quite a bit of care and tells him he would have to pay 4,000 gold coins. The instant Turan hears the price, he practically turns to stone from shock. Internally, his expression completely freezes as he realizes that is twice his entire fortune. Until now, he had honestly believed he possessed a decent amount of money after everything he had earned during his journey. But at this moment, reality hits him mercilessly as it becomes clear he was wrong to think he was rolling in money. As they continue moving through the breeding grounds, Turan quietly falls into deep thought once more. He wonders if he should give up on getting a monster, but reminds himself that he cannot exactly cross the desert while carrying that chest full of money either. The situation leaves him trapped between two difficult choices, and neither option seems ideal. After thinking for a while, Turan suddenly stops in front of a much smaller cage located near the corner of the breeding grounds. Inside the cage is a strange bird-like beast. Unlike the other monsters they had passed earlier, this creature is quietly staring directly at him the entire time, almost as if it were carefully observing him. Turan narrows his eyes slightly before pointing toward it and asking what the price is for that one. The girl answers casually that it is 1,500 gold coins. The moment he hears the price, Turan's expression immediately changes. Compared to everything else he had seen so far, this feels unbelievably cheap and quite a bargain considering its mana capacity, even though it would take all his savings. After observing it for another moment, Turan asks what its abilities are. She replies that it is smart and flies well. Hearing that, Turan cannot help but wonder what kind of ability that is supposed to be. However, before he can ask further, she continues explaining that this is actually one of the more popular species, but it is too smart for its own good. She says it absolutely refuses to listen to anyone it deems dumber than itself. Even while she explains, the bird beast continues staring at Turan without looking away for even a second. Seeing that unusual behavior, Turan slowly steps closer to the cage and asks the creature if it can understand him. He tells the bird it really must be smart, even if it is a bit ugly. Hearing this, the bird begins to shake its head in anger. After saying that, Turan notes that it definitely understands everything. The girl sighs helplessly and confirms that they even tried teaching it to read, but it would not learn. She admits she does not know whether it simply does not want to or if it actually cannot. Even so, she still sounds disappointed as she looks at the creature and calls it a waste. She mentions that it has incredible strength for its size and that they have fed it plenty of monster meat while raising it. She notes it would be worth far more if it just listened to people. At that moment, Turan suddenly looks directly at the bird beast and asks if there is something it wants. The girl begins saying dismissively that it is no use asking, but before she can finish, the beast suddenly stretches one of its claws forward toward Turan. The girl's eyes widen in complete shock as she wonders why it did that all of a sudden. Even Turan looks slightly surprised by the reaction. Staring at the creature, he asks if it wants him. He notes that he is not that special of a person and asks if there is a specific reason for this behavior. He then asks the bird if he buys it, would it be willing to learn how to read. The bird monster agrees by nodding its head. After some time, Cal Durman arrives at the scene. He immediately activates his magic and declares that the process is done, and with this, the two of them are now bonded. The iron restraints and magical bindings around the bird beast instantly disappear. Freed from the cage, the creature immediately moves toward Turan's side without hesitation, almost as if it had already decided he was its true master from the very beginning. Watching the scene unfold, even Cal Durman seems somewhat surprised. As he approaches them, he says it is surprising how well it follows Turan and tells him to take good care of it. Now standing beside him, the strange bird beast quietly remains at his side, as though it has finally found the person it had been waiting for. Turan acknowledges the man's words and says he will. For a brief moment, silence fills the area, but then Cal suddenly speaks again with an expression becoming slightly more serious. He says he could just let this pass, but asks Turan if he happens to have any connection to Tail Eyes. The moment Turan hears that name, his eyes widen slightly in surprise and he repeats the name. However, almost immediately after asking the question, Cal shakes his head and tells Turan to forget he asked. Even though the conversation seems to end there, Turan's thoughts immediately become restless once again. The fact that the man thought of that person the moment he saw Turan's face makes the situation feel increasingly suspicious. After remaining silent for a moment, Turan finally decides to ask something directly himself. He asks the house head if he may also ask one thing, and Cal calmly nods for him to go ahead. Without hesitation, Turan takes out a portrait and shows it to him before asking if he happens to know a woman named Vij. Cal carefully looks at the portrait for a moment before immediately answering that he does not, nodding that if she were such a beauty, there is no way he would have forgotten her. Hearing that answer, Turan quietly lowers the portrait again and says he understands. Then he tells the group he needs a second. Before anyone can ask what he means, the bird beast suddenly spreads its wings and flies upward. Seeing this unexpected action, Cal immediately frowns slightly and asks what he is doing. Turan answers that since he has paid the price and the deal is done, it is only natural to check if everything is in order. The next moment, he grabs onto the beast's legs firmly. The giant bird creature immediately lifts him high into the air and begins flying forward at incredible speed. Wind rushes past Turan as they soar across the vast grounds of House Durman. Sometime later, the scene shifts again. Turan can now be seen walking into a room for his meal. A servant standing nearby respectfully bows toward him and hopes that the master enjoyed his meal. Just then, Cal's daughter approaches him and asks how the flight was. Turan replies that it was good and felt like it cleared his head. Soon afterward, she begins introducing him to several people gathered nearby. She announces to everyone that this is Turan Brahms and mentions that he came from the Carmine side. The moment she says that, one person among the group reacts with surprise and asks if that wasn't near Arabian. Before the atmosphere can become awkward, she immediately shoots back at him sharply, telling him not to associate their guest with those sparrows. After that, a man steps forward toward Turan and offers a handshake with a friendly smile. He introduces himself as Dolph Marin of a history bloodline. Turan politely shakes the man's hand and says it is nice to meet him. However, the man suddenly tightens his grip far more than necessary. The pressure in his hand clearly is not normal. It is obvious he is intentionally trying to show off his strength, which Turan immediately notices. Smirking slightly, the man says that as expected of a guardian, Turan is sturdy. Before the situation can continue any further, the girl standing nearby suddenly interrupts with an annoyed expression. She says she is not interested in a show of strength and tells them to leave it at that. She then immediately changes the subject and asks where that picky eagle is, mentioning she came here because she wanted to see him. Hearing that, Turan answers that he told the bird to fly around nearby for a bit. He explains that the creature must have felt stifled after practicing his writing all morning and offers to call him over. He sends a message for the creature to come there, and the giant bird beast flies in and lands on Turan's arm. The moment she sees it arrive, the girl's eyes light up with excitement and she says it is true. She starts approaching it repeatedly, calling the creature over toward her and expecting it to approach immediately. However, despite her efforts, the bird completely ignores her and shows absolutely no intention of going near her at all, even refusing to let her touch it. Seeing that reaction, she becomes irritated and shouts at the damn bird brain. She asks what on earth she lacks that it is acting like this, stating she could raise it much better than some fallen noble. Seeing the bird becoming annoyed, Turan quietly tells the creature to hold its temper. Soon afterward, at the dinner table, everyone has gathered together while discussing various matters happening across the region. The atmosphere is lively, though the topics themselves are far from peaceful. One person comments that it has been noisy lately because of the dark elf tribes to the west. Another mentions the Arabian subjugation force and says they heard the commander is that skinny Mesa. The moment her name comes up, one woman sitting nearby speaks with open hostility and says she hopes Mesa gets assassinated this time. Yet even after saying something so extreme, she still does not stop there. She says it will be quite the thing if that wench dies, calling her nothing but skin and bones who would probably die on her own. She claims Mesa is such a hideous sight to behold and says she feels sorry for whoever ends up being her husband. Turan does not react, he just lowers his head and keeps eating. The conversation around the table continues casually despite those cruel remarks. She adds that those people from Arabian have it easy since they already have a successor. Meanwhile, they still do not know whether it will be Raman, Alma, or Perga. She wishes Taileyes would just make a clear decision already. The moment that name surfaces once again, Turan quickly becomes alert, not wanting to miss a chance to get an answer. He asks Cal's daughter what kind of person Taileyes is. She explains that he is the house head's younger brother and the current second-in-command of Zahar. The girl then adds calmly that he is essentially the one leading the house. The moment she says that, Turan's thoughts become even more complicated, especially since Cal Durman himself had suddenly asked whether he had any connection to Taileyes after seeing his face. The realization hits him that his father might be a much bigger deal than he originally thought. Turan continues to sit at the lavish dinner table while absorbing the words of Cal Durman's daughter. She explains that Taileyes is the house head's younger brother and the current second-in-command of Zahar, emphasizing that he is essentially the one truly leading the house. Turan remains quiet as he processes this information, for if the girl speaks the truth and Taileyes is indeed his father, he is a much bigger deal than originally thought. The weight of this realization hangs over him as the scene shifts to later that afternoon. Turan is shown sitting on a wooden bench in a quiet courtyard of Kamad, while the picky eagle uses its sharp beak to scratch words into the sand, making him wonder if House Head Carl saw the face of Zahar's second-in-command when looking at him. And if that person really is his father, then if he is even the slightest blemish to him, he would be crushed like a bug the moment he is discovered. Lost in thought, he raises his eyes and notices something strange as the bird carefully writes out that it is a black eagle before adding a question asking if it wrote well, though it spells the word good as good. Turan watches the bird in silence for some time and tells it that he did not tell it to copy that specific part, pointing out to the creature that its spelling is wrong. He then asks the eagle if it has decided on a name for itself yet. The bird stops and shakes its head from side to side. It pecks at the sand again to write the words not yet, leading Turan to ask if not yet is supposed to be its name. The eagle continues to peck at the ground while Turan crosses his arms and leans back, asking the bird why it chose him as its master. The eagle looks up and writes that Turan is good, adding that his inside fits the bird perfectly. Turan leans down closer and pats the bird again, saying he assumes it meant to say good, while declaring the rest of its writing is full of mistakes and needs more study. Gazing at the bird, Turan wonders if its claim about his inside fitting perfectly is because of his specific bloodline, which is a mix of Zahar and another house. His thoughts are interrupted when the rude man from Ariel walks up and mentions a hunting trip to stretch his legs, asking Turan if he would like to come along. But the youth remains seated and answers that he is leaving today. The man puts on a friendly face and says it is a bit disappointing, claiming Turan should have said something sooner as he thought they were closer than that. Turan stares at him with a neutral expression, seeing that Dolph is merely pretending to be friendly while actually wanting to suppress him with force just so he can feel superior. Dolph does not give up and offers to act as a guide since he knows this area inside out, but Turan looks at the eagle before telling him no thank you. Dolph waves a hand dismissively as he walks away, telling Turan to be sure to let him know if he changes his mind. Turan watches Dolph go and reflects that the man is backing off far too easily, which feels suspicious. Later that day, Turan prepares to depart from the city, but it seems like he is a little bit too annoyed, as Turan tells a group of armored knights that there is no need to see him off, though they approach and explain it is House Head Cal's order to escort him safely to the fortress walls. Before leaving the city entirely, Turan enters a local library filled with scrolls and books to tell the attendant that he wants a desert guidebook and enrolls religious texts. After some time, he finally gets the books and places a few coins on a book, telling the man this should cover the cost as the attendant bows and calls him master. Soon Turan stands outside the library, busy reading with the picky eagle perched on his shoulder. He flips through a book by Britso Zahar and notes the support of the main house, figuring that while the map might be lacking, the information should be useful. As he walks, he senses something and looks up, immediately using his power to check for pursuers. He sees a wizard lurking nearby and hiding to avoid being noticed. But Turan does nothing about that. Turan eventually reaches the massive city gates. As he exits the city wall, the guards there bow to him. Turan walks through the threshold and enters the vast emerald desert as the sun begins to set, looking out at the endless dunes and telling himself that he shall take his time. Even that bird agrees with him as night falls over the desert and the sky turns a deep blue. An owl perches on the branch of a dead tree in the middle of the dunes. Turan is shown walking through the sand with his gear on his back. He eventually comes to a halt and speaks into the darkness. He tells Dolph that he can come out now. Dolph Marin emerges from behind a sand dune with a confident smirk on his face, asking how Turan knew he was there. Turan asks Dolph why he walked all the way out here instead of riding his new pet. Dolph laughs and says he just thought it might be dangerous for a young fellow to travel alone, claiming that is why he did it, and nodding that the desert is a dangerous place. Turan looks at him coldly and asks if he is after his mana. Dolph stops walking and clenches his fists together until his knuckles crack, asking if Turan knew that and still came out here alone before calling him either brave or just reckless. Dolph declares that this is why nobles hate it when people call them fallen nobles. Dolph continues to mock Turan, saying he speaks as if they are on the same level and asking if the youth is actually worse off than him. Dolph claims that since Turan's mana is strong but his physical strength is pathetically weak, he must be of the guardian primordial bloodline that only has defense left and has lost the power to strengthen the body, declaring it a waste for a husk like him to have that much power before demanding he hand it over quietly. A lack of physical ability combined with overflowing mana makes Turan a tempting prey. Turan looks up at the sky and tells the eagle to go on up. Dolph watches as the bird flies into the night air as Turan remarks that it is too bad, because the one who thought the other looked delicious was actually him as well. Turan's body begins to vanish as he activates his magic. Dolph grins and mocks the stealth magic, calling it a petty spell for night spies that only hides appearance while the presence remains completely exposed. Dolph laughs loudly and tells Turan not to even think about running, declaring that breaking stealth magic is child's play. However, his expression suddenly changes as he looks around the empty desert. Turan's presence has vanished entirely, with no footprints, no smell, and no sound to be found. Dolph's eye widens as he wonders if Turan could actually be a Zahar. Suddenly, a massive burst of blue energy explodes against Dolph's chest, throwing him backward as he screams in pain. He coughs and asks what that was. He looks at a rock on the ground and wonders if he really was attacked by a stone. But before he can do anything, another rock strikes him directly, and he groans as blood spatters the ground. Dolph huffs and puffs as he struggles to stay on his feet. He raises his hand and shouts for the flame to manifest, sending a massive wave of fire across the area to light up the night, thinking he can break the stealth if he illuminates the surroundings and demanding that Turan come out. Suddenly, 6 glowing orange rings of fire appear in the air before Dolph. As these 6 glowing orange rings get charged up and launch attacks, Dolph screams while trying to avoid getting hit by the barrage. But no matter how hard he tries to run and avoid the attack, the beams blast into Dolph's back and shoulders, causing him to scream as explosions of light cover his body. Dolph becomes angry and uses his magic to slam his foot into the ground, shattering the area nearby him. Even after using that trick to destroy the surrounding area to locate Turan, Dolph finds nothing and can only punch the air, screaming again for Turan to come out. Panic takes over as it becomes clear he cannot win. He starts sweating and quickly starts to run as fast as possible, realizing that the youth was not from the Guardian bloodline after all, and that fighting a Zahar wizard in the desert at night is literally suicide. He sprints across the sand, thinking that unless Turan has a body-strengthening bloodline like his own, he can never catch up. Suddenly, he hears the sound of wings fluttering above him. Dolph looks up in shock and sees Turan being carried through the air, holding onto the legs of the eagle. Turan looks down and notes that Dolph is sturdy, though not as much as those of the Guardian bloodline, reflecting that an ordinary noble would have died long ago before asking if he has a magic tool that helps with defense. Dolph falls to his knees and begins to tremble, begging Turan to have mercy. Turan stares at him with a cold and merciless gaze, telling Dolph that he already knows that he cannot do that. Turan extends his hand downward, and a colossal pillar of fire erupts from his palm, completely consuming Dolph. Turan stands over the charred remains of Dolph Marin on the desert floor, as thick smoke billows from the blackened corpse. The man was clearly sturdier than expected, raising the possibility that this resilience is a natural trait of the history bloodline, while the eagle flies down from the night sky to perch on his shoulder. If Dolph had been a properly trained guardian of the Zahar family, breaking through his defenses with the current rock-slinging technique would have been much harder, making it obvious that a stronger means of attack is needed, specifically some form of piercing magic capable of breaking through heavy defenses. Turan looks down at the remains to consume the leftover mana, raising his hand, as glowing green energy begins to flow from the corpse toward him. But instead of taking all the mana for himself, he shares some with the eagle so it can grow stronger and help him in the future. However, alongside these 2 streams of mana, one more begins to form, flowing directly into the magical bracelet. Turan looks at this in surprise, taking the magical bracelet in hand to closely examine it. The Freyan relic is actually an item designed for storing mana, clear from the way the green energy swirls inside its glass casing. He holds the glowing compass and questions if he seriously has to drink the liquid mana directly from it, but quickly dismisses the idea, concluding that since it is an item from the Freyans, it requires more verification before attempting to use it. The scene transitions to daytime in the vast desert as Turan flies across the endless sand dunes by holding onto the eagle's legs. While still flying, a structure comes into view as a colossal golden pyramid gleams in the distance, serving as the monumental structure known as the legendary Tomb of the Gods. Later, Turan sits inside a dimly lit local tavern, enjoying a meal across from a dark-skinned woman with her hair tied up. who smiles and comments that it is reckless for him to run away from home and travel all alone before asking if he hasn't run into any bandits or monsters yet. Turan calmly takes a bite of his food and replies that he has been lucky, smoothly shifting the topic to ask how one gets into the Tomb of the Gods, explaining that according to a book, a person only needs money to enter. She chuckles and guesses he is a child from a well-off family since he reads books, but warns him that he cannot go inside right now, prompting Turan to pause and ask why not. She lowers her voice and reveals that some powerful figures showed up about a week ago, locking down the site ever since, and adding that even the large merchant caravans had to turn back without catching a glimpse of the tomb. Turan asks who these powerful figures are, watching as she points a finger upward and clarifies that it is the Zahar family. Absorbing this information, Turan lets out a soft sound of realization. The scene shifts to the dark, massive stone hall inside the Tomb of the Gods. A curly-haired man frantically looks around the shadowy hall and yells for Purga, demanding to know where he is. Purga, a heavily muscled warrior with half-shaved hair and a massive circular blade, steps out of the shadows, snapping at the man to stop yelling because the things lurking in the dark will hear him. The curly-haired man blames Purga, stating that this is all his fault and wishing he had never suggested they come inside. Purga glares back and tells the man not to blame him, reminding him that he was the one who tagged along asking for a high position once he becomes the next house head, firmly ordering the man to shut up. Purga clenches his fists, cursing his situation repeatedly. Back then, his grandfather mentioned an underground beneath the gods, where anyone who solved its secret might become the next house head. But Purga never knew that this underground place would be a maze with no exit. Searching like crazy every year he visited the tomb never bore any fruit, leading him to believe it was just a legend. Finding such a truly hidden place feels unbelievable, and he grins at the thought that solving its secret will make becoming the house head a piece of cake, fully convinced that the god of Zahar is on his side. However, his confidence is shattered as he looks down the dark corridor and spots dozens of glowing red eyes. Right before a horde of pale, fleshy, multi-eyed monsters emerges from the shadows, screeching and crawling toward them. Purga's face drops in horror as he curses the god of Zahar's secret, knowing that if he had realized this place was crawling with monsters, he never would have entered in the first place. Turning to one of his subordinates, Purga asks how much water is left, and when the subordinate checks his supplies and answers that there is none, Purga orders the man to make some quickly just to wet his throat. Suddenly, dark, ominous energy begins to manifest in the air around them as strange symbols form in the darkness. Purga stares at the floating text in confusion, struggling to comprehend why this is appearing in a language he has never heard before, though he can somehow perfectly understand what the text is trying to say. The text delivers a chilling message, stating that the night hunter has returned to the desert. Back in the desert city, Turan walks through the crowded market streets with an annoyed sigh, assuming the Zahar family is trying to monopolize the entire tomb for themselves. And knowing that loitering around the city might result in meeting someone else who can see tail eyes in his face, just like househead Cal. Turan resolves to lay low for a while, but as he passes a merchant's stall, he spots a large sack filled with white, rocky chunks. Stopping to ask what the substance is, the merchant explains that it is saltpeter, a material only found on the southern sea islands, adding that people claim a person's lifespan will extend if they grind it into powder and eat it. Hearing the word saltpeter, Turan immediately remembers seeing it in Orville the Pyromaniac's book. Pulling out the arsonist's journal and flipping through the pages, he finds the correct formula, reading that the arsonist gave up on making it last time because he lacked the proper ingredients, which makes it worth trying to create considering the immense power of the spirit of fire that Orville used. Turan looks up and asks the merchant if he happens to have something called sulfur as well, but the merchant just shakes his head, stating that is a first for him. Exploring other shops reveals that sulfur is only found in volcanic regions and is mostly used for disinfection. One shopkeeper adds that since not many people look for it, the material is incredibly hard to find in the desert. If he had known this, he would have searched for it back in Kamad, though traveling all the way to the east is likely unnecessary as long as he can simply find a volcano. The merchant points to a sack of black sugar and asks if Turan plans to buy it due to its precious value, but Turan politely declines, stating that sweets aren't really his thing. Turan eventually ventures out into the desert to practice his magic, using his sling to launch a concentrated bullet of compressed sand, which effortlessly shatters a massive stone upon impact. Turan nods in approval, seeing that sand bullets are a perfectly good alternative to rocks. Holding out his hand to make several sharp sand projectiles with his magic, he demonstrates the ability to change their shape mid-flight, increasing their piercing power or scattering them to cover a wider area, an effective method that preserves his processed stones despite consuming a bit more mana. Checking his pouch reveals he only has 5 or 6 processed stones left, meaning he must use them sparingly. Manipulating the sand on the surface with his mana, provides a useful technique for binding an opponent's ankles or obscuring their vision, prompting him to practice moving through the sand as if he were swimming. Turan turns his gaze back toward the towering golden pyramid, curious about what the nobles are doing inside the tomb after locking it down for days. Contemplating whether he should just leave and go to another city, he pauses and decides against it, concluding that he can simply sneak in and take a look. Reasoning that he can easily run away if caught, he uses his magic to hide himself, but suddenly, the muffled sounds of a struggling person catch his attention. Turan hides behind a large rock and peeks out to see two men in desert robes dragging a bound captive across the sand, with one of the men cursing and asking why the captive is so noisy. He instructs his partner to keep the man quiet, but strictly orders him not to kill the prisoner. Turan watches as they drag the man into the entrance of the tomb, questioning what kind of operation requires kidnapping people. Turan quietly follows the men down the dark stone staircases of the tomb, eventually reaching a large chamber. In the center of the room, a colossal, swirling black portal spins like a whirlpool on the floor. Armed guards stand around the captive as he asks what this place is, only for the guards to yell at him that questions are not permitted. Turan stares in shock, completely baffled by the portal. Observing the scene reveals that although these men are kidnappers, they are the ones who look visibly scared. The guard points at the dark portal and orders the captive to take the cargo and go inside, forcing the man to carry two large barrels and wade blindly into the darkness. Turan looks at the captive's eyes, recognizing that the workers' minds are being manipulated by animal control magic. As soon as the man steps into that mysterious portal, he begins to descend. One man asks the bearded leader if he thinks Sir Purga is safe, to which the leader answers that they have to hope so, explaining why they are continuously sending in food and water, and violently scolding a guard for suggesting they contact the main house for help by demanding to know what would happen if Sir Purga's rivals heard he was trapped. Overhearing the conversation allows Turan to piece the information together, confirming that Purga is the candidate to be the next house head of Zahar. This big shot is clearly trapped inside the portal, perfectly explaining why the Zahar family occupied the tomb for days. Turan smiles as a plan forms in his mind. The risky move presents a perfect opportunity, as saving Purga and making the man indebted to him will allow a natural infiltration into the Zahar family. Turan's eyes change as if under some sort of influence, feeling that the reason doesn't matter, and he just has to go in because what he wants is in there. Without further hesitation, Turan leaps into the swirling black abyss. For a moment, nothing but darkness surrounds him, until he grabs his head as his mind clears, cursing upon realizing he was briefly bewitched by something outside the portal and chastising himself for the stupid plan. Questioning what guarantee there is that a man like Purga would even repay his debts. While thinking about this, the sound of someone screaming echoes out, and Turan emerges on the other side, landing inside a dimly lit room while still in his invisible form so no one notices him. Purga looks at the supplies brought by the captive and calls it great that the subordinates outside are continuously sending people in, while the captive groans loudly on the floor nearby. Purga glares at the man and complains that he is too noisy, casually ordering someone to take care of the captive to conserve food. The subordinate immediately complies, stepping forward and ruthlessly stomping on the captive's head to kill him instantly. Turan watches the brutal execution, seeing firsthand the true nature of Purga Zahar. Killing a person to take their water without a shred of guilt confirms that Purga is definitely not the type of person to repay a favor. But just as he turns to look around the palace, a mysterious voice calls out, stating that he is mistaken and is not the Night Hunter. Long ago, massive giants ruled over the fertile and prosperous plains of Enroll. With their enormous bodies, they relentlessly consumed everything in their path and eventually turned the entire land into a dry, barren desert. Requiring vast amounts of water every single day, the giants reached a point where they could no longer withstand their thirst. They enslaved humanity and slaughtered thousands of innocent people daily, draining human blood just to quench their immense thirst. However, on one fateful, moonless night beneath a sky of absolute pitch-black darkness, the legendary Night Hunter of the Freyans arrived on the battlefield. He single-handedly slew every single giant, saving all of mankind from total and absolute extinction. In deep gratitude, the liberated humans offered him the three most beautiful maidens in the entire land to take as his brides, and the three children born from those unions inherited extraordinary miraculous powers. One child possessed the ability to conceal his body, one could command the deepest shadows, and the final child could generate deadly poison. But after the great Night Hunter ascended to the heavens, the brothers quickly fell into conflict, fighting over who would claim dominion and rule the vast desert. The eldest brother, who possessed the incredible power to conceal his body, chose to leave the plains because he absolutely refused to fight his own flesh and blood. But the second brother, the Master of Shadows, and the third brother, the Master of Poison, waged a brutal and devastating war against each other, plunging the entire desert into deep turmoil and driving countless innocent people to absolute despair. In the end, the eldest brother returned from his exile, successfully defeated both of his younger siblings, and claimed absolute, unmatched dominion over the entire desert. He was the grand, ultimate ancestor of the House of Zahar. Back in the present, within the pitch-black labyrinth, the mysterious voice once again addresses Turan, declaring that he is definitely not the legendary Night Hunter. Standing in the cold, dark stone corridor, Turan questions why the name of that ancient god continues to echo in his ears. Glancing back toward Purga's group, Turan realizes there lies a strong possibility that this situation is connected to the Zahar nobles who entered the tomb before him, though technically, he is also a distant descendant of that very same lineage. But just as these deep thoughts consume him regarding why the voice keeps repeating that he is not the Night Hunter, a sudden movement stirs directly behind him in that large, pitch-dark hall. Instantly snapping to absolute alertness the moment this presence registers, Turan shifts his gaze directly toward that suspicious direction. With an unknown presence rapidly approaching, Turan decides that maintaining his magic to continuously conceal his body is an incredibly wise decision, especially since deadly danger can be lurking absolutely anywhere in this mysterious and unpredictable underground place. Drawing upon his power to inspect the surrounding corridor, Turan spots glowing blue flames indicating a high concentration of mana. This raw mana radiating through the darkness belongs not to any human, but to a monster. Having confirmed the exact location of the beasts and counted how many there are, he cautiously creeps closer to get a direct look at the threat. Moving closer and closer to where the energy concentrates, Turan watches as the shape of the beast finally begins to emerge more clearly, revealing a massive, muscular, human-shaped monster standing completely still at the far end of the stone corridor. Staring directly at the towering creature, Turan finds that its distorted features and physical form appear thoroughly unpleasant and hostile. But suddenly, the monster shifts its ominous gaze and spots his location. Initially, Turan simply stands his ground without running because his magic is still actively concealing his body, leaving him questioning if the beast actually managed to see through his stealth. But in an instant, the aggressive beast charges directly toward him with terrifying breakneck speed. Leaping backward in a flash to dodge the incoming attack, Turan quickly realizes the creature's movement speed is incredibly fast. Raising his hand high, he unleashes a massive, roaring pillar of fire that successfully stops the monster's advance and pushes it back a little. Even as the creature burns in the intense flames, it continues to relentlessly advance alongside several other beasts of its kind. With these aggressive monsters refusing to back down, Turan quickly retreats further back into the corridor, questioning how the monster detected him and finding it highly impressive that the creature can see through the stealth magic of the Zahar family. Looking back at them once again, Turan notices that the creatures are not actively pursuing his movements. Instead, they are searching blindly in every single direction, revealing that the beast's detection range is actually quite narrow, meaning that as long as he maintains a safe distance from them, he will remain completely unharmed. Reaching deep into his pouch, Turan pulls out a carefully processed stone. Readying his sling, he declares that the first strike belongs to him as he begins spinning the weapon with rapid speed. Infusing the stone with a surge of his magic, he launches the high-speed projectile straight forward. The magically charged stone pierces straight through the monster's tough skull with absolute devastating force. The massive creature instantly collapses onto the stone floor, completely dead, while the other monsters simply crawl right past the corpse, showing absolutely no reaction or concern even when one of their own kind is brutally killed. Once the other monsters finally depart, Turan carefully and slowly approaches the dead beast, extending his hand to absorb its residual mana. But as the absorption process begins, a highly strange sensation occurs. Instead of drawing power from the corpse, he realizes this beast is likely a purely magical creation. He obtains a far too small amount of mana from the beast, especially considering that a creature with physical abilities of that high caliber should have contained a much greater amount of mana. When Turan touches his holy relic compass, even this highly sensitive item fails to show any reaction whatsoever to the creature's internal mana. Staring down at the motionless body, Turan finds its true identity remains a complete mystery, while the ominous voice echoes once again to repeat that he is not the Night Hunter. Kneeling on the cold floor, Turan calls the entire situation utterly tiresome, as he searches diligently for any clue he can find. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echo nearby, forcing him to quickly run and hide deep within the shadows. Zahar and his group of subordinates walk down the dark corridor. Reaching the exact same location where Turan stood just moments ago, Purga abruptly orders his subordinates to halt. Looking up, they spot the dead body of the very same type of monster they have been fighting for days, yet this one was clearly not killed by their hands. One of the men asks what is going on, questioning if they have passed through this specific area before, to which another subordinate replies that he has no idea, complaining that their sense of direction went to hell a while ago. Purga abruptly silences them, confidently announcing that a rat must be hiding in here because he is absolutely certain they have not passed through this specific area before. The men look around nervously, hoping that it could be a rescue party, but Purga quickly reasons that if it were indeed a rescue party, they would have noticed their presence by now, adding that making a commotion in a dangerous place like this would easily stand out. Purga immediately orders a man named Galvan to set traps nearby to catch the rat, and Galvan quickly agrees to the command. Purga then orders a woman named Imelda to keep the surroundings lit, prompting her to light up the room with her magic, as a subordinate asks if they should catch the rat first, only for Purga to order them to leave it for now, assuming it is just some lucky knight who survived an earlier encounter. Smirking maliciously, he declares that they will let the rat run around for a little while so they can eventually use him as bait for the monsters. But as they actively plan their next moves, Turan listens to their entire plan while remaining perfectly silent and hidden within the shadows. 3 days pass, and Turan finds himself in the bizarre situation of coexisting within the pitch-black labyrinth right alongside Purga's group. Fortunately, the traps laid by the barrier-bearer bloodline are clearly visible directly to his eyes because of the holy relic, posing absolutely no obstacle to his movement at all. In fact, thanks to the intense darkness of the labyrinth, Purga's men often suffer the humiliation of triggering their own traps, leading to a loud scream as a sudden explosion engulfs one of them. While Purga's group remains completely unable to gauge their direction in the pitch-black darkness, Turan explores the labyrinth, finding a quiet area where monster activity is incredibly sparse, allowing him to kneel and use his mana to draw a glowing blue cross mark on the floor, utilizing the power of the holy relic to establish several safe locations as bases to slowly expand his overall search range. Occasionally, certain narrow paths swarm with an overwhelming number of strange creatures, making it absolutely impossible for Turan to push through without fighting them one by one. During these difficult moments, Turan borrows the strength of Purga's group by secretly luring the hostile hordes toward the Zahar nobles, forcing Purga's men to struggle desperately to fight off the massive wave of beasts, while one man loudly curses that the monsters are attacking again, asking why it feels like they strike more often, as another yells that their bright lights are responsible and orders the team to block them for now. Purga furiously slices through the incoming beasts with his massive circular blade, while Turan quietly watches the battle from afar, sacrificing the opportunity to absorb the monster's mana, without any regret because these weak creatures yield such a tiny amount of energy that they are hardly worth his time or effort. After some time, Purga's group manages to defeat the monsters Turan lured toward them, but many of the soldiers are now lying on the ground, some severely injured and others completely dead. While tending to a dying comrade, a subordinate mentions that they are starting to build up quite a heavy stockpile of bodies because the people on the outside keep sending captives down their way, assuming that their allies above are doing this under the belief that the knights are still alive. Another man complains that if he had known this would happen, he would have kept those captives alive instead of letting them die, pointing out how uncomfortable it is to have no one to wait on them, prompting another subordinate with a smudged face to look over and joke that he does not even mean what he says. Observing them from his hiding spot, Turan finds their behavior and words to be utterly despicable. The strange, mysterious voice that only Turan and Purga can hear echoes once again, but this time it only makes a strange noise without saying anything coherent. Prompting Purga to notice this sound, alert his group of another approaching wave of monsters, and order his men to dim the lights immediately. Smirking from his hiding spot, Turan finds this situation absolutely perfect, allowing those men to make noise and continue acting as bait while he goes to check out the deeper parts of the labyrinth. Turan rapidly sprints down a long, dark hall until he eventually reaches a complete dead end. Stopping in his tracks, he stares up at a colossal, intricately carved metallic door. This door in an underground place like this is incredibly massive, with a grand, imposing structure that looks as though it were built specifically for giant beings, raising the exciting question of whether this could finally be his exit. Suddenly, the center of the massive metallic door shifts and mechanically opens, revealing a giant glowing blue eyeball that stares directly down at him, as the same strange voice manifests again, seemingly coming from this bizarre door with the eye. It observes Turan intently, declaring that he is not the night hunter nor is he the pursuer and the conditions are not met. But just as the giant blue eye takes yet another look at Turan, it notices the glowing holy relic compass hanging on his hip. The voice quickly identifies the relic as a wave rider and a mimic, also mentioning that the required conditions are now met. Turan and the mysterious mechanical eye look at each other as the voice asks him if he will enter. Staring intently at the glowing blue eyeball embedded in its center, Turan stands silently before the colossal, intricately carved metallic door as they continue to lock eyes for a long time, until the ancient structure suddenly asks if he wishes to enter. Mentally reflecting on those mysterious words, Wave Rider and Mimic, Turan wonders if they could be the names of legendary bloodlines that have not yet manifested within him. Considering that if two such bloodlines are somehow combined, it will mean he possesses the blood of a great, prestigious noble house. Staring directly down at him with its massive gaze, the giant door asks once again if he will enter. But just as he prepares to speak, Turan notices that the gaze of the giant eye is not actually fixed on him at all. Instead, he sees that the door is looking directly at the holy relic compass strapped to his hip, which means the door is recognizing the relic's original owner rather than his own bloodline, leading him to conclude that the ancient entity is using those special abilities in conjunction with his bloodline to make its final judgment. Speaking out loud, Turan asks the door what a Wave Rider and a Mimic actually are, commanding the door to tell him more about them, which prompts the massive structure to answer by stating that his information request has been accepted without any issues. The spirit door explains that the Wave Rider's first type grants underwater respiration, physical enhancement, and fluid manipulation, while the Mimic's first type grants flow detection, absorption, and mimesis. Looking at his own hand, Turan reflects that he does not feel like he has gained the ability to breathe underwater or manipulate fluids, leaving him to wonder if the door only uses these traits for identification rather than granting the actual abilities themselves. When Turan asks the giant door what it is, the massive mechanical structure replies that it is the spirit of the door. Thinking to himself that this strange entity is like a librarian, just far more rigid and completely inhuman, Turan asks the spirit what this labyrinth is, demanding to know for what purpose it was made and how one can escape from it. The door reveals that this is the labyrinth of the Night Hunter, explaining that the one who slays the chief while possessing the correct 4 types will become the Night Hunter, adding that if he slays the chief, the escape route will finally open. Shocked by this incredible revelation, Turan slowly repeats the title of the Night Hunter, wondering if this truly means he will be able to become a god. But suddenly, the spirit door glitches violently as its mechanical eye begins to spin around like crazy, causing the door to start repeatedly stating that there has been an error. The system then starts listing that the Hunter, Pursuer, Wave Rider, and Mimic contain 2 types of error, pointing out that the Shadow and Alchemist are completely absent, stating that while 4 types are indeed fulfilled, an error remains because the types do not match the Night Hunter. Watching in deep confusion, Turan wonders what is happening as the spirit door declares that the door cannot be closed, stating that internal personnel are remaining while unauthorized personnel have entered, attempting to inquire with the creator but declaring another error because the creator is completely absent. Suddenly, the giant blue eyeball glows intensely red as deep cracks spiderweb across its metallic surface, announcing that autonomous judgment has been initiated and a deployment order is being issued to the labyrinth chief, while a heavy rumbling echoes loudly from beyond the cracked door. Sensing the immense danger, Turan realizes there is something massive waiting inside. At that exact moment, the spirit door finally opens, revealing only absolute darkness inside with no visible light at all. But as the door swings open more and more, a massive, towering figure slowly emerges from the deep, terrifying shadows. Staring in complete awe, Turan widens his eyes as he beholds the terrifying presence of the creature. A colossal, long-haired, and heavily muscular humanoid monster steps directly into the light. Menacingly glaring down at Turan, the giant monster growls that he is not the Night Hunter and declares that all fakes must die. Without a second thought, Turan immediately starts preparing for an attack, spinning his sling at high speeds while imbuing it with his glowing blue mana. Launching his attack, Turan hits the monster directly on the head with the superfast stone, knowing that this monster will definitely not be defeated by such a simple strike. And without wasting any time, he activates his fire magic and lightning magic all at once to attack the monster, causing a huge explosion of roaring fire and lightning to erupt around them. Yet even after using such powerful magic attacks, he is not even able to injure the monster. Looking down at Turan with an ugly smile, the giant monster mocks him by saying that his attacks merely tickled. Struck by the stark realization that he cannot win against this powerful monster in a direct, one-on-one fight, Turan decides he must find an alternative. Desperate to find another way to defeat this monster, he quickly starts running away to seek any tactical advantage. Seeing him flee, the monster also starts running after him, screaming for him to stay right there. But as they run through the labyrinth area, the massive monster's terrifying screeches and heavy running sounds are so loud that they alert all of the smaller monsters that are dwelling nearby in that area, sending a massive horde of beasts rushing forward to attack him from every single direction. Knowing that if he fights them here he will die, Turan refrains from attacking the horde, choosing instead to weave smoothly through the smaller beasts while dodging their grasping claws. After some time, he finally passes through the dense horde and continues to run to reach a safe distance, making some space as he looks back at the monsters and breathes a sigh of relief at how close that was. But this brief distraction is a mistake, as a stray monster suddenly appears right in front of him and attacks him with its long, razor-sharp claws, forcing Turan to block the sudden strike by manifesting a glowing blue mana shield. The monster's strike is so incredibly powerful that it even manages to breach the strong defenses of his shield. Drawing his weapon in an instant, he cuts off the monster's head in a single fluid swing. While catching his breath, Turan reflects on the fact that this is the Labyrinth of the Night Hunter, a mysterious and ancient place that can literally create gods, yet so many questions remain unanswered about who built it and why. But just as he continues to run, the temporary delay caused by that lesser beast allows the giant chief monster to catch up to him. And though Turan notices this, the monster is already right upon him. Suddenly, the giant monster jumps high toward him, trying to catch him. But Turan barely manages to dodge a massive hand that smashes violently into the ground right behind him. Running through the long halls, Turan glances back at the pursuing chief, knowing with absolute certainty that this nightmare will not end until he finally kills that thing. Sighting something ahead as he runs, Turan begins to formulate a clever plan. He quickly stops, changing his direction, and runs straight toward his objective. Spotting his cousin, Purga Zahar, Turan runs directly toward the group, casually reflecting that they should probably fight together for a bit as a family. While Turan is busy luring the massive monster toward Purga's group, they are still dealing with their own major problems, currently fighting off attacks from waves of smaller monsters. Purga swings his massive circular blade, slicing a smaller monster cleanly in half, and after cutting down all of the beasts near them, he yells out to his men, asking if everyone is still all right. Panting heavily, his subordinates reply that they are fine for now, while one large, strong-looking warrior stands completely exhausted surrounded by the corpses of pale monsters, and another subordinate loudly complains that there is no end to them as he curses the situation. The strong-looking warrior suddenly stops and looks highly confused, mentioning that he hears a very strange sound coming from down the corridor. Purga and his men turn their gazes down the long hall as the giant monster finally approaches them, though the beast is the only one that arrives, meaning Turan has already hidden himself and left the monster to the group, while the creature slowly walks toward them, calling the night hunter the children's enemy and demanding that they kill them all. One of Purga's men asks in pure terror what in the world this terrifying entity is saying, while another man points out that it has been muttering strange things like that on and off for a while now. Suddenly, the giant monster starts running directly toward them. Seeing this, Purga screams at his men, telling them that the creature's words are not what is important right now, demanding that they do not just stand there blankly. But before they can even react, the monster's massive hand reaches toward them, and its fingers with long, claw-like nails tear straight through their bodies, killing them instantly. Purga screams their names in absolute horror. Cursing loudly in his grief, Purga orders his remaining men to strike, charging forward with his massive circular blade while shouting for them to kill the beast now. As the group closes in, one of the men manages to stab the monster with his weapon, but the strike feels like a mere mosquito bite to the giant beast. The giant monster swings its massive fist, slamming directly into that man and sending him flying violently backward. Another subordinate calls the creature a bastard and tries to attack it by unleashing his fire magic, but the monster simply crushes him underfoot like it is absolutely nothing. The monster is so incredibly powerful that getting hit by it even once easily kills most of his men, with its sharp claws acting like deadly swords that slice through them the very instant they make contact. To make matters even worse, the smaller, normal monsters also reach their position and start to attack them relentlessly. Purga watches the bloody massacre in absolute horror, cursing as he realizes that even the small monsters are appearing in waves to overwhelm them, knowing that at this rate, their entire group will be completely wiped out. But suddenly, he notices something unexpected. Turan is fighting a smaller monster in the distance, systematically killing them one by one from behind. Seeing this, Purga thinks to himself that even a rat will fight to survive, deciding to use Turan's distraction to his own advantage so that if Turan draws the attention of the small fry, he will be able to attack the chief. The strong subordinate from before, who heard the monster first, charges forward with his weapon while roaring loudly. He swings his heavy blade and violently slashes the back of the giant monster's leg. Dark blood sprays across the stone floor as the giant monster momentarily loses its balance. The subordinate laughs maniacally, proudly declaring that he did it and successfully smashed the bastard's leg. But before he can even celebrate further, the giant monster delivers a devastating kick that sends him flying backward, blood spraying from his battered body as he crashes violently against the heavy stone pillars. Looking around at the broken bodies of his loyal men, Purga reflects that it is all over and that every single one of his supporters is now dead, realizing that even if he somehow manages to survive this terrible ordeal, his political career is completely finished. All because of this single wretched monster, everything that they have built so far is completely destroyed. Grinding his teeth in pure rage, he desperately throws his heavy circular blade directly at the monster like a boomerang. But it is of no use, and though the monster tries to grab him, he swiftly dodges the massive hand. While suspended in the air, he grips his blades tightly and starts to attack relentlessly while running directly along the monster's arm. This time, Purga manages to injure the monster multiple times, but these attacks are still not powerful enough to bring down such a beast. Purga leaps high into the air, gathering all of his remaining mana into his blade for his final attack, throwing his blade toward the chief monster with all his force while roaring for the beast to die. The blade hits the monster with a massive impact, illuminating the entire area with a brilliant blue light. The monster tries to block that attack, but it is so powerful that it manages to cut off one of its arms and heavily injure it, leaving Purga to pant heavily while declaring that he did it, and that his final attack was a solid hit that even a monster like this cannot defend against. But suddenly, the monster opens its eyes and glares directly at him. Purga is completely shocked, unable to believe that the creature is still perfectly fine even after enduring such a devastating attack. The monster does not even give him a chance to run, quickly piercing Purga's body with its long, razor-sharp nails. Staring blankly, Purga wonders what in the world is happening and questions the meaning of his defeat, reflecting on his failure and wondering where his path went wrong. But the monster does not have any interest in him, screaming out as it demands to know where the fake night hunter is, telling him to reveal himself. Hearing this, Purga is deeply confused as he observes the monster's actions and reflects on why it is speaking those words while looking in the wrong direction, noting that it has already killed almost everyone and wondering why it is still not satisfied. But as Purga looks in the exact direction the monster is staring, he notices Turan, and he finally understands what is happening, realizing that the rat he was using as bait has actually turned the tables on him. While still concealing his body, Turan suddenly lunges forward for a surprise attack, but the monster still manages to notice him, screaming out as it declares that it has found him and labeling him the fake night hunter, just as Turan delivers his attack. Concealing his body with magic as he closes the gap to attack the giant monster, Turan grips his heavy axe-type weapon. He hopes to land a series of powerful surprise attacks to defeat the creature in one go, taking advantage of the injuries Purga's relentless assault already inflicted. Yet his plan fails to go as smoothly as he hopes. The giant monster somehow detects his presence as he draws closer, glaring down at him with eyes filled with pure hatred while screaming that the false night hunter has finally revealed himself. Even though his location is now completely exposed, Turan swings with immense force, delivering a powerful strike directly to the monster's neck to injure the colossal beast even further. Dark blood sprays everywhere across the cold stone floor as he presses his sharp weapon deeper and deeper into the monster's flesh. But even this heavy strike is not powerful enough to kill it. Shouting furiously, the monster mocks Turan, claiming the false night hunter is weak and asking if he truly believes such pathetic attacks can kill him. Suddenly, panic strikes Turan as he realizes a single blow will not defeat this beast. Gripped by this realization, he desperately pulls back his weapon to prepare another strike. Roaring in absolute fury, the chief swings his massive arm and strikes Turan directly. Fortunately, Turan's passive defensive barrier activates just in time to absorb the brunt of the impact. Yet the impact is so incredibly powerful that it sends him flying backward through the air until he crashes into the distant stone wall with a loud, echoing impact. As the thick dust slowly settles, Turan braces himself against the wall with his weapon and groans in pain. Fortunately, his magical defensive artifact withstood most of the devastating impact, leaving him without any severe injuries. Realizing he lacks sufficient firepower to put this massive beast down for good, Turan looks down at the golden compass relic glowing green in his bandaged hand. Though consuming its power is highly unpleasant, he knows he has absolutely no choice but to try. Roaring at the top of its lungs for the imposter to die, the labyrinth chief charges forward with heavy, earth-shaking footsteps that rattle the stone chamber. Turan watches the charging monster, his eyes glowing with a brilliant blue light as he analyzes its movements. The beast swings its massive hand, trying to rip him apart with its razor-sharp nails. But Turan quickly anticipates the trajectory and dodges, instantly preparing a swift counterattack. He charges his heavy weapon with a massive amount of mana. As his body begins to glow with an intense purple energy, his power feels entirely different this time. Leaping high into the air, he swings his axe to deliver a powerful, shattering blow directly to the monster's intact hand, wounding the roaring beast even deeper. The chief screeches in absolute agony. Crying out in pain, it weeps for its fallen children, accuses Turan of killing them, and labels him a true monster. With one hand completely severed and the other heavily injured, the beast desperately slams its head into the stone ground where Turan is standing. But Turan jumps gracefully into the air, easily dodging the reckless attack. Without giving the giant monster any time to recover or raise its head back up, Turan gathers a massive surge of mana into his weapon once more, and delivers another devastating, downward purple slash directly to the monster's exposed neck. After Turan lands continuous, precise attacks on the exact same spot, a massive gaping wound opens on the chief's neck, leaving the beast too severely injured to stand. But Turan is not finished yet. Raising his weapon high above his head and gathering every single ounce of his remaining mana into the blade, before swinging his weapon down one last time with a heavy slash that finally cuts off the giant monster's head. The severed head of the massive beast slides across the stone floor as Turan lets out a long, deeply exhausted sigh of relief. He collapses wearily onto the ground, having finally managed to defeat the terrifying monster. Reflecting on the battle as he slowly catches his breath, Turan realizes that without the powerful bloodline ability he previously absorbed from Dolph Marin, this fight would have been much harder. He now fully understands how the artifact works. While still unsure about the Wave Rider power, he knows the mimic ability is active, allowing him to temporarily use stored bloodlines, even if ingesting the glowing liquid remains unpleasant. The absorbed power already fades slowly from his body, likely to disappear entirely in about 30 minutes. Standing up, Turan looks over at the battered and bloody body of Purga Zahar lying nearby on the cold stone. Walking over to observe the dying noble, he notices a punctured lung and a deep wound near the heart. He realizes there is no surviving such fatal injuries as Purga Zahar coughs violently, weakly begging for his life. Looking down with a serious expression, Turan says he is sorry, explaining that saving him is far beyond his current capabilities. Purga weakly whispers for help one last time. Slowly, his eyes cloud over as he takes his final breath and passes away. Staring down at Purga's lifeless body, Turan stands in silence for a few long moments. Looking around the massive hall, he notices the bodies of numerous nobles, knights, and monsters scattered everywhere from the fierce battle. Wasting no time, Turan begins absorbing the massive pools of mana from the fallen. He reflects that while Purga was a cruel man who sacrificed subordinates without hesitation, he was also a true warrior who fought to the bitter end without abandoning his men when the situation turned dire. Silently repeating his full name, Purga Zahar, Turan promises to remember him in the future. Standing there, he continues to absorb the surrounding mana. He realizes he has never seen such an immense, endless pool of energy, wondering how much more he can take in before finally reaching his limit. After absorbing all of the mana in the area, he takes a close look at the holy relic compass. Instead of only green, it now contains a mixture of colored liquids, having drawn the diverse mana of many noble families. Though highly curious to test multiple bloodlines at once, he decides to save the experiment for later, knowing he must first escape this dangerous place. Realizing he is now at least twice as strong as when he first entered the labyrinth, Turan reflects that the massive surge of energy has granted him a level of power that would take an ordinary noble 100 years to accumulate. Looking down at the swords and other magic tools scattered on the ground, Turan decides to abandon them to avoid pursuit by the powerful Zahar family, knowing he must also erase all traces of his presence. Running swiftly through the dark corridors, he casts tracking magic to locate any lingering traces of his presence. The tracking spell instantly highlights his scattered blood along the floor, allowing him to quickly dissolve every single drop of it into thin air. Since he has already killed the powerful labyrinth sovereign, Turan once again arrives back at the massive eyeball door, which is now heavily cracked and tightly closed. Considering his next move, he gently places his hand upon the cracked surface, prompting the massive door to slide open with ease as he steps inside the chamber. He stands in a grand, ancient room filled with massive knight statues and a majestic throne. In the center of the floor, a dark, violent whirlpool spins, clearly serving as the exit since it looks identical to the vortex he used to enter. Turan spots an old book resting quietly on a small table near the throne. Picking it up, he reads that the text details a secret experiment to replicate the legendary Night Hunter's ascension. The discovery leads him to wonder if this refers to some kind of class change. According to the ancient pages, the Night Hunter is a combination of the Hunter, Stalker, Shadow, and Alchemist bloodlines, with the successful clearance of the Labyrinth of Evil acting as the absolute condition for ascension. These details only reveal themselves when a compatible target is detected, mentioning a mechanism designed to lure such individuals inside. He confirms that the Night Hunter is indeed a combined form of the Hunter, Stalker, Shadow, and Alchemist, requiring the clearance of this very labyrinth to ascend. Understanding that this place possesses a built-in function to lure compatible targets, he now knows exactly why he felt such an irresistible urge to enter the maze. Flipping the page, Turan finds a detailed drawing of a monster labeled Rotten Jaw, noting that the materials used to create it are giant blood and flesh, specifically utilizing the body of a giant queen with mana as its power source and hibernation, solving its longevity issues. The book also notes that the method to replicate acidic blood and fire breath is absent, making the creation far inferior to the original dungeon's monsters. Shocked to learn that those creatures were constructed from the flesh of giants, Turan reads further about a failed experiment to replicate the Earth Mother Goddess Ascension. Closing the book, Turan reflects that almost everything written inside is incomprehensible, but concludes that at least one thing is absolutely certain. The creator's true goal was to produce a knight hunter, and the gate mistook him for a candidate possessing all four bloodlines because of the holy relic compass, unaware that the shadow and alchemist bloodlines went extinct long ago when the ruthless Zahars wiped them out. Remembering that the arsonist claimed a god revealed a method to artificially obtain a bloodline, he wonders if permanent acquisition is truly possible, but realizing he will not find answers by standing here, he runs toward the vortex to escape before it disappears and leaps directly into the swirling portal. Emerging outside in the hot, sandy desert, Turan looks back at the massive pyramid structure. Declaring in relief that he finally made it out, he realizes he has landed on the outskirts of Banifal. The picky eagle lands next to him, flapping its wings angrily as it writes in the sand to ask if he is 1 or 2 days late. Smiling, Turan apologizes and asks if the bird was scared. Slinging his bag onto his back, Turan grabs the eagle's leg firmly, allowing the majestic bird to spread its wings and carry him high into the sky. From the air, Turan looks out over the vast desert. He reflects that after killing Purga, a candidate for the next Zahar leadership, along with over 10 other nobles, the entire desert will fall into absolute panic. He knows they will eventually search for a culprit, and if anyone discovers he possesses the strength to kill Purga, he will instantly become a suspect. Turan decides to leave the Enroll Desert for a few months until things cool down, after which he will resume his search for traces of his mother. The eagle screeches loudly to ask where they should go next, prompting Turan to point toward the distant horizon and declare that they will head over that way first. A freezing, snow-covered mountain range stretches out ahead. Landing on the cold, snowy ground, Turan observes that this is the dangerous gray zone where Arabian and Zahar once waged their brutal war. Looking down from the path, he sees groups of refugees carrying heavy cargo through the deep snow. The sight makes him wonder what is happening, as the refugees look as though they are fleeing from something terrible. Continuing his long trek, Turan finally reaches the gray city of Kalamaf, a massive fortress built high upon a towering, snow-covered cliff. As Turan approaches the massive city gates, 3 guards dressed in heavy winter cloaks watch him closely. One of the guards asks in surprise if he is a traveler, staring in shock at Turan and the massive eagle sleeping on his bag. Upon closer inspection, the guard asks what kind of bird it is and why Turan wears such light clothing in the freezing snow. The guards quickly realize these items must be magic artifacts and that the giant bird is a monster. Nervously bowing to welcome him, the guards ask if Turan belongs to a great noble family. Realizing they have identified him as a powerful mage, Turan silently decides to buy much simpler clothes next time. Explaining that he is just a passing traveler, Turan asks if he can request lodging for the night from the city's lord. The guard breaks into a sweat and explains that Kalamaf no longer has a ruler. Turan asks what he means by that. The guard reveals that the city lord died recently during a devastating attack by dark elves from the west, leaving the city without a single noble or knight to rule. This development certainly complicates his plans. Dropping to his knees, the guard bows deeply into the cold snow. He pleads desperately with Turan, begging the noble lord to become the new ruler of their city. Confused by this sudden request, Turan stands speechless in the falling snow, asking, "What?" As Turan reaches the ruined, war-torn gray city of Kalamaf, the desperate citizens instantly shock him by collapsing onto the frozen ground and falling to their knees, begging him with tearful eyes to become their new lord and savior. Turan scratches his head in deep conflict, struggling with the heavy request placed directly before him and thinking to himself that he cannot permanently tie himself down to a ruined place like this. Yet at the exact same time, their visible misery makes it impossible to ignore their desperate condition after witnessing their raw suffering firsthand. Looking down at the kneeling guard, Turan says he will consider the idea but asks him to explain exactly what happened first. Wanting to hear the full story from the very beginning, he watches the guard's eyes light up with sudden hope as the man gestures for him to please step inside. After some time, Turan sits with the guard in a quiet, secluded room, asking how the lord of this fortress came to leave his city unprotected and die. The guard explains that the tragedy began 3 weeks earlier when several monster hunters were discovered slaughtered on the road leading west of the city, with even their heavy steel weapons sliced clean in half by a single, powerful blow, proving that the enemy they faced was far beyond any ordinary beast. The guard continues, explaining that the city immediately sent 2 skilled knights to investigate. When 3 days passed without their return, the lord dispatched much stronger forces, including his brother, his beloved son, and 10 elite knights, yet none of them ever returned. As the grim story progresses, Turan learns that the desperate city lord eventually set out to investigate the threat himself. In the end, only a single broken knight managed to stumble back, on the absolute verge of death, uttering only a single chilling phrase before taking his final breath to identify the mysterious enemy as the spirit of death. Turan looks intently at him, asking what exactly he means by the spirit of death. The guard explains that scholars identify spirit controllers as the dreaded Dark Elves, causing fear to spread like wildfire as everyone believed the Dark Elves would soon arrive to devour them all, forcing the terrified residents to flee and leave the fortress practically abandoned. Turan then asks if any neighboring cities came to their aid, prompting the guard to reveal that every single request for reinforcements was cold-heartedly turned away. Terrified of being attacked themselves, the neighboring lords refuse to spare any troops. Hearing this, Turan thinks to himself that he cannot truly blame those lords, reflecting that their refusal is actually a logical and self-preserving decision. After fully digesting the entire situation, Turan stands up from his seat and admits that handling the complex affairs of this ruined city is far too big of a task for him to manage as well. At that moment, the guard lowers himself to the cold floor and desperately bows before Turan, pleading for mercy while comparing his people to weak sheep in a deep valley who desperately need a protector. He claims that the nobles are the shepherds, the knights are the sheepdogs, and the commoners are merely the sheep. And hearing these familiar words leaves Turan visibly shocked, instantly recalling how his mother used to say the exact same thing. Turan asks in surprise if that specific comparison is common around these parts. The guard explains that yes, everyone in the gray zone talks in this exact manner, believing the nobles are the shepherds, the knights are the sheepdogs, and the commoners are the sheep, where the sheep follow the dogs, while the dogs obey the shepherd and protect the entire flock from predators. As Turan listens carefully, he begins connecting these words directly to his own past, realizing his mother must have once lived or stayed in this region, since he has never heard such an expression in Hisaril or the desert. Wanting to confirm his strong suspicions, Turan reaches into his bag and shows the man a detailed portrait of his mother, explaining that her name is Bige and that around 20 years ago, she must have been between 18 and her early 20s. The guard carefully examines the hand-drawn portrait but admits with a sigh that he does not remember her, offering his sincere apologies. Even so, he offers to distribute copies of the portrait throughout the entire city to see if anyone recognizes her. In that exact moment, Turan notices the incredibly desperate, pleading look in the guard's eyes. Recognizing that desperate look, Turan realizes that if he truly wants to find his mother, his first priority must be preventing the city from being completely destroyed. Driven by this sudden realization, Turan makes his decision absolutely clear, explaining that while he cannot officially become the lord of this city, he can at least act as its protector. Hearing this, the guard reacts with intense hope, asking what he means by a protector, which leads Turan to clarify that he will stay and protect the city until the threat from the west is gone, or until someone worthy of ruling it finally appears. Soon after, the guard spreads the news across the town square that Turan has arrived as their savior. He announces that a noble descendant of the gods is now with them, ensuring they no longer need to fear and that their city will be saved. However, many of the remaining residents still look highly uncertain, whispering among themselves. While some admit Turan looks handsome like the gods of Freya, others strongly doubt that bloodthirsty monsters will flee simply because a person has a handsome face. Hearing those skeptical comments, one of the city leaders angrily silences them, strictly forbidding anyone from speaking of their new protector in such a disrespectful way. Turan easily notices the quiet whispering. He reflects that their reaction is not one of mockery, but rather deep-seated fear, realizing they simply do not want to get their hopes up only to be cruelly disappointed once again. This realization reminds Turan of what he once dismissed as a pointless display of power in his youth. Now he finally understands how incredibly important it truly was, knowing that for sheep to feel at ease, they must see with their own eyes exactly how strong their shepherd is. Deciding to perform a demonstration of his power, Turan steps forward and raises his hand toward the sky, unleashing an overwhelming burst of fire mana that erupts from his palm to shock the gathered citizens. Knowing that since there are no mages in this city, putting on a grand show will be more than enough to reassure the people, he decides to first compress the blazing fire to its absolute limit, then drastically lower its temperature. In exchange for the heat, he focuses his mana entirely on expanding the physical range of the spell as much as possible. Moments later, Turan launches the compressed mass of fire straight into the thick, cloudy sky. This vibrant mass of fire travels high into the atmosphere, ensuring that no one down in the city gets injured. Suddenly, a massive, thunderous explosion shakes the very heavens, leaving the entire sky completely covered in a blanket of bright, roaring flames. The citizens stare upward at the burning heavens in complete breathless shock, before their deep-seated fear instantly transforms into overwhelming joy and relief. People begin celebrating and shedding tears of pure joy as they watch the burning sky, fully believing that they are finally safe and that their long-awaited savior has arrived to protect them from the darkness. After witnessing the hopeless citizens regain their faith, Turan smiles quietly to himself, feeling that his display of power has been more than enough to secure their trust. But in an instant, he is reminded that there is still a massive mountain of other problems to deal with. Turan attends a meeting with the remaining city officials to discuss their immediate survival. The gathering is chaotic as the men constantly argue among themselves, with some insisting that firewood is the highest priority, while others argue that firewood means nothing without food. As the bitter arguments continue endlessly, Turan realizes that if he does not interrupt them now, the meeting will go on until tomorrow morning. He speaks up over the noise, calmly announcing that he will handle the critical food shortage himself. When the confused officials question exactly how he plans to achieve such a feat, Turan explains that he will simply herd the region's wild animals directly to the city gates, feeding the starving people with rich meat soup before salting the leftovers to last through the harsh winter. Several officials are shocked by this absurd idea, questioning if he is seriously going to use a divine ability for such a mundane task. In response, Turan calmly explains that even the proud northern nobles strike their fields with lightning after a harvest to make the soil fertile, pointing out that what he is doing is really no different. Later that night, Turan grabs onto the legs of the picky eagle and soars through the dark, freezing skis high above the snowy mountains. From above, he utilizes his expert tamer and magic abilities to locate and dominate the wild animals roaming the region, directing them toward the city and ordering them to stand completely still once they reach the walls. Under Turan's absolute command, a massive, unnatural herd of mountain goats, rabbits, and leopards slowly begins moving exactly where he directs them. As he controls the movement of the herd, Turan casually reflects that this is just a bit more work than herding a basic flock, and notes that he is already quite used to it. Eventually, the animals arrive directly in front of the high city walls, leaving the astonished citizens completely stunned by the unbelievable sight. One resident remarks that he cannot believe his eyes, while another wonders why the former lords never did this, only to be reminded that their new protector is a much more powerful mage. Turan orders them to begin, and the citizens immediately get to work, distributing the fresh meat and hanging the valuable hides to dry. After solving the food crisis, Turan stands before a grand mansion, ordering the building to be opened up so those who lost their homes can stay inside. The guards are surprised by his generous decision, asking where their lord himself will stay if they open up the grand estate. Turan calmly replies that the simple town hall quarters are more than enough since there is a bed there. As time passes, the citizens become increasingly grateful. A mother holding her child sheds tears of gratitude, reflecting that the shepherd took pity on his sheep and gave up his own comfort to feed them. Turan watches the bustling city from a window and thinks to himself that he does not care for that kind of idolatry, reflecting that the sooner the city returns to normal, the faster he will find clues about his mother's whereabouts. Meanwhile, news about Turan rapidly spreads across the neighboring territories. At Bijan Castle, the ruling nobles begin to discuss the mysterious protector of Kalamaf, noting that he presents himself strictly as its protector rather than its lord. Hearing that the youth is only 20, the Lord of Bijan remarks that he is far too young. At Balan Castle, another lord is surprised by his age, but his advisor points out that Turan covered the entire sky in flames, proving the youth is extremely powerful. Hearing this, the Lord of Balan reflects that if the boy possesses such power, he is either a lucky wanderer or a talent nurtured by a great house. At Heron Castle, suspicion toward Turan grows among the ruling nobles, as the Lord of Heron points out that the youth appeared alongside Arabian's army. He mutters that even the name Turan Zahar fits perfectly, wondering if the youth is a prodigy sent by the great Zahar family. Refusing to contact the Zahars directly for fear of disrespecting his superiors, the Lord decides it is best to pretend to accept the situation for now. Meanwhile, standing by a window in Kalamaf, Turan scratches his neck, thinking that his ears must be burning. He is completely unaware that the rulers of the Grey Zone have already accepted his role as protector. Turan sits at his desk, staring deeply at the portrait of his mother. He reflects that there are 8 cities and over 100 villages in this region, wondering what the chances are of finding his mother in a place of this size. Suddenly, a guard enters the room, and Turan looks up to ask if more information has come in. The guard hands him a letter and apologizes for the lack of findings over the past week, but declares that this time is different. He explains that a wanderer named Igon has arrived, with the guard revealing that Igon claims that about 18 years ago, a woman identical to the portrait spent the night at the inn he used to run. Turan reads the report and realizes that the timeline of 18 or 19 years ago matches his own birth perfectly. Soon after, the guard brings the wanderer Igon before Turan, who immediately falls to his knees and weeps in gratitude, admitting he would have died in the streets without the protector's aid. Turan calmly expresses his relief, commanding him to share everything he remembers about the woman in the portrait in absolute detail. Sitting up, the old innkeeper Igon begins his tale, explaining that this happened long before he lost everything, back when he was still running his business. At the time, Kalamaf was plunged into utter chaos by the war between Arabian and Zahar, leaving everyone in constant fear as no one knew which army would suddenly invade. He recalls that during this unstable period, a young woman showed up at his inn to spend the night, estimating her age around 20 and nodding that she was already showing a small, pregnant belly. Aigon explains that a woman traveling alone during those chaotic times was already strange enough, but she also had a beautiful, well-groomed horse, which is why he never forgot her. Adding that on top of that, she seemed incredibly nervous, as if she were running away from someone, recalling how he wondered what kind of bastard would abandon a woman that beautiful, especially when she was so heavily pregnant. Turan looks closely at him, asking why exactly he thought she had been abandoned. Aigon answers that during her meal she caressed her swollen belly and muttered to herself, begging her unborn son not to grow up to be like his father. Hearing those words, Turan widens his eyes in complete shock, fully realizing that he has finally found his mother.